Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.
Page 26. They will definitely write letters to their mothers, and then hang countless banners in every corner of the school that say, "Congratulations to model student Percy for finding a girlfriend." Or worse. Sure, but I suggest you find somewhere else, Cyrus said. Hiding in the girls' restroom? You're really something. Don't you know Ron comes here all the time? If he knows, then almost the whole school will know. Upon hearing this, Percy's expression darkened further. Thank you, Ginny. Well then, we'll be going now. The two men ran away as if they were fleeing. Cyrus could also hear Percy complaining to Penelope. I told you it wasn't safe to choose this place, and we were discovered the first time we came. Then find one yourself. Penelope's voice sounded a little annoyed. I just came over and saw Percy and the Ravenclaw prefects. Did you not get caught? Ron rushed into the bathroom and immediately looked at Cyrus nervously. You've been discovered, but what's so strange about me being in the women's restroom? Cyrus retorted. As long as the polyjuice potion is alright, it's fine. Hermione pushed open the last stall in the restroom. The potion in the cauldron was almost fully formed. Now all we need to do is add a tiny bit of Slytherin student hair, preferably Goyle and Crabbe's. She turned to look at Harry and Ron. That's really good, but what about you guys? Harry asked. I already have one, Hermione said happily, pulling a small bottle from her pocket and showing them a strand of hair inside. Remember when Millicent wrestled with me at the dueling club? She left this on my clothes when she was choking me. She went home for Christmas. I just have to tell the Slytherins I'm back. I have some too. Cyrus also took out a few strands of hair. Alright. Ron and Harry had no choice but to get some hair from Goyle and Crabbe. Oh, right, Ginny, I'm going to steal a few clothes from the laundry room. You keep stirring, Hermione said and rushed out. Cyrus had no choice but to continue stirring the cauldron. Now, black smoke was billowing from the cauldron, making it impossible to see anything in the entire cubicle. Luckily it wasn't smoking when Percy came over, or it would have been discovered. A short while later, Hermione returned with several cups and 4 sets of clothes, followed closely by Harry and Ron. Hermione poured the bubbling potion from the cauldron into a cup, then added Millicent's hair. The potion sizzled like boiling water, frothing vigorously. A second later, it turned an unsightly yellow. Off essence of Millicent Bosd, Ron said, glancing at it with disgust. I bet it's going to taste awful. Alright, add yours, Hermione said. Harry tossed Goyle's hair into the middle cup, and Ron put Crabbe's hair into the last cup. Both cups hissed and bubbled. Goyle's turned a tank-like tan, and Crabbe's turned a dark, almost blackish brown. Cyrus also put the small tuft of white hair in his hand into the potion. Instantly, the potion turned into a color that was between black and white, but not gray. It looks awkward like this. Cyrus almost considered giving up on drinking the compound potion for a moment. He should have taken a risk and used body-changing techniques. Wait a minute, Harry said. We'd better not all drink here. Once we become Crabbe and Goyle, there won't be enough room. And Millicent isn't exactly a small man either. That makes sense, Ron said, opening the door. Let's each take a private room. Cyrus chose a slightly off-center cubicle. He originally intended to simply pour out the potion, but to achieve a perfect transformation, one must have a considerable understanding of the details of the object being transformed. The other person's height, weight, body proportions, facial features, etc. But he didn't have such a deep impression of Malfoy. That's right, Cyrus planned to become Malfoy. He had decided this beforehand, and on the Thursday when he stole the potion, he casually pulled a handful of Malfoy's hair. So he raised his head and drank the compound medicine. Surprisingly, it wasn't exactly unpleasant to drink, but it had a very awkward taste, like sweet and bitter at the same time, a little sour and seemingly a little spicy. But anyway, he had already drunk the potion. The compound medication began to take effect. He felt something alive burrowing under his skin, surging and throbbing. It was like a snake crawling beneath his skin, tearing at the junction of his skin and flesh, devouring his flesh. But this pain was fleeting. The next moment, he saw his platinum blonde bangs through his eyes. Thank you to reader 1338459675374563328 for the 10,000 Kidian coins reward, and 2 for the 100 points reward. Thank you, bosses. I went for an interview today. Chapter 41. The diary is lost. Before long, he heard Harry and Ron, the two unfortunate brothers, talking outside. Then, they each knocked on the door of the cubicle where Cyrus and Hermione were. Hurry up, we have to go. A shrill voice answered him, two really don't want to come out. You can go by yourselves. Hermione, we know Millicent is ugly, no one would know it's you. No really no I don't think I can come. You two hurry up and get going, you're wasting time. Harry looked at Ron with a puzzled expression. This made him look even more like Goyle. Well, at least we still have Ginny Malfoy. Ron's words were still stuck in his throat when he saw a figure that nearly scared him to death. What is Draco Malfoy doing here? Has the plan been exposed? However, Harry soon realized that the Malfoy in front of him was wearing Gryffindor's school uniform. Are you Ginny? Cyrus nodded. Ron finally realized what was happening. He looked at Ginny with a bewildered expression, unable to believe that Ginny, who had been so reliable since the start of the semester, had also messed up. But how could you question Malfoy while wearing Malfoy's face? You're right, so I can't go. Cyrus feigned helplessness with a Malfoy-like face, which made Harry want to punch him. Sorry, Ginny, you look really annoying. Thanks, but you look stupid too. Time is running out. Hermione's potion won't last long, so you need to hurry. Cyrus rolled his eyes and said immediately. After seeing Harry off, Cyrus said, Hermione, you wait here for me. I think I can use Malfoy's disguise to go elsewhere and gather some information. Okay, go ahead. Hermione couldn't wait for him to leave. Cyrus didn't bother changing his clothes. With a flick of his wand, his robes turned green, and he strode out, heading straight for the Owl's shed without hesitation. I solemnly swear that I will not do good deeds. Numerous marks immediately appeared on the blank parchment. Dumbledore is in the headmaster's office, and the other professors are in their respective offices. There's someone in the Owl House. Malfoy, what's he doing in the Owl House? Very well, he's gone. Cyrus was startled, but he noticed that Malfoy didn't stay there long and left immediately. He immediately cast an illusion spell on himself and headed down the path Malfoy had taken downstairs. As Malfoy walked, he looked down at a letter, probably a gift from Narcissa or Lucius. Usually, these gifts would be delivered directly to his room by the house elves, but perhaps the Malfoy family was in a special situation recently, and Arthur Weasley was trying to deal with them. After reading the letter, he opened a newspaper, and Malfoy's face immediately lit up with joy. Cyrus glanced at it and noticed the report mentioned Ron and Harry driving to school, for which Arthur Weasley was punished. Clearly, Lucius had put some pressure on him as well, so Mr. Weasley wouldn't have the energy to cause him trouble. After passing Malfoy, Cyrus continued upstairs and soon reached the tower. There are very few owls inside the tower. Almost all of them are public owls kept by the school. Cyrus took out the letter he had prepared beforehand, found Draco Malfoy's owl, and released it. The owl did not realize that the person in front of it was not its real owner. Watching the owl spread its wings in the wind and snow, Cyrus couldn't help but smile. Now, it's time to expel Dumbledore from Hogwarts. You found out the secret. Cyrus met Harry and Ron at the bathroom door. The two of them had almost completely turned back into their original forms, and their oversized robes made them look quite comical. Malfoy is not the heir. So, we've wasted our time. Thankfully, it wasn't a complete waste of time, Ron said, panting, turning to close the bathroom door. I know we still don't know who launched these attacks, but I'm going to write to Dad tomorrow and ask him to search under the Malfoys' living room. Ron knocked heavily on Hermione's door. Hermione, come out quickly, we have so much to tell you. Get away. Hermione snapped. What happened? Ron said. You must be back to normal now, Suddenly, the weeping Myrtle peeked out from under the door of her private room. She looked extremely happy, as if she had encountered some great joy. Oh dear, just you wait, she said, it's terrible. They heard the door lock slide open, and Hermione appeared, sobbing. Her face was covered in black hair, her eyes had turned yellow, and two long, pointed ears protruded from her hair. That's a cat hair. She cried out in anguish. Mimirison must have a cat. But this potion isn't for animal transformations. What bad luck, Ron said. But a smirk played on his lips, as if some strange fetish had awakened within him. You'll be laughed at endlessly, Myrtle said cheerfully. Page 27. It's all right, Hermione. Cyrus thought Hermione actually looked quite adorable. A living fury was a rare sight. But seeing Hermione so upset, he offered a suggestion. We'll take you to the hospital. Madame Pomfrey never asks too many questions. It took them a long time to persuade Hermione to leave the bathroom. Moaning Myrtle's loud, gleeful laughter made them quicken their pace. Just wait, everyone will find out you have a tail. Don't worry, there are actually too many precedents like yours. You can be completely cured, as long as you're not handed over to Lockhart, Cyrus said, almost making Ron laugh. After taking Hermione to the school hospital, Cyrus planned to return the body to Ginny first. The intense possession during this period had made Ginny's health a bit poor, and it would be best to let her rest peacefully during the Christmas holidays. Cyrus picked out a few things to tell Ginny so she wouldn't give herself away. So, Malfoy isn't the heir, and our trail has gone cold again. Ginny summarized the progress of Mr. Riddle during this period, and it could be said that it was almost all for nothing. It wasn't all for nothing. At least Ron discovered a flaw in the Malfoy family, and I discovered that your brother Percy was having an affair with a Ravenclaw prefect in the girls' restroom. Okay, don't worry, I believe things will get better, Ginny comforted her. However, the accident still happened. After the Christmas holidays, Cyrus suddenly realized that he could no longer contact Ginny. The person who opened the diary was someone else. Thank you to reader 1338459675374563328 for the 10,000 Kidian coins donation. Chapter 42 The Secret That Was Spoken. Is this the thing my dad was talking about, the one that can help me open the secret room? Draco picked up the diary and examined it from various angles, but found nothing strange about it. Moreover, this diary looks like something that came from the Muggle world. This disgusted Draco Malfoy, who even felt that the two fingers gripping the corner of the book were no longer useful. However, in order to become the successor to Slytherin, Malfoy was determined to endure this filth and stench, even though he didn't even know how to use the diary. Reveal yourselves immediately. The diary remained unchanged. Damn it, Dad told me to be respectful to the owner of this diary. He flipped open the cover, looking disdainfully at the only words on it, Riddle. One word was enough to tell he wasn't a pure-blood wizard. I just hope he's at least mixed race. I can't stand it if he's some other mudblood. He felt nauseous at the thought of Hermione Granger. I'll write something. He laid his diary open on the table, picked up a quill pen that looked very expensive, dipped it in ink, and wrote in the notebook. Show me your secret. Ginny, what secret do you have? The four Weasley brothers surrounded Ginny, while Harry and Hermione blocked her escape routes. After classes ended this morning, someone discovered that Ginny's dorm room had been burglared. The thief was probably looking for something, and ended up ransacking her room. When Ginny came back, she kept searching through the mess, repeating in a daze, "It's gone." They all wanted to know what it was that Ginny and the thief valued so much. Except for twins. They're both very nervous now. What's important to Ginny? Marvelous map. Fred and George exchanged a glance, both with grim expressions. Fred asked with concern, is it really lost? Ginny simply nodded mechanically. What is it? Ron and Percy were getting a little annoyed by their cryptic remarks. But clearly, neither Ginny nor the twins were going to reveal their own secrets. So they could only remain vague. It's our only hope of catching the killer, George sighed. Without it, we might never find the killer. This made Ginny look at the two of them strangely. George and Fred know about Mr. Riddle. Cyrus had never mentioned the Marauder's map to Ginny, and at this point, Ginny assumed the twins were referring to Riddle's diary. In her mind, Mr. Riddle must have possessed some clue, which was why the heir to Slytherin had stolen it. From this perspective, it is quite reasonable to say that the diary represents the hope of catching the murderer. In that case, we should tell the professors. Hermione and Percy both agreed that the professors should catch the thief. But this suggestion was immediately opposed by all three. No. Ginny, Fred, and George immediately shook their heads. If the Marauder's map falls into the hands of professors, will those students who attempt to break the rules have any future? If the diary falls into the hands of the professors, will there be any future for me and Mr. Riddle? Absolutely not. What are you three hiding from me? Percy asked, frowning. He suspected the twins were messing around with Ginny, and that the stolen item might not be anything important at all, but rather a prop they were planning to use for a prank. I advise you not to lead Ginny astray, or I'll tell Mom. No, Ginny's reaction was even stronger than the twins. Her mother, who always doted on her, would make a huge fuss if she found out about this. And then, Mr. Riddle would. We must stop Percy. She remembered Cyrus telling her about Percy's little secret, and immediately threatened. You can't tell anyone, Percy, or I'll reveal your secret. Percy immediately blushed and fell silent. The others exchanged bewildered glances, eager to know what secret had made even the usually stern Percy yield. Percy had no choice but to use his elder brother's authority to drive them all away. Now, Ginny was finally at peace. However, she was still sullen. She hesitated, wondering whether to tell Dumbledore about the diary. Although her mother might destroy it if she found out, it wouldn't be good if it fell into the wrong hands either. Not long after, Ron and his two companions secretly gathered around again. Listen to me, Ginny, what's missing? Harry looked at her seriously. If it's really important, you can tell us, and we can help you. Ron and Hermione nodded vigorously. But Ginny remained hesitant to speak. No way. Ron was getting impatient. I can't believe it, Ginny. We've been through thick and thin together. Who was it that drank that awful polyjuice potion with me to investigate Malfoy? We broke almost 100 school rules together. Don't you trust us? Ginny wanted to say that the person they were working with was actually Mr. Riddle, but from another perspective, at least the three of them were indeed trustworthy. Please, Ginny, we need your help. If we can't find the real killer, Harry will remain innocent, and we don't want to see him go to Azkaban unjustly accused. With three pairs of eyes watching mainly Hermione and Harry, Ginny finally made up her mind. Hermione is very clever and might actually be able to help. If she were to look for the diary by herself, she wouldn't know where to begin. You must promise not to tell anyone. Ginny looked at them seriously. I promise. Ron blurted out first, without a hint of sincerity. Swear an oath first. The three children looked at each other and made a vow, but it was not bound by magic. Let's go somewhere deserted first, Ginny said. Actually, there weren't many people in the common room, but this place was too public. She led Harry and the others to an abandoned secret room, and the three boys were stunned by what they saw along the way. Hogwarts has a place like this. Now you can finally talk, right? Ron said, hands on his hips. The stolen item was a diary. Ginny finally spoke. A diary? But what's wrong with a diary? Harry and Hermione were both very puzzled. That diary is different, it's Mr. Riddle's diary. Riddle? Ron shouted. Tom Riddle? Finally, it made it into the first round of recommendations. Whether a book advances to the next round is really important. Please keep reading, everyone. If you have any votes, please vote for it. Thank you so much. Chapter 43. Am I really a genius? Wait, stop, hold on a minute. Harry looked at Ron with a questioning expression, as if he were accusing Ron of knowing another man behind his back. So you know this Tom Riddle? I should know. In fact, I'll never forget that name, even if it kills me. Ron felt annoyed just thinking about it. Remember when we fought with Slytherin at the Quidditch pitch? I cast a curse on Malfoy back then. It's about yourself, Hermione interrupted him. It does not matter. Then please tell me what's important. I was just about to say that, Ron said. Then Professor McGonagall punished me by making me do chores for Filch, and I spent the whole night in the metal room polishing Tom Riddle's trophies. Morality awards, outstanding student awards, special contribution awards, especially this special contribution award, which is a huge piece, and it took me almost half an hour to polish it. Luckily, there was no reason written on it, otherwise I probably wouldn't have finished polishing it by now. While Harry and Hermione were still marveling at the coincidence, Ginny said something that surprised them even more. Page 28. Mr. Riddle won the award because he caught the last person to open the locked room 50 years ago. What? The three of them immediately stood up, staring wide-eyed at Ginny, who was always quick to shock. Never before had they felt so close to the truth. Who is it? In the small, enclosed room, the three breathing sounds suddenly became rapid. However, Ginny shook her head. Mr. Riddle didn't tell me. Hearing this, the three of them sat back down on the dusty floor, dejected. But then, Harry seized on the clue. Didn't tell you. What do you mean by, didn't tell you? Because that diary has a mind of its own. Mr. Riddle put his memories in it. I was communicating with him all last semester, and after the locked room was opened again, he said he wanted to find the murderer again. Now the diary has been stolen. Mr. Riddle must have discovered something, and that's why the heir is targeting him. Ginny said, her voice breaking with tears. Hermione thought she'd been surprised enough today, and nothing could surprise her more. But now she knew she was wrong. Ron's face was filled with fear and lingering apprehension. You, how dare you talk to a thinking thing? What if it curses you? Mr. Riddle would never do that. Ginny said angrily, knowing that others probably wouldn't accept it after hearing about the diary. Mr. Riddle wouldn't hurt me, he's my friend. He's helped me a lot, taught me spells, guided me in transfiguration and potions, and all sorts of antidotes. If it weren't for Mr. Riddle, you might still be spitting out slugs right now. Ron was immediately mortified. Now, all three of them know why Ginny is so outstanding. But he has thoughts. If it were me, I would never trust him so easily. Ron remained wary. Then tell me, did I look like I was in danger? If Mr. Riddle wanted to harm me, he would have succeeded already. But he didn't. He even helped me with my homework. What? Ron and Hermione screamed at the same time, even with the same gaping mouths. He actually did your homework. This is insane. Riddle must be a terrible person. How could he do this? Said Hermione. This is absolutely insane. He must be a really good guy. Why wasn't I the one who got this notebook? That was Ron. Hermione kicked him hard. Harry now understands the situation perfectly well. But who stole the diary? It must be someone else from Gryffindor. And a girl, Ron said without hesitation. Otherwise, no one could enter the girls' dormitory. That's not necessarily true. Don't forget you were in the Slytherin common room a few weeks ago. Hermione reminded them of the polyjuice potion. But this greatly increased the number of suspects. Could it be Malfoy? But Malfoy isn't Slytherin's heir. The group was once again at a stalemate. Harry felt immense pain, as if a fruit that was about to ripen had vanished without a trace. Cyrus felt immense pain, like a fruit that was about to ripen but had vanished without a trace. He had spent so long gaining Ginny Weasley's complete trust and earning her a brief period of freedom. And now, the diary had fallen into someone else's hands. And he didn't even know who that person was. Could it be Dumbledore? Did he change his mind about training Harry and decide to just destroy me instead? Just as he was struggling with this, a passage of text finally appeared. Show me your secret. Show me the secret of your size. Cyrus just wants to punch him twice. You better not find out who you are, or you're dead. Of course, this was just an angry outburst. In any case, in order to be resurrected, he still had to patiently bewitch the little wizard in front of him. First, we need to confirm his identity. Who are you? On the other side, Malfoy's face immediately lit up with a smile upon seeing the diary's response. I never expected that just writing down a secret message would actually reveal the secret of this diary. Am I really a genius? After a brief moment of self-satisfaction, Malfoy immediately continued writing in his diary. My name is Draco Malfoy. My father told me that this diary can help me open the Chamber of Secrets. Your master must be the last person to open the Chamber of Secrets, right? Tell me, where is he? I want him to serve me. Draco had already forgotten Lucius' warning. Soon I will be the heir to Slytherin, why should I need to be subservient? Draco Malfoy? And Lucius made him do it? Cyrus was stunned. You thick-browed, big-eyed Lucius, so you've betrayed the revolution too. The thought of being betrayed right after writing a letter to Lucius Malfoy made Cyrus feel suffocated. Of course, he believed that Lucius wouldn't dare to openly betray Voldemort at least at this stage. Lucius was still on the opposite side of Dumbledore. It must be because of the letters I wrote in the past that he misunderstood. So, it turns out I've shot myself in the foot. Forget it, it'll be the same if it's Malfoy, but we need to gain his trust quickly. Thank you so much, Minghua Majigzu, for the 1,000 coin reward. Love you. I had a job interview today, oh my god, a 2-hour commute, 4 hours round trip, does anyone understand? And I might not even get the job, sob sob sob. Chapter 44 Cause and Effect. Gaining Draco's trust was easier than expected, and Cyrus knew this was probably thanks to Lucius. Draco still greatly admired his father, and since Lucius told him the diary could help him unlock the secret room, Draco naturally believed him without question. Through his conversation with Draco, Cyrus learned the whole story. At that time, Cyrus disguised himself as Draco and found the Malfoy family's owl. The owl did not recognize that the Malfoy in front of him was not Malfoy, and so he flew to Malfoy Manor in Wiltshire with the letter. He was afraid that Lucius Malfoy would disobey his orders, so when he wrote the letter, he explicitly implied that Draco's fate was in his hands and that Lucius should cooperate with him to expel Dumbledore from the school. As a result, when Lucius and Narcissa received the letter from their son, they immediately panicked, leading to a misunderstanding. Let's go back to those days around Christmas. Wiltshire, Malfoy Manor. It's already Christmas, they should finally quiet down a bit. Narcissa looked unhappy, a displeasure that ruined her natural beauty and made her seem like someone who wasn't easy to approach. But this wasn't entirely her fault. The Ministry of Magic had been giving them trouble all year, trying to find the Malfoy family's hidden dark magic artifacts. Although Lucius had secretly dealt with the most troublesome batch, the Malfoy family hadn't exactly been the nice guys in the wizarding world for so many years. Unless the entire manor was reduced to an empty shell, they wouldn't be able to finish dealing with it. And then there's her beloved son, Draco. It was because of the relentless search that Lucius decided to let Draco spend Christmas at school this year. Naturally, Narcissa was unhappy that she couldn't see her precious son during her long-awaited holiday. I've already put pressure on the Daily Prophet and the Ministry of Magic. Luckily, Arthur Weasley has a stupid son, and that Harry Potter. Lucius, naturally, would not stand idly by in the face of Weasley's targeting. Arthur Weasley, right? If you cause me trouble, I won't let you get away with it. In fact, he had already taken action during the summer vacation. He remembered a diary that Voldemort had entrusted to him for safekeeping. That diary looked like something from the Muggle world, and if it hadn't been left to him by that person, he would have thrown it away as trash long ago. Lucius remembered asking the Dark Lord why he had entrusted him with the care of a notebook from the Muggle world. The Dark Lord's answer at the time was, the diary is the key to unlocking the secret room. If that Dark Lord were still alive, Lucius would never dare hand over the diary, but now, the Lord has been gone for 11 years. In that case, why not use this diary to cause the Weasleys a little trouble? He didn't let the flying car incident go either. He not only contacted newspapers to make a big fuss about it, but also bribed some officials in the Ministry of Magic who were on good terms with him, putting Arthur Weasley in the spotlight. Now, that infuriating, endless search has finally come to an end. I think you should go to Hogwarts and bring Draco back, Narcissa said with some concern. Last time Draco wrote back, he said there had been an attack at the school. I'm afraid the Chamber of Secrets has really been opened. I'm worried that it will be dangerous for him to stay at the school. Lucius hesitated for a moment, then shook his head. The one attacked was just a mudblood, Draco won't be in danger. Besides, I've already written to him telling him not to show his face in public. He knows very little about this, there won't be any problems. It's not that it's impossible to bring Draco home, but Draco is going to be the heir to the Malfoy family, so we shouldn't be so pretentious. As the two were talking, they saw a shadow flying in the sky. It was the owl they had bought for Draco. Didn't Draco send a letter a few days ago? Narcissa eagerly took the letter from the owl, opened it, and within seconds, her already pale face turned even whiter. She covered her mouth in fear, her whole body seemingly about to collapse. What's wrong? Lucius had a bad feeling and quickly took the letter to read it. My dearest servant, Lucius Malfoy. I'm truly sorry, Lucius. Did you forget my magic because I disappeared from everyone's sight for a while? Otherwise, how dare you give away what I entrusted to you? I think you probably believe that the Dark Lord is dead, defeated by a baby who can't even walk, as countless people say, so you're eager to distance yourself, right? Lucius had only read the first paragraph when his breathing became rapid, his whole body trembled uncontrollably, and he slowly murmured, he's back, he's back. Then, filled with fear, he continued watching. I have to admit that I'm not in the best condition right now, but killing a few people would still be a piece of cake. Now, I need you to do something to atone for your mistake. It's not too difficult, just expel Dumbledore from the school. Page 29. Also, Merry Christmas. The letter, containing only a few words, left Lucius and Narcissa ashen-faced. Is it really him? It can't be him, Narcissa said in fear. He's been missing for 11 years. How could he possibly come back? She refused to accept the fact that her son was in danger. But Lucius knew perfectly well that no one except Voldemort himself knew about the diary. There's still a chance to redeem myself. He immediately snapped out of his fear. Lucius knew Voldemort's character. If he did his job well enough, he might avoid punishment, and Draco would be safe. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. If Dumbledore can't find the murderer, then I can use the power of the Board of Governors to expel him from Hogwarts. Lucius already had a plan in mind, but he still needed some leverage to persuade the Board of Governors. The number of victims must be increased. One mudblood is not enough. This must be done by Draco. The Dark Lord is not dead yet, only then will he reward Draco. Dobby. I'm here, Master. A house elf covered in wounds appeared before Lucius, looking at him with fear and uncertainty. Lucius didn't bother to explain why it had so many more scars. Right now, he only wanted to do one thing: complete the Dark Lord's mission and prevent Draco from encountering danger. Dobby, I need you to go to Hogwarts, find Ginny Weasley, steal a black diary, and give it to Draco. Then, give him this letter. Lucius wrote another letter. Thank you to reader 1338459675374563328 for the 10,000 Kidian coins reward. The 3 chapters 10U will be updated together after the book is published. I'm going to continue with my job interviews today. Chapter 45 Me. You really want me to open the secret chamber? Malfoy's eyes practically lit up. His heart was bursting with excitement, like fireworks exploding the air to Slytherin. This was an unparalleled honor. In Britain, almost all pure-blood wizards deeply admire Slytherin, the great wizard who eventually parted ways with the other 3 giants, and he is their true idol. If I can inherit the secrets of Slytherin, can't I become the second great wizard? Then, just like his own father said, Hogwarts must be purified. Those filthy mudbloods must be cleansed. Colin Creevey and Justin were just the beginning. Draco Malfoy. He's the one who's going to carry on Slytherin's legacy. And many more. Malfoy's inner fire suddenly faltered. He suddenly realized that since he had only just obtained the diary, who was the last person to possess it? He wasn't referring to the successor from 50 years ago, but rather the person who had petrified those 2 mudbloods not long ago. He immediately asked Cyrus. Cyrus didn't really want to talk to Malfoy about Ginny, and simply replied, just a pathetic coward who gets scared just because the professors have become wary. Otherwise, your father wouldn't have sent you to help me. Upon hearing this, Malfoy immediately thought it made a lot of sense. You mean my dad thinks I'm more reliable? He excitedly wrote, of course, I'm Malfoy. Dealing with this arrogant fool was much easier than dealing with Ginny. Cyrus gave a slight hint, and Malfoy was completely bewildered. Alright then, let's get started right away. Malfoy was naturally unwilling to be a coward and a weakling, and he couldn't wait to see Hermione Granger become the next victim. No. Cyrus rejected him without hesitation. Now is not a good time. I know you're not a coward, Draco. But if we're discovered, it will be terrible. We need to lower their guard first. However, I can take you to the secret chamber first. Draco was disappointed just a moment ago, but upon seeing that he could go to the secret chamber, he immediately became excited again. He couldn't wait to appear in the center of the secret chamber the next second and see that terrifying monster. How do I get there? I need to use your body. Cyrus revealed his true intentions. What? You think I'd let you possess me? Malfoy exclaimed immediately. He knew better than anyone how terrifying dark magic items were. Who knew what would happen if someone were to let such a thing possess them? You do not dare. Do you think I will harm you? Do you think your father would send something that could potentially threaten your safety to you? Cyrus immediately posed 3 questions, shattering all of Draco's doubts. Okay, what do we do? You don't have to do anything, you just need to stick your face against the notebook. Draco immediately moved his face slowly closer to the diary, and a silvery mist began to appear in his vision, like misty thread spewed out by some kind of insect. The thread clung to his face, and before he could react, it dragged him into a dark abyss. When he raised his head again, the consciousness of this body already belonged to Cyrus. Finally, Cyrus first greedily absorbed a tiny bit of Draco's insignificant life force, and then planned to take Draco to the secret chamber as agreed. Although he had gained Draco's trust, it was still far less than Ginny's. Ginny's trust in him was so deep that she would make excuses for herself when problems arose. However, the trust between Cyrus and Draco is easily broken. Under such circumstances, even possession couldn't last very long. He still needed to gain Draco's trust further. But before that, he needed to get one more thing: the Marauder's map. After getting the Marauder's map from Fred and George, Cyrus hid it. He thought the fewer people who knew about the Marauder's map, the more useful it would be, so he didn't tell Ginny about it. Little did he know it would come in handy now. After obtaining the Marauder's map, Cyrus folded it up and hid it in Draco's sleeve. Then he turned and headed towards the 3rd-floor restroom. The wash basin in the bathroom was opened on his command, and the secret passage was filled with endless darkness. Draco Malfoy felt himself slowly opening his eyes in the darkness, and finally a sliver of light shone in. Though faint, at least he could see. Then, my senses gradually returned. He felt as if he were lying in sticky mud, which made him very uncomfortable. But the fear of being in a completely unfamiliar place quickly made him forget this minor discomfort. Above us is a very tall dome, which shows that this is a very large space. The sides are carved with lifelike stone statues of snakes, each raising its terrifying head from the black water. A secret room. The answer immediately popped into Draco's head. He quickly sat up from the ground, causing the diary that had been lying flat against his chest to slip to the floor. Draco hurriedly picked it up and opened the book. This is the secret room. There was a sentence written on the page. Is the secret room inside the book? Draco thought to himself instinctively. He assumed that as he approached the diary, he was pulled inside it, which was how he reached the secret room. No wonder Dad said this diary was the key to unlocking the secret room. Now, the fear has vanished. Draco became excited. He quickly stood up and looked around the secret room. It was very empty, with almost nothing in it, but he felt like the true master of this secret room. Where is the monster? What about the monsters that Slytherin raised that could destroy mudbloods? He couldn't wait to write in his diary. You can't summon that monster, you need the Parseltongue to summon it. Otherwise, you'll be attacked. Cyrus wasn't going to be led by the nose by Malfoy. Showing him the secret chamber was enough. It wasn't time to let him push his luck. Parseltongue? Harry Potter is a Parseltongue. Was it him before? Malfoy asked incredulously. He was unwilling to believe that the Saint Potter would be Slytherin's successor. Of course it's not him. Who else but him? Who else can speak parsley? Malfoy asked immediately. A moment later, he saw 2 letters appear on the diary page. Me. I received 2 job offers today, and I'm still deciding which one to accept. Chapter 46 Alchemy Towards the Root. Are you speaking with a Parsleyan accent? Malfoy's tone was tinged with surprise and envy. Tom Riddle's name sounded like that of a boring mudblood, at best a half-breed. Yet this very man possessed the ability he so desperately desired. But he was soon shocked by what Cyrus said next. Weird. My mother's surname is Gaunt, and I am a descendant of Slytherin. Page 30. Who would have thought that this little Tom, who is unknown in the wizarding world, is actually a descendant of Slytherin? No wonder he was able to open the Chamber of Secrets. However, Draco was still very annoyed. Why didn't any of my ancestors have a wizard as great as Slytherin? In this way, he could also become a formidable figure at Hogwarts as the heir to the Malfoys. But whatever, now that he's the heir to the secret chamber, it doesn't matter. His only complaint is that this wretched Tom Riddle, who, despite being Parsleyan, refuses to summon the monster so he can see it, has absolutely no sense of propriety. Little Tang, since you have a snake accent, shouldn't you show some appreciation? Cyrus. Little Tang. This Draco Malfoy really doesn't know the meaning of death. Fortunately, the person in the diary isn't the real Riddle, otherwise if he were resurrected he wouldn't even need to be resurrected, he would have drained Malfoy's life force. Of course I would, but the problem is that if I use the basilisk voice, I would have to borrow your body to make the sound. That way you would never see the basilisk's appearance again. The basilisk? So the monster in the secret chamber was the basilisk. Malfoy was surprised at first, then nodded as if it were a matter of course. The monster left behind by Slytherin should rightfully be the strongest, the Serpent King. But if Tom Riddle says that, doesn't that mean he'll never see the basilisk and never be able to control it? What kind of successor is this? It can only be considered as Xiao Tang's vocal organs at most. Couldn't you summon it first, and then give my body back to me? If you have the courage and strength to face the basilisk alone, then I don't mind at all. However, I must warn you that without my control, it will attack you immediately. Please forgive it, after all, it hasn't eaten much for almost 1,000 years. Those rats in the sewers can't satisfy its appetite. Malfoy immediately shivered. Then forget it. He sighed and looked around. The huge, secret room seemed to contain nothing but a few statues. Is this all there is to Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets? To be honest, it's a bit disappointing. In reality, Slytherin's Chamber of Secrets certainly contained more than just these. Although the Chamber of Secrets was originally just a classroom built by Slytherin, it also holds many precious manuscripts and secrets. Most of these have been absorbed by Voldemort to become nutrients for his growth, and now they also belong to Cyrus's power. Furthermore, it contains records of many dangerous magical experiments. Some succeeded, but many more failed. Rumors also circulated that Slytherins looked as ugly as monkeys. This wasn't actually his original appearance, just like Voldemort was a handsome young man at the beginning. Both of them conducted magical experiments on themselves in pursuit of greater magical power. Voldemort's experiments were largely based on Slytherin's work and took it a step further, but he still couldn't escape the fate of being disfigured. Having absorbed the experiences of these two individuals, Cyrus was actually quite envious of magical bloodline modification, but he didn't really want to become an ugly monster, so he had to be very careful with this step. It's too early to think about these things now. If I don't revive him, I won't even have the resources to make any changes. With a slight sigh, Cyrus knew that now was the time to gain Draco's trust. Are you wondering what other secrets might be hidden in this secret room? How do you know? Malfoy was startled by Cyrus's words. Could this diary possibly possess the power of mind control? That's not hard to guess. If you want to get stronger, I have a good place for you. All you have to do is lean your head in, just like you did at the beginning, Cyrus replied, then turned to another page in his diary. Having learned from his first experience, Malfoy was much more adept this time. After his consciousness shifted again, Cyrus took out the Marauder's map and, after confirming that there was no one outside the secret room or in the corridor on the 8th floor, left and headed for the room of requirement. Give me a room to practice dark magic. Upon opening the door, Cyrus was greeted by a gloomy and terrifying classroom, almost entirely filled with books on dark magic, including some extremely advanced ones. He hid most of the spell books, leaving only a few simple little curses. These minor curses are actually quite common among young wizards, so they won't affect their personalities too much, and at the same time, they can keep Malfoy occupied, making them very suitable. Then, he returned his body to its original position. Malfoy was naturally delighted to see so many evil curses and spells, and he lavished praise on Cyrus. Cyrus, on the other hand, returned to his diary to analyze the alchemical books and other forbidden texts. Although he was now in Malfoy's hands, the actual situation had not changed much. The possibility of facing Dumbledore in the end still exists. The archetypal world that leads to the top via the 22 paths of the Tree of Life. The devil waters it with sin, and the skeleton cuts it off. The 10 primordial substances, consisting of the celestial sphere containing the 7 planets, the celestial sphere, the celestial palace, and the world beneath the moon, constitute the fundamental forces of the gods and the world. Pervaded by the pillars of feminine compassion, neutral gentleness, and masculine severity. The creation of perfect spirit, thought, and ideas, and mindset, begins to take shape in material form and eventually arrives in the material world. Cyrus felt that the more he read these books on alchemy, the more he felt like he was sinking into an incredibly terrifying quagmire. The vast world and boundless power were more mysterious than magic itself. It's almost like heading towards the real root of the problem. Is it necessary to follow all 22 paths to forge the true philosopher's stone? Or perhaps, it's about obtaining a more perfect, essential power. Cyrus's ambition began to swell. If it's just resurrection, that won't do. His resurrected body was that of Tom Riddle, who, despite his talent, still had his limits. He made himself look neither human nor ghost, but ultimately failed to obtain ultimate power. Cyrus was not content with this. Having already encountered so much mystery, what he yearns for is to become a truly perfect being. Chapter 47 of the documentary series, The Legend of Draco, continues to air. For a long time afterward, Malfoy was immersed in the joy of learning evil spells. Cyrus didn't give him much guidance, but he still learned very quickly. Besides curses, Malfoy was also very interested in some alchemical gadgets. However, this was a hobby that Lucius didn't allow him to have at home. Being obsessed with alchemy tools is tantamount to wasting one's time on trivial pursuits. But in reality, Malfoy did have some talent in this area. After Cyrus discovered this by chance, he immediately put it to use and began teaching Malfoy alchemy. Sometimes he would even go to the room where things were hidden to find some damaged alchemical artifacts for Draco to repair. He even found a broken pensieve. Thus, they finally shared a secret. Malfoy also began to trust Cyrus more. If you want to continue studying alchemy, I suggest you choose runes in your 3rd year, Cyrus advised. Unlike the ancient alchemy he is now studying, modern alchemy is more focused on creating magical items and is better at using runes to add magical power to these items. The school hasn't mentioned course selection yet, but Malfoy is definitely considering it seriously. Dobby has been in distress and conflict ever since he stole the diary from Ginny. He tried so many ways to notify Harry Potter, but he never imagined that the person whose name he wouldn't even mention would still be alive. 11 years ago, he narrowly escaped from Harry Potter's clutches. Now, Harry Potter may be facing an even more terrifying threat. That person whose name can't even be spoken is still alive. Harry Potter must leave Hogwarts. Dobby clenched his fist tightly. Meanwhile at Hogwarts, Harry and his friends were still trying their best to help Ginny find Riddle's diary. But several weeks had passed, and they still hadn't made any progress. They saw almost everyone as the murderer, and nearly every Slytherin and Gryffindor student became a suspect. Ginny was devastated, but as time went on, all she felt left was sadness and despair. "I'm afraid we'll never find that diary," Ron said, sounding pessimistic like Pigsy from Journey to the West. "And have you noticed? The attacks seem to have stopped. Something must have happened somewhere we don't know about. Perhaps Riddle used his methods to stop the successor." His words were almost an implication that the brave and righteous Mr. Riddle had already sacrificed himself on the path to stopping evil. Upon hearing this, Ginny immediately began to cry. Not only did she cry, but she also used a hook to hang Ron from the ceiling. Ron. In contrast, Fred and George, who assumed Ginny had lost the map, were less anxious. On one hand, they had almost completely figured out all the tunnels on the map, and on the other hand, they believed the heir couldn't possibly know its secrets. The other party can never use the map to harm others even if they obtain it, it's nothing more than a piece of waste paper. The fact that the attacks have now stopped is the best proof of that. Therefore, they not only weren't worried, but they also came to comfort Ginny from time to time. However, their way of comforting her was somewhat different from others. At least Percy didn't think that dressing up in fur or conjuring up boils to jump out from behind a statue to tease her could be considered a form of comfort. Soon, Harry had to stop looking for the thief. Because Wood has been putting in a lot more training for them lately, Harry spent almost all of his time on the pitch after dinner. The weather has been cold and rainy lately, so every time he returned to his dorm, he was soaked to the bone. Ron was also very tired and would fall asleep as soon as his head hit the pillow. Page 31. Worse than all of this was Lockhart. To ease the tension at school, he took it upon himself to organize a Valentine's Day event where little cupids, carrying greeting cards, actually ugly little dwarfs, would read aloud love letters written to you. The only thing Harry was thankful for was that he didn't receive anything that might embarrass him. Ron was furious because Hermione consistently disagreed with him on how to treat Lockhart. He suspected that one of the 40-odd Valentine's Day cards Lockhart received was for Hermione. That Gilderoy Lockhart, I've never seen anyone worse than him. Even Malfoy was almost at his wit's end with Lockhart. My dad was right. Dumbledore has completely lost his mind. Look at the defense against the dark arts professors he's hired these past 2 years. They're getting worse every year. Last year he was just stuttering, but this year, he should be a ridiculous actor in the drama club. If there's anything about Lockhart that pleases him, it's that he always invites Harry Potter to perform with him in class. Almost every time, that annoying scarred guy plays the comical role, which certainly provides a lot of laughs. But seeing the same routine too often gets boring. This time, they pulled off another Valentine's Day stunt. He is Draco Malfoy. Who doesn't know how popular Slytherin is? Are there few people who want to confess their feelings to themselves? But if someone confessed their love to him in this kind of situation, he would rather die. If anyone dares to write me a greeting card and embarrass me, I'll teach them a lesson. Draco immediately declared. This immediately dissuaded Pansy, who was sitting not far from him. At noon, Malfoy complained about the matter to Cyrus again. He had almost come to regard Cyrus as a true friend, calling him Little Soup affectionately. Sometimes Cyrus would remind him, I'm older than your father, even he has to respect me, how can you call me Little Tom? Draco always seemed completely unconcerned. Let's stick to our own way of addressing each other. He calls you uncle, and he'll call you brother. Draco didn't hesitate to give himself a super seniority boost. But if Lucius knew he called Voldemort Little Tom, he'd be kneeling before Draco and calling him Dad sooner or later. Cyrus, however, didn't seem to care. All I need to do is be Draco's close friend. I think this might not be such a bad thing, Cyrus said deliberately. You should take advantage of this opportunity. What do you mean? I mean, if you think this is something to be ashamed of, what about other people? I see you seem to really dislike Harry Potter. Why don't you try writing him a nameless greeting card? How about something like, his eyes are as green as freshly pickled toads. Look at how this big star humiliated himself in public. Cyrus had no recollection of his brief collaboration with Harry to steal potions, and he was ruthless in his attempts to trick people. You're a genius. Malfoy jumped up. Right, you have to write. Just write it the way you said. To be honest, I've hated his eyes for a long time. And he had a new idea. And we'll have those dwarves read it out during potions class. He said smugly. But Cyrus slowly typed out a question mark. You probably don't know, Headmaster Snape hates Harry Potter the most. Malfoy thought Cyrus was unaware of the intricacies of the situation, and immediately explained excitedly to him, if the headmaster's class is interrupted, you can imagine that Potter is doomed. To say to Snape that Harry's eyes were as green as freshly pickled toads? You're something else, Draco Malfoy. It's still uncertain who's going to die. Don't you know that Snape hated every pore of Harry's body, except for his eyes? If I give you the swear word mudblood, you can clean toilets for a whole semester. If I give you Valentine's Day, you'll be able to perfectly avoid it. Even the 5-star wizard MacArthur said. When it comes to courting death, even I can't beat Draco Malfoy. When Malfoy started courting disaster, it was already too late. If God made me compare myself to Malfoy in terms of death, I would kill God without hesitation. The epic documentary series, The Draco Malfoy Saga, continues to air. Chapter 48. Neither good nor evil is pure enough, hence the suffering, 3,000 words. Malfoy put his plan into action during Charms class that afternoon. He also wanted to do something similar to Harry in Potions class, but unfortunately, the last Potions class of the week was yesterday. For the entire class, Malfoy waited to see what would happen. He placed his black diary on the top left corner of his desk. Well, continue learning the freezing spell today. Flitwick stood on his book at first base. Otherwise, his head probably wouldn't have been as tall as the podium. He was very enthusiastic, though. The incantation for the freezing spell is Immobilis. Note the difference between that and another spell, Glacis. Of course, you haven't learned that yet. Normally, freezing spells only work on moving objects, but, hey, you, Harry Potter. A short, gloomy-looking man burst into the classroom, interrupting Professor Flitwick's lesson. The entire class craned their necks to look at the man, who was almost as tall as Professor Flitwick, and Harry immediately realized he was doomed. Receiving a Valentine's Day card in front of so many people, especially Draco Malfoy, was incredibly infuriating. Harry wanted to run away, but class was still in session. and several dwarves had already surrounded his desk, making it impossible to move. Even Ron and Neville, who were sitting next to him, had been pushed out of the way. Harry's gaze seemed to plead for help as he looked out. He saw a look of fear and concern on Ron's face, while Professor Flitwick on the podium covered his face in exasperation, as if wondering why someone like Lockhart was a Ravenclaw student. Across from him, the annoying Malfoy was smiling more happily than ever. "I have a musical message to deliver to Harry Potter in person," the dwarf said, striking the harp with an aggressive air. "Not here," Harry said in a low voice, almost pleading. "Stop right there." The dwarf grunted, grabbing Harry's schoolbag to prevent him from escaping. "Let me go," Harry yelled, yanking on his backpack. He didn't care if he was in class anymore, he'd rather die. With a loud tearing sound, his schoolbag was ripped in two. His books, wand, parchment, and quill clattered to the floor, with the ink bottle shattered on top. Harry frantically grabbed at the things scattered on the ground, trying to pick them all up before the dwarves started singing. The classroom was in complete chaos, but Malfoy's voice pierced through the noise like a sharp bayonet, striking Harry directly. "What's going on?" Malfoy asked in a cold and contemptuous tone, but his heart was far more excited than he appeared. He had been waiting for this moment for a long time. "He's laughing at me." Harry panicked completely and just wanted to escape, but the dwarf grabbed his knees and threw him heavily to the ground. "All right," he said, plopping down on Harry's lap, "this is your Valentine's Day gift with a song." His eyes were as green as freshly pickled toads. His hair was as black and elegant as a blackboard. The scar on his head is as magical as lightning. "I hope he's mine, he's really handsome." "That's Harry Scarhead." "All right." Professor Flitwick finally couldn't stand it anymore. It was probably the first time the students had ever seen the usually mild-mannered Professor Flitwick so angry. "I'm still in class." He picked up his wand and cast a spell, but instead of hitting the dwarf directly, it struck near its feet, leaving a fist-sized crater in the ground and banishing the dwarf. But Harry didn't feel any better at all. He was willing to hand over all the gold coins in Gringotts, hoping to vanish into thin air on the spot. He bravely forced himself to laugh along with everyone else, but Malfoy was the one laughing the loudest in the entire class. Laughing with Malfoy was more of a torment for him. The most important is, this isn't a confession at all, it's definitely Malfoy's doing, Harry declared confidently. "Only he would call me Scarface." "You're right." Ron nodded, his face full of regret. "It's infuriating that we didn't think of such a good trick to fool Malfoy." Harry also felt it was a pity, but it was too late to say anything now. Potions class was their last class of the day and the week. After class, Malfoy would return to the Slytherin common room, but Harry was still unwilling to give up. He could no longer concentrate on the lesson, and his eyes, filled with hatred, stared at Malfoy behind his round glasses. Then he saw Malfoy, as if he had encountered something wonderful, slump over the table and take out a black notebook to write. However, the distance between them was too great, and Harry could not see what Malfoy was writing. "I don't think Potter really liked your Valentine's Day gift." This line of text seeped into the diary and appeared before Cyrus. "My New Year's gift to Harry Potter." Cyrus rolled his eyes. Who was it that loved Harry Potter so deeply? He responded immediately. "Not me, but you." I bet his expression must have been priceless. Completely correct. Through the words, Cyrus could feel Malfoy's immense joy at that moment. He probably felt there was no more wonderful moment in the world. However, what Cyrus didn't know was that Harry had been watching Malfoy's every move. Fortunately, a black notebook like this is so common that even after hearing Ginny's description, Harry didn't suspect anything. After all, they had already ruled out Malfoy as the thief. Page 32. However, Malfoy could only manage small-scale operations like this in the end. The malice inside one's chest may seem greater than anyone else's, but when it comes to putting it into practice, it may not be as powerful as it sounds. Are we really going to kill someone? Inside the secret room, Malfoy's voice began to tremble. Before him stood a tall, humanoid silhouette, handsome and dashing, though somewhat transparent, like a ghost. It was Cyrus. By absorbing the life force of Ginny and Malfoy some time ago, he was able to briefly let his shadow leave the diary. The abundant life force made him feel reborn. However, in reality, this would consume a lot of his energy. But friends should always meet face to face. This was also a small preparation that Cyrus made in order to completely control Malfoy. "I think we don't need to." "Are you scared? Like the last coward, you're scared?" he asked rhetorically. "I'm not afraid." It's just Draco's chest heaved violently as he looked in horror at the large snake that was bowing its head before him. At that moment, he felt not honor, but real fear. But when facing Cyrus, or rather, when facing little Tom whom he had spent so much time with, he was unwilling to show his vulnerable side. Especially when he discovered that Tom Riddle, this mixed-race man, was far more outstanding than himself. Now, he genuinely wanted to impress his friends and his father, to show them how outstanding he was, but asking him to kill someone was a bit. "She's just a filthy little mudblood, why do you care whether she lives or dies?" Cyrus took a step forward. He was just a phantom shadow, yet he forced Draco to retreat continuously. "I just think it's unnecessary. The people who were attacked before didn't die, did they? We just need to petrify them, just petrify them." How interesting, Draco. Cyrus chuckled, having unknowingly walked up to Draco and looked down at him. He could feel Draco Malfoy's breathing, rapid and intermittent. Do you know how much effort it took for me to get out of the diary? It was far more difficult than possessing you. Cyrus said angrily. I did this because you said you wanted to do it yourself, but now you're backing down. I didn't, it's just. Cold sweat kept dripping down his forehead. Although Draco quickly denied it, he couldn't come up with an excuse. He felt as if a huge mass of seawater was engulfing him, and the pressure made it hard for him to breathe. He looked like he was in a lot of pain. At that moment, Cyrus's translucent fingers reached towards his chest and grasped the wand he kept in his pocket. He began to examine it slowly. Nice wand. What's it made of? Cyrus seemed to have completely abandoned the matter of ordering Malfoy to kill someone, and instead started talking about his wand. Hawthorn wood, the core of the cane is unicorn hair. Hawthorn wood, a strange, contradictory magic wand, isn't it? Just like the tree itself is full of paradoxes, its leaves and blossoms have healing properties, but the branches it cuts carry the scent of death. And unicorn fur. Nothing is less suitable for casting dark magic. Draco. Cyrus placed Malfoy's wand back in the distance, while looking directly into his eyes. You look like you're in pain. Draco had to admit that Tom Riddle was right. But he was unwilling to admit it, or rather, he was now speechless. The once friendly little Tom now seemed like a completely different person, making him feel both unfamiliar and frightened. Fortunately, the other party eventually relented. Your good and evil are not pure enough, and that is the root of your suffering, Cyrus bluntly pointed out. His hand rested on Draco's shoulder, and his voice gradually became ethereal, like the enchanting song of a mermaid in the ocean. What you can't do, I will do. Draco Malfoy, give me your body. Thank you to reader 1338459675374563328 for the 10,000 Kidian coins reward. I still owe you 4 chapters. Chapter 49 Modifying Memory. Cyrus took advantage of Draco's weakness and completely controlled his body. However, he did not immediately launch an attack with the basilisk. He had more important things to do than to launch an attack. Through his conversation with Draco, he already knew that the house elf Dobby had stolen the diary and delivered it to Draco. Now, Ginny still has memories of the diary in her mind, and if Dumbledore discovers these memories, she will likely be exposed. We must find out if Ginny has revealed anything about the diary, and then we must erase all their memories. Cyrus doesn't plan to go back to Ginny for the time being. Given how things have developed, there's really no need to strictly follow the original plot. As long as the overall story remains largely the same, taking Ginny to the Chamber of Secrets at the end and creating the illusion that he's about to meet Harry Potter face-to-face will suffice. Now, he needs to find an opportunity and act quickly. However, that's what I mean. The fact that Harry, Hermione, and Ginny used their combined weapon to disarm them right from the start is a different story. Just a few minutes earlier, Cyrus was about to go find Ginny when he unexpectedly ran into 4 people who had been lying in wait there as soon as he stepped out of the common room and turned the corner. 4 voices shouted Expelliarmus in unison, and Ron's wand immediately backfired, blasting him away. The remaining 3 spells flew towards Cyrus, knocking the Hawthorn wood staff from his hand. In truth, Cyrus wasn't truly powerless to resist. Even with his wand knocked away, he could still cast spells, but now he had other ideas. Malfoy, give Ginny's diary back right now. Hermione said rudely, as if she would punch him if he didn't hand over the diary. Hurry up, or I'll make you taste what a slug tastes like. Ginny was even more agitated than Hermione. Don't try to deny it, Harry saw you take out that diary during class. Ron, whose buttocks were split in 8 pieces, quickly got up and stood aside, taking advantage of the situation. On Valentine's Day, Harry saw Malfoy writing in a black notebook. He didn't think much of it at the time, but after seeing Ginny, he remembered the diary. After observing for several more days, he finally confirmed that the diary Malfoy was holding was the one Ginny had lost. That's how this scene came about. However, looking at the 3 wands pressing against his chin, Cyrus was not flustered at all. Wait, I'm not Malfoy. Cyrus looked sincerely at Ginny, then lowered his voice. It's me, Riddle. Mr. Riddle? Ginny immediately put down her wand, her voice filled with surprise and delight. How come you're possessed by Malfoy? Oh so, you are Tom Riddle. Hermione and her 2 dimwit sons both wore strange expressions. It was just that Cyrus was wearing Malfoy's face, and no matter what he said, it didn't seem very believable. That's right. Cyrus nodded. Remember when we went to Snape's to steal the materials for the polyjuice potion? That was when I was possessing Ginny's body. Is it really you? Ron said in surprise. But how did you end up in Malfoy's hands? We all thought the heir stole you, Harry said, puzzled. Malfoy isn't the heir, and we don't even know who the heir is. Why would he steal you? Because he wanted to help that heir, Cyrus explained. He didn't know who the heir was, but he discovered that I was searching for the heir, and he also discovered that I wasn't Ginny, but a memory in the diary, so he tried to steal the diary. However, he didn't expect that I could forcibly control his body. Upon hearing this, Hermione immediately frowned, seemingly finding Cyrus's methods too evil, but Harry and Ron were quite pleased. I have to say, even though it's the same face, you're much more pleasing to the eye than Malfoy. Ron walked up to him casually, put his arm around his shoulder, and then lowered his voice. I heard you helped Ginny with her homework. There were a few times when I thought she didn't need to do those assignments anymore. Why? What I mean is I also have a lot of homework. Ron. Hermione angrily pulled Ron away from Cyrus. Harry and Ginny remained around him, and Ginny suddenly looked sad. But if you've taken control of Malfoy, why don't you come looking for me? Cyrus wanted to say that his original plan was to find her and alter their memories. However, the words that came out were quite different. This is too dangerous. I believe the heir has already discovered my existence. It's just that he hasn't figured out where I'm hiding yet. If I return to your side, I might drag you into danger as well. But I'm using Malfoy's body, so don't worry, no one will think he's the heir's enemy. I'm not afraid of danger, Ginny said firmly. We're not afraid either, Harry said immediately, hoping that this Mr. Riddle could provide him with some useful information. Actually, I'm a little scared. Ron wanted to say that, but looking at his sister and best friend, he swallowed the words back. I know you are all very brave, but one person can't find the killer, right? Hermione interrupted him. We can help. You've worked with us before, you know that. Cyrus stared at her for a long time before nodding, feigning helplessness. Okay, I agree to let you join, but before that, I need to figure this out first. Ginny, you didn't tell anyone about the diary, did you? No, I only told Hermione and the others. Very well, now I must alter your memories, erasing this section of the diary and replacing it with something else, Cyrus said. I know you will never escape my secret, but the successor may use legilimency to find the answers in your memories. If he discovers my true identity, killing me will be too easy for him. Cyrus took the wand back from Harry. You promise you'll only alter our memories of the diary, not make us forget everything. Ginny looked at him stubbornly, afraid that this was just a lie Cyrus told to make them forget everything and stay away from danger. I guarantee, there will only be modifications. Thank you to 12138 for the 500-point reward. Thank you, boss. Chapter 50. All the abandoned people found a home here. After altering Ginny and the others' memories, Cyrus finally felt that there were no future troubles. Now, no one else will know that my true form is just an ordinary diary. Harry and the others were momentarily stunned, then completely forgot about the memory alteration. Page 33. So, Mr. Riddle, have you found anything? Or do you know who was the last one to open the Chamber of Secrets? Harry was eager to know some secrets so he could find the real murderer and clear his name. Especially after he revealed his Parsleyan accent and Justin was petrified, almost everyone believed he was the murderer. Ginny said that the time the locked room was opened 50 years ago, it was you who caught the murderer. It's me, but I'm afraid you won't believe it, Cyrus said tactfully. What does this mean? We need the truth, Mr. Riddle. We can't let the heirs do evil anymore. We believe that the person who opened the Chamber of Secrets 50 years ago and this one might have some connection, Harry said anxiously. Alright, if you'd like, I can take you there, Cyrus replied. You don't need to hear my story. I can take you into my memory, into the night I caught him. But how do we do it? Find an empty classroom and wait for me there. Cyrus had finally managed to erase the diary from their memories, so naturally he wouldn't take it out in front of them. Coincidentally, he had previously found a broken pensieve in the room where things were hidden in the room of requirement, which he had later repaired. It was originally a little gadget prepared for Draco, but I didn't expect it to come in handy now. Having obtained the pensieve, Cyrus used the Marauder's map to pinpoint Harry and the others' location. He immediately headed there. How did you know we were here? Ron asked in surprise when he saw Cyrus find him so accurately. But soon, he was drawn to what Cyrus was holding. What are you doing washing your face? This is a pensieve, Hermione exclaimed, her eyes wide. What is the pensieve? It's an alchemical tool that can preserve thoughts and memories in the mind, Cyrus explained, as he used the tip of his wand to extract a small piece of silver memory from his temple. You can think of it as the pensieve allowing you, and others, to see what happened back then again in a third-person time. Like watching a movie, understand? Cyrus tossed that wisp of memory into the pensieve and then stirred it up. Soon, the silver object became transparent, looking like glass. Follow me. Cyrus deliberately entered his own thoughts. He fell into a cold, dark substance, as if being sucked into a black vortex. What do we do? Ron watched Cyrus disappear, and a sense of hesitation arose in his heart. Follow him, Harry said without hesitation. Before he could finish speaking, Ginny had already become the second person to enter the pensieve. Then came Harry, Hermione, and finally Ron. Before they could even react, they found themselves in a strange new space. They immediately knew where they were. The round room with a portrait of a sleeping man hanging on the wall was Dumbledore's office, but the person sitting behind the desk wasn't Dumbledore, but a frail-looking, withered wizard with only a few strands of white hair on his bald head, reading a letter by candlelight. Harry had never seen this man before. He is Professor Dippet, who was the headmaster of Hogwarts 50 years ago, Cyrus explained to them. He spoke loudly as usual, which made Harry and the others nervous. I'm sorry, Harry said, his voice trembling, shouldn't we be quieter and hide? But the wizard didn't even look up. He continued reading the letter, his brow furrowing slightly. "Don't worry, they can't see us, they're just memories. Just like me," Cyrus explained. Harry and the others were relieved. At this moment, the old wizard sighed, folded the letter, stood up, walked past Harry without even looking at him, and went straight to draw back the curtains. The sky outside the window was ablaze with crimson clouds. It seemed to be sunset. The wizard returned to the table, sat down, and absent-mindedly fiddled with his two thumbs, gazing towards the doorway. Someone was knocking on the office door. "Come in," the old wizard said in a weak, feeble voice. A boy of about 16 entered and removed his pointed hat. A silver prefect badge gleamed on his chest. He looked exactly like Cyrus, tall, with black hair and eyes. "This person is me," Cyrus explained, though in fact, even without him saying it, everyone else could tell. "He's way better looking than Lockhart." Ron nudged Hermione with his elbow, and Hermione's face immediately turned red. "Ah, Riddle," said the headmaster. "You want to see me, Professor Dippet?" Riddle said, sounding somewhat nervous. "Sit down," Dippet said. "I've been reading the letter you gave me." "Oh," Riddle said. He sat down, his hands clenched tightly together. "My dear child," Dippet said kindly, "I can't let you stay at school for the summer. Surely you'd prefer to come home for the holidays." "No," Riddle said immediately, "I'd rather stay at Hogwarts than go to that. You're staying at a Muggle orphanage during your vacation, are you?" Dippet asked curiously. "Mr. Riddle, you never told me this." Ginny looked at Cyrus with pity, her face full of sadness. She had no idea that Mr. Riddle had such a past. "It's nothing," Cyrus simply shook his head. "I don't want people to think I'm pathetic, Ginny." These were his heartfelt words. Useless sympathy offers no solace. Harry agreed more than anyone else. He felt a closer connection to Tom Riddle. Their experiences were so similar, almost like brothers separated by 50 years. "Yes, sir," Riddle said, blushing slightly. "Are you Muggle-born?" "You're a mixed-race man, sir," Riddle said. "Your father is a Muggle, and your mother is a wizard. Your parents are both." "My mother died shortly after giving birth to me, sir. They told me in the orphanage that she only had time to name me, Tom, after my father, and my middle name, Marvolo, after my maternal grandfather." Dippet clicked his tongue sympathetically. "Here's the thing, Tom," he said with a sigh, "we were thinking of making some special arrangements for you, but given the current situation—" "Are you referring to all of these attacks, sir?" Riddle asked. Harry's heart started racing, and he leaned closer, afraid of missing a single word. "Absolutely right," the headmaster said. "My dear child, you must see how foolish it would have been if I had allowed you to remain in the castle after the term ended. Especially after that recent tragedy. That poor little girl is dead. You would have been much safer in the orphanage. To tell you the truth, the Ministry of Magic is even discussing closing the school. As for the root cause of all these unfortunate events, we still have no clue." Riddle's eyes widened. "You are very sad." "I just don't want the school to be closed. So I have to hand over the murderer. Even if he didn't mean to kill," Cyrus said calmly. He was giving Harry and the others a heads up, so he deliberately emphasized didn't mean to kill. Harry could understand Riddle's thoughts from his memories. Hogwarts always provides the warmest refuge for the homeless. This was the first home he knew, the best home. He, Mr. Riddle, and other abandoned boys all found a home here. "Thank you so much to the gentleman with the 500-point reward, 9527, thank you so much." Chapter 51 The Heir. This chapter has a lot of plot in the original work, so I'll leave it here. "Sir, if that person gets caught, if everything stops." "What do you mean?" Dippet asked, standing up from his chair. His voice was harsh. "Riddle, are you saying you know something about these attacks?" "No, sir," Riddle said quickly. Dippet slumped back down, looking slightly disappointed. "You can leave now, Tom." Riddle slid off his chair and dragged himself out of the room. Several people followed. They descended the spiral staircase and emerged from beside a monstrous drip-shaped spout in the gradually darkening corridor. Riddle stopped, and they stopped too, staring at him. Cyrus had a strange feeling. Although he had seen this memory countless times, this was the first time he had shown it to someone else, especially since the owner of the memory looked exactly like him now. "In my memory," Riddle was deep in thought, biting his lip, wrinkles forming on his forehead. Then, as if suddenly having made up his mind, he hurried away, and the others followed silently behind. They didn't see a single person along the way. Finally, they arrived at the foyer, where a tall wizard greeted Riddle from the marble staircase. "What are you doing, Tom? Why are you wandering around so late?" "It's Dumbledore." Ron stared in disbelief at the wizard. It was none other than Dumbledore, 50 years younger. It was a very strange feeling, as if they were on a time journey, the grey world seemingly the color of time itself, and they were going against the current, like thieves savoring sweets that didn't belong to them. "I never imagined I would meet such a young Dumbledore," Harry said, stunned. The Dumbledore of 50 years ago was very different from the Dumbledore of now. Back then, he had flowing reddish-brown hair and a long beard, and his face did not look as old as it does now. However, perhaps due to the grey filter of this memory, Harry felt that he looked a little too sad, as if he had just walked out of a wet rain. He didn't know what sad things Dumbledore had gone through at that time, but the old man seemed to be disheartened, and what kept him alive was not hope, but rather punishment. Cyrus, however, knew it very well. 50 years ago, at this time, Grindelwald was still living out their plans around the world, fulfilling the vows they made in their youth to stay together until death. But they have long since drifted apart. In a few years, people will be celebrating the day he loses his beloved. In this respect, Harry and Dumbledore are quite similar. Ginny, however, recalled the night she met Dumbledore, which seemed no different from the present moment. The only thing that remained unchanged about Dumbledore was his eyes, which could see right through people. "I had to see the principal, sir," Riddle said. "All right, go to bed now," Dumbledore said, gazing at Riddle with that penetrating look Harry knew so well. "It's best not to wander around the corridors these days, since you're all ready." He sighed heavily, said good night to Riddle, and strode away. Riddle watched him disappear from sight, then quickly walked up the stone steps leading to the underground classroom. However, Riddle didn't lead them to a hidden passage or a secret tunnel, but instead to the underground classroom where Snape took potions. The torches weren't lit, so as Riddle nearly closed the door, Harry could only see Riddle standing motionless in the doorway, staring out into the passage. Page 34. They had been there for at least an hour. Cyrus could tell Ron was getting impatient. All they could see was Riddle standing in the doorway, peering through the crack, waiting like a statue. "Don't be impatient. The person who opened the secret room was hiding here. He was with the monster he was raising." Sirius' words forced them to calm down. Just as their patience was about to run out, there was a commotion outside the door. Someone was moving quietly in the passageway. They heard the person pass by the underground classroom where he and Riddle were hiding. Riddle, as silent as a shadow, slipped through the crack in the door and followed. Cyrus led them over. They heard a door creak open, and then someone spoke in a hoarse voice. "Come here, come out, come up here, come into the box. This is the air." This person's voice seemed somewhat familiar, Hermione said, frowning. They saw the dark figure of a large boy squatting in front of an open door, with a large box beside it. They soon understood why they felt familiar, especially after the argument between Riddle and Hagrid in their memories. "Good evening, Rupert," Riddle said sternly. "It's over," he said. "I have to report you, Rubius. They're discussing closing Hogwarts if the attacks don't stop. I know you didn't mean to kill, but monsters aren't ideal pets. I guess you just wanted to let it out for some exercise, so it didn't kill anyone," the big boy said, taking a few steps back and leaning against the closed door. Harry could hear a strange rustling and clattering sound behind him. Riddle moved closer. "The dead girl's parents are coming here tomorrow. Hogwarts can at least guarantee that the guy who killed their daughter will be killed." "No, it's not that," the boy roared, his voice echoing through the dimly lit passageway. "It can't. It absolutely can't." "Get out of the way," Riddle said, drawing his wand. This action immediately put Harry and the others on edge. They were looking forward to a spectacular duel, but also worried about Riddle's safety. Riddle's spell illuminated the corridor with a sudden burst of fire, which also illuminated the face of the enormous boy. "It's Hagrid!" the young wizards exclaimed in unison, but none of them wanted to believe it was true. How could it be Hagrid? The memory did not falter because of their surprise. Riddle's spell slammed Hagrid against the opposite wall, simultaneously knocking open the door behind him. A huge, hairy, low-lying body darted out quickly, so fast that its shape was almost invisible. Riddle raised his wand again, but it was too late. The monster fled in panic, knocking him to the ground, then dashed down the corridor and vanished. Ginny and Hermione were terrified, but Cyrus knew that Riddle had deliberately let the giant spider escape. The people killed by the giant spider looked completely different from those killed by the basilisk. Riddle stumbled to his feet, watching its retreating figure. He raised his wand, but Hagrid lunged at him, snatched the wand, and knocked him to the ground, shouting, "No!" Hagrid's rough voice shattered Riddle's memories. Cyrus stood silently in the dark space with several young wizards. They seemed unable to shake off the truth they had just witnessed. After a long while, Hermione frowned and tried to excuse her friend. "Mr. Riddle, could it be that you've got the wrong person? He probably didn't do it on purpose, but you know he has a thing for huge monsters," Cyrus said, trying to distract Hagrid and focus their attention on the monster. "That monster escaped back then, and maybe someone has brought it back now." But Harry opened his mouth, wanting to defend Hagrid, but knowing that Cyrus was telling the truth. During their time at Hogwarts last year, Hagrid had tried to keep a dragon in his hut, and the three-headed dog he called Fluwell was something they couldn't forget for a long time. Back then, if Hagrid, still a boy, had heard that a monster was hiding somewhere in the castle, Harry knew he would have done everything in his power to see it. Hagrid probably thought it was absurd to keep the monster imprisoned for so long and that it should be given a chance to stretch its legs. Harry could even imagine 13-year-old Hagrid wanting to put a leash and collar on the monster. But Harry also believed that Hagrid would never intentionally kill anyone. "I'm afraid that's the truth." "Ron, do you remember the book you lent me, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them?" Ginny asked. "The Ministry of Magic marks the most dangerous creatures as XXXXX. You wrote on it, or whatever Hagrid likes." Ron tried a different angle. "You sound just like Percy after all, who told you to report Hagrid," he complained. "But the monster killed people, Ron," Cyrus said, feigning helplessness. I know Hagrid is your friend, he's a good man, so Dumbledore was willing to vouch for him. But I can't just stand by and watch more attacks happen. The attacks have stopped since Hagrid was expelled. If they close Hogwarts, I'll have to go back to a Muggle orphanage. I believe you understand that my desire to stay here is understandable. Harry understood, of course. Everyone fell silent. After a long silence, Hermione hesitantly raised the most difficult question. Do you think we should ask Hagrid about this? That was a pleasant visit, Ron said. Hello, Hagrid, tell us, have you let any of those savage, hairy creatures out of the castle lately? So they decided to say nothing. Chapter 52 Staffless Spellcasting. The truth seemed to have been revealed, but it had become another secret that could not be spoken. The group felt a heavy weight in their hearts, almost unable to breathe. Except for Cyrus. He returned to the Slytherin common room, intending to find time to continue his attack plan. I remember the fourth and fifth attacks happened almost simultaneously, and it was because of these two attacks that the school was nearly forced to close, Cyrus thought. Now is not the time to close the school. We must proceed gradually, making them believe that the situation is not too serious, and ideally, allowing Dumbledore to leave the school smoothly. Things will be much easier then. We still need to keep in touch with Lucius. Cyrus muttered to himself as he sat alone on the sofa in the common room, crossing his legs. A short while later, a tall and muscular man walked over, looking from a distance like a giant green gorilla. Malfoy. Marcus Flint frowned. Why are you still here? Go practice Quidditch. If we win the match against Ravenclaw, we'll still have a chance to win. Last semester, Slytherin lost to Gryffindor in a Quidditch match, despite having the most advanced brooms and a clear advantage. However, Malfoy was so busy mocking Harry that he forgot he was still in the match and missed the chance to get the golden snitch first. Marcus Flint was very unhappy with Malfoy after that incident. But what could he do? Malfoy's father was a member of the school board, and the Slytherin brooms were donated by his family. Even if he was unhappy, he could only endure it. According to the tournament format, each house actually plays a match against the other three houses, and the final championship is determined by the scores achieved during those matches. They've lost one match, but if they surpass Ravenclaw by 300 points, they still have a chance to advance to the finals. In reality, their chances of winning are very high. The gap between brooms is difficult to bridge. The problem is that Draco Malfoy seems to have lost interest in Quidditch ever since the loss to Gryffindor. He still trains regularly, but he's not putting in any effort. Even the team's most important player, the one who seeks the ball, has this attitude, so the other players inevitably start to slack off as well. With this kind of attitude, it's really hard to win. Therefore, when Marcus saw Malfoy doing nothing, he immediately became angry and questioned him. Malfoy, I made an exception and appointed you Seeker, not so we could lose. He strode up to Cyrus, his angry face contorted like a gorilla's. Because of you, our team's Seeker is far inferior to those of other teams, and we can't possibly pull ahead of the other teams by more than 150 before the golden snitch appears, understand? If you continue with this attitude, I will definitely kick you out of the team. Marcus became more and more agitated as he spoke, and finally even stuck his finger hard into Cyrus's chest. This angered Cyrus. Snapped. Cyrus coldly slapped Marcus's hand away. Don't point fingers at me, Marcus Flint. Or do you want me to hang you on the ceiling? Not to mention that he himself dislikes being told what to do. The owner of this body, Draco, is actually his close friend. How could he let himself be bullied like this? How dare you humiliate me? Marcus's gorilla-like face immediately turned bright red. He felt humiliated. Ever since the Fight Club incident, everyone knew that he had been literally beaten up by a freshman, and he had been the subject of much ridicule. Of course, he simply used brute force to shut those people up in response to their mockery. But now, even a tiny Draco Malfoy dares to reopen his wounds and rub salt into them? So what about the Malfoy family? Who isn't a purebred of 28? Looks like I'll have to teach you a lesson, Malfoy. He said menacingly, drawing his wand. How about I cover your face in pockmarks and make your teeth longer than that mudblood from Gryffindor? Upon hearing this, Cyrus, who had been a little angry, suddenly laughed. These inherently evil Slytherin little devils are nothing special after all. The most wicked thing they could think of was just to make people grow some pockmarks. How ridiculous. You see, Cyrus had just planned to hang Marcus up first, then take off his pants and shove his head into the toilet. Then let's do as you say. What? Expelliarmus. Cyrus didn't even draw his wand. He simply unleashed a crimson beam of light with his bare hand, knocking Marcus's wand from his grasp. He casually caught the other person's wand and held it in his hand. The wand was made of blackthorn wood, and the core didn't quite resemble unicorn hair. Cyrus gave it a light shake and found it much easier to use than Draco's awkward wand. He thought the core might be a dragon's heartstring or the nerves of a dragon. Then, your front teeth are as big as a stick. A curse struck Marcus instantly, and then his two front teeth began to grow wildly, turning his once beautiful gorilla face into a rabbit's. Unfortunately, he wasn't as cute as a rabbit. Marcus was overwhelmed by the pain of teething. The ever-growing teeth forced his mouth open, rendering him unable to utter a single word. He could only let out whimpering cries. Meanwhile, others in the common room had already witnessed this scene. They panicked and rushed out to find Snape. Cyrus ignored it. He never took such a minor conflict to heart from the beginning. Instead, he mercilessly unleashed another spell at Marcus. Now, his face was covered with countless black dots, like a sky full of blooming stars. Page 35. Marcus was writhing on the ground in pain. I hope you'll learn your lesson and show me more respect next time. Cyrus no longer looked at Marcus and settled into a comfortable position on the sofa. Also, I won't be participating in Quidditch training, but I'll be there for the matches. Participating in Quidditch training is really unnecessary, since the Quidditch tournament this semester will be cancelled because of him anyway, but he does plan to participate in the tournament. Although he has no interest in Quidditch, if he doesn't participate, wouldn't Draco be kicked out of the team? He didn't want to upset his close friend. Not long after, Snape arrived with a grim expression. As soon as he entered, he saw Marcus Flint rolling on the floor, while the other young wizards circled around the culprit sitting on the sofa in terror. It's Marcus Flint again. First he was hung from the ceiling by a first-year student, and now he's being beaten to a pulp by Malfoy. However, Snape knew very well that although Marcus's grades weren't great, it was impossible to call him a complete waste. Ginny Weasley beat him because she had something wrong with her. But how could Draco Malfoy possibly have beaten him like that? Draco Malfoy knew his capabilities ever since the boy entered Hogwarts. Snape had taken great care of him, all to repay the kindness Lucius had shown him years ago. Therefore, Draco knew his own limitations better than anyone else. He's at best on par with Potter, or even a little worse, yet he managed to defeat Flint. He glanced down at the disheveled Marcus, and seeing that the man was all right, immediately called 2 classmates to take him to the school clinic. Only then did he turn to question Cyrus. What exactly happened, Malfoy? Nothing. Cyrus shrugged, looking directly into Snape's eyes. This morning I was sitting on the sofa when Flint came over and told me to go to training. I told him not to point fingers at me, and he threatened to cover my face with pockmarks and make my teeth as big as Miss Granger's. He threatened me first, Professor. That's why I retaliated in the same way. With the Expelliarmus weapon that you taught us in the duel club last time. You learned it. Snape's tone rarely carried a hint of surprise. He had only demonstrated the disarming charm once, and he hadn't expected that someone would actually learn it. Cyrus nodded. He didn't boast about his ability to cast spells without a staff. Next time something like this happens, come straight to me. He clearly knew Cyrus wasn't lying. I promised your father I'd take care of you, but don't cause me any trouble. Upon hearing this, Cyrus immediately nodded obediently. Chapter 53 Scorching Hell. Failed again. Cyrus watched as the potion in the crucible gradually turned from bright red to black, and couldn't help but feel a little annoyed. He had lost count of how many times he had failed to refine a magic stone. This didn't even include the number of failures he had simulated in his memory. I have strictly followed Nico's notes and the 22 processes summarized from other people's experiences, but the result is still failure. What secrets does the Book of Abraham still hold? What unknown variables existed when Nicholas Flamel forged the Philosopher's Stone? And what is this so-called essence? He felt a multitude of mysteries surfacing in his mind, one after another. His head felt like it was about to explode. Cyrus knew that even if he continued to think about it, he probably wouldn't get an answer and would only be wasting his time. So he immediately waved his hand, causing everything in the House of Wish-Fulfilling to disappear. Since there's no progress in alchemy for now, let's practice some magic spells first. He took out forbidden books such as the Book of the Red Dragon, the Book of Solomon, the Book of Rogier, and the Complete Book of Dark Magic. The term forbidden book refers to both the powerful and terrifying magic it contains and its obscure and difficult to understand nature. Fortunately, Cyrus's talent in this area far surpasses his talent in alchemy. The Book of the Red Dragon records a method for resurrecting the dead, but after Cyrus analyzed it, he found that it was actually just a means of creating undead corpses, and the dead who were resurrected could not be considered truly resurrected. The method of creating an infernal was something Voldemort already knew from his memories. Although the method recorded in the Book of the Red Dragon was different, and perhaps even faster, Cyrus simply disliked the necromancer's approach. Moreover, the Een corpse doesn't actually have much combat power. It's good as cannon fodder, but it's completely defenseless against a large fire. Unfortunately, most of the world's most powerful wizards are skilled in fire magic. For example, Dumbledore's ancient fairy fire and the fire god's path, Grindelwald's blue flame gas stove, and even Voldemort, from an earlier version, was a master of fiendfire. Cyrus actually wanted to create his own flame, and coincidentally, the Book of the Red Dragon recorded the demonic flames of the Red Dragon and the icy flames of the White Dragon. He planned to combine several types of magic with fiendfire, and a type of hellfire mentioned in the Book of Solomon also greatly intrigued him. Protective spells, defensive spells, apparition spells, and enemy-capturing spells can be added to the flames. Grindelwald's fire shield incorporates many spells. While its actual power isn't as terrifying as fiendfire, its applicability is far greater. The destruction of Paris is merely a side effect. Identifying his true followers is far more important. However, Cyrus said he wanted both the power and the effectiveness. And it will be even better. Inventing new magic was an interesting thing for Cyrus, although failure was inevitable. However, such failures were not true failures at most. The magic he invented did not meet his expectations. It's not failure, it's just the road to success. It's like when he tried to replicate Grindelwald's fire shield, he found that the hardest part wasn't adding those defensive spells to the flames, but rather figuring out how to make them distinguish friend from foe and only attack those who weren't loyal to him. This complex magic is like a program, starting with if statements before branching out. The instructions given to the flames, after identifying their target through the if condition, will exhibit different characteristics. Burn everything against the enemy, protect the believers, defend against all attacks. Now, Cyrus understands why the fire shield is less powerful than fiend fire. The magic of this world is closely related to the emotions of wizards. Fiend fire is the most ferocious of all fire magic. It serves no purpose other than burning, destroying, and relentlessly spreading to consume everything. It is this absolute destructive power and unwavering determination to annihilate everything that makes fiend fire so formidable. Fire shield, however, is not such magic. It is controlled. The protective power inherent in the magic forces the caster's mind to be at peace rather than driven to madness. A balance must be struck between these two different emotions. Therefore, the power of the fire shield could not possibly compare to that of the fiery blaze. However, if Cyrus had to choose, he would lean more towards the fire shield. It wasn't just because it looked cool. While the two spells differed in power, both were sufficient for simply destroying something. Bullets can accurately kill the enemy and leave hostages. There is no need to take nuclear weapons and perish together with the enemy. Inside the room of requirement, Cyrus held Flint's wand and slowly circled it like an elegant musician. Fiery blue flames ignited around him, like an outward-spreading anticyclone that gradually filled the entire interior of the room of requirement. As he walked through the flames, he felt neither the heat nor the danger. Instead, he felt as if he were strolling through a verdant field. Fire shield protection. The flickering flames resembled clusters of pale blue bellflowers swaying in the wind. Despite replicating Grindelwald's signature move, Cyrus wasn't entirely satisfied. He added many more transfiguration charms to the flames, and one after another, ghostly blue demons immediately revived from the hell of the bellflower. Next, he added 2 types of dragon fire from the Book of Red Dragons and the Hellfire and Fire Orb from the Book of Solomon to the flames. The color of the flames changed immediately. The once beautiful blue flames now looked as if they had been stained with blood, turning into the color of death. The bellflowers looked withered and dead. Blood-red datura blossoms bloom on its corpse, paving a path of fire. A completely new kind of fire magic was born in his hands. Numerous dark spells and demonic fires enhanced the power of the flames, compensating for the lack of power in the fire shield. Of course, this insufficiency can only be said to be relative. After all, it was a powerful curse that was enough to destroy Paris, so how could it really be insufficient in power? What if the spell for creating undead is also incorporated into it? Cyrus suddenly thought. Although he looked down on the undead, how would it shake the enemy's resolve if they saw their companion, who had been engulfed in flames, rise from the flames once again? Cyrus immediately opened the Book of the Red Dragon and incorporated the spell for creating an undead into it. In an instant, the terrifying incantation finally took shape. Even Cyrus himself was terrified by the evil of this curse. First, eliminate the enemy, then use their corpses to fight their former comrades. Such cruel magic would probably make even Voldemort himself a huge fan of Cyrus. Even Satan would have to offer him a cigarette. Cyrus suddenly felt a resistance to the magic, or perhaps it was a resistance to the evil hidden within his own heart. However, now that the spell has been invented, even if we don't plan to use it in the future, we should at least give it a name. I remember that Yamamoto Genryu Shijikuni Zenpakuto in Bleach seems to have a similar ability. The Bankai form, Zenka Tachi Minami, Kaka 10 Trillion Death's Great Burial Formation, is a technique that summons back the corpses of the dead. However, the name sounds a bit too awkward, so Cyrus plans to call it A Scorching Hell. Thank you for your 1,000-point donation to Mingyua Majigzu. I found a new job, but it's much harder than the last one. I can't slack off and write novels anymore, sob sob. Chapter 54. The Fourth Attack and the Overt Conspiracy. Dumbledore rushed to the school hospital without even having time to tidy his beard. A few minutes earlier, he had met Professor McGonagall's patron saint, a silver tabby cat. Minerva, Felius, how are they? From afar, he saw McGonagall, her face full of worry, and Flitwick, equally anxious, standing in the doorway. Flitwick was only about half the height of McGonagall. Lockhart was also there, unable to look away from the spotlight for even a second. Just like before, he's petrified. When McGonagall saw Dumbledore approaching, she immediately felt like she had found her pillar of support. The victim was Penelope Crivel, a Ravenclaw student and an excellent student. She was also a Ravenclaw prefect. Percy Weasley found her this morning in an empty classroom on the 4th floor, McGonagall said. Page 36. Dumbledore immediately went into the school infirmary, and the other professors quickly followed. Ms. Pomfrey was bending over, taking something from Penelope's hand. A small mirror. Dumbledore immediately guessed how Penelope had escaped from the basilisk. However, he was unaware of the attack. After Cyrus discovered that the portrait in the castle was Dumbledore's spy, he naturally refused to repeat the same mistake. He no longer allowed the basilisk to move in the corridors, but instead kept it inside the pipes, only letting it out at the moment of attack. And Cyrus himself became even better hidden. This is the 4th attack on Albus, and 3 students have been injured. McGonagall looked worried. I'm afraid this can't be contained. What's the school board saying? There's been no response yet. Dumbledore shook his head. He had initially thought the Board of Governors might be planning to close Hogwarts, but that hadn't happened. Perhaps no real murder had occurred yet, or perhaps someone felt it wasn't the right time. That would be perfect, but we still need to find the murderer. We will find her, Minerva, Dumbledore said softly. His face was almost expressionless, making it difficult to discern his true thoughts. That's right, well, find it. As long as I do it myself. Lockhart seized the opportunity and jumped out immediately, revealing his signature smile. McGonagall immediately showed a look of disgust. To be honest, under normal circumstances, even if she disliked Lockhart, she would never have been so rude. But now, with the situation so serious, Lockhart's dismissive attitude was simply annoying. Ultimately, he's still the same Gilderoy Lockhart. It's still Lockhart, the same Lockhart who, in order to attract attention, modified Death Eaters during the war years to create resurrections of the skeletons, launching his own name into the air to create panic. If I remember correctly, you were making a big fuss about the heir being driven away 2 weeks ago. Snape appeared behind Lockhart at some point, sneering. Then, ignoring Lockhart's reaction, he went straight to Dumbledore's side and whispered, Ginny Weasley didn't go anywhere this morning. She stayed with Poot and the others. But here's something I need to tell you. His voice lowered even further. In the end, he barely spoke, instead meeting Dumbledore's gaze directly. Ginny Weasley has lost something. This information immediately made things clearer for Dumbledore. After he noticed something was wrong with Ginny, he told Snape to keep a close eye on her. Now it seems that Voldemort may have noticed the surveillance and therefore took the initiative to leave Ginny Weasley's side, instead taking control of the other young wizards. And that missing item, it must be the Horcrux left behind by Voldemort. You left too many openings, Tom. Dumbledore couldn't help but think. The question, however, is what exactly is that missing item? Snape simply shook his head. Legilimency wasn't an omniscient spell. Ginny and the others' memories had been altered by Cyrus, and they couldn't recall losing anything. Snape naturally couldn't know the answer either. It seems that the other party is still very cautious. Dumbledore held the mirror he had taken from Penelope and pondered for a moment. 50 years ago, Tom Riddle took Myrtle's life without hesitation. It was actually an accident, and now, from Mrs. Laurie's to Penelope, not a single life has died at the hands of that monster. Stagnant water, a camera, a ghost, and a mirror in the bathroom. Everything seemed like a coincidence, but he knew that such coincidences were impossible in this world. The only possibility was that Tom didn't want anyone to die. Dumbledore certainly didn't believe Tom Riddle had repented or developed compassion. The only explanation was that he didn't want the school to close. 50 years ago, Dumbledore could understand why he didn't want the school to close. But what was he yearning for now? What was it about this school that attracted him? Dumbledore thought for a moment and then had the answer. Harry Potter. That's right. If there's anything that would interest Tom Riddle, it's probably only Harry Potter. When Hayhat Horcruxamihow learned from Ginny Weasley that Harry Potter had defeated the Man of Varian, he, the soul within the Horcrux, completely unaware of this, would surely wonder what kind of magic a baby possesses that could defeat Lord Voldemort. He will approach that child. The thought flashed through Dumbledore's mind. And as he pondered it, he became increasingly certain that it would happen. From the very first attack, the perpetrators consistently framed Harry for the attack. On Halloween night, Harry, who happened to be absent from the party, was the victim of the first attack. The second victim was Colin Creevey, who took numerous embarrassing photos of Harry, and the third was Justin, whom Harry was caught red-handed by Filch. All the evidence points to Harry. Tom Riddle must be trying to get Harry involved in the scandal and guide him to investigate the Chamber of Secrets and the heirs. Only in this way can they finally meet alone. And this is exactly what Dumbledore wanted. He knows what I want. But Dumbledore quickly realized this was a game of strategy. Tom Riddle was using the student's life to blackmail him, trying to eliminate him as a threat and confront the little boy. If I'm not mistaken, it probably won't be long before I have to leave Hogwarts because of some things. However, Dumbledore wasn't actually too worried. Tom believed he could win because his opponent was just a second-year wizard. But Dumbledore thought he was underestimating Harry. Chapter 55. You are quite nice. The next morning, after news of Penelope Crivel's attack spread throughout Hogwarts, the young wizards all thought Harry Potter must have gone mad. At first he only attacked those who opposed him, but now he's targeting all wizards from the Muggle world. Ernie Macmillan told everyone he knew with an air of conviction. He was almost certain Harry was the murderer and had even fabricated a story about Harry directing the monster to attack others. They also questioned why the professors didn't expel Harry. It's as if he saw it with his own eyes. Ron rolled his eyes, feeling indignant on Harry's behalf. I feel like almost all the rumors came from Ernie Macmillan. During his charms class, Cyrus deliberately slipped away from Malfoy's two henchmen and arrived a little late. With no other seats available, he could only sit behind Harry and Ron, in a row with Hermione. He deliberately wore an expression of disgust on his face to make others think he wasn't entirely willing. But behind her back, he was whispering to Hermione. Hermione blushed, remembering the Mr. Riddle she had seen in the pensive not long ago. "I'm asking you, when did you start possessing Ginny's body?" Hermione asked softly, her head lowered and her face flushed. "The first time I possessed someone was not long after the start of the semester last year. During the Quidditch match last semester, after Colin Creevey was petrified, I was in control almost the entire time until Christmas." "What's wrong?" "No, it's nothing." But Hermione's face was even redder than before. Cyrus, sitting next to her, could feel her heat. She changed the subject, nudged Harry sitting in front of her with a quill, and then tossed him a note. "What should we do? Maybe we should go find Hagrid and get to the bottom of this." "But Hagrid couldn't possibly know who opened the Chamber of Secrets this time," Harry replied reluctantly. Asking him to confront Hagrid was worse than killing him. He couldn't help but recall the last time Justin was attacked. Back then, Professor Dumbledore had taken him to the headmaster's office, and Hagrid had rushed in to speak up for him. "Hagrid trusts me so much, yet I doubt him. At least we can find out what the monster in the Chamber of Secrets is," Hermione said immediately. Like Harry, Cyrus was also unwilling to go to Hagrid. Keep in mind that his current identity is Riddle, the one who framed Hagrid and had him imprisoned. The truth of what happened back then, and Voldemort's true identity, are known to few, perhaps not even to Hagrid himself. But if two people just bump into each other like that, it's definitely not going to be a pleasant encounter. He has to stop Hermione. "Let's wait and see." He reached out and stopped the note. "There might be other ways. I'm sure the professors won't stand idly by. Hagrid didn't commit those crimes on purpose. It would be too cruel to reopen his wounds now." Harry looked at Cyrus with emotion. "Mr. Riddle, I didn't expect you to be such a nice person." Hermione still felt this wasn't right. "But what if someone else? If anyone else is killed, well, go find Hagrid," Cyrus said forcefully. "Well, get everything straight. What if someone else gets killed? We have to find Dumbledore." Fred and George rarely disagreed. "We need to get everything straight. But that would completely expose our secret," George said, frowning. "It's no different from being completely exposed now," Fred said. "Think about it, that successor stole the Marauder's map. Do you really expect him to give it back after he's used it? Now there's another victim, and a prefect no less. Look how scared Percy has been these past few days. We have to do something." George didn't say anything, but the scales in his heart had already begun to tip. Fred is right. If the heir takes their map and attacks the young wizards indiscriminately within the castle, then escapes, they'll be no different from accomplices. And the chances of getting the Marauder's map back will be virtually zero. In that case, what difference does it make whether the secret has been exposed or not? Think about it, if the clues we provide are helpful, maybe we'll become the heroes who catch the heir. Fred suddenly said. "You know Ron and his team are also looking for the killer. If we beat them to it, he'll be furious." Upon hearing this, George immediately smiled knowingly. They were happier than to see their younger brother work hard for so long only to achieve nothing. I can already picture his dejected face. George nudged Fred on the shoulder, and the two of them headed toward Professor McGonagall's office. "Professor, we have important information about the successor that we would like to report to Headmaster Dumbledore." Page 37. The heir. McGonagall's dignified face trembled slightly. She stood up and looked sternly at the two troublemakers before her. "George, Fred, I want you to understand that this is not the time for pranks. We don't have that. How can you think that way?" "That's right, Hogwarts can't find more disciplined students than us." The twins looked very hurt. "You haven't behaved properly since the first day you arrived at Hogwarts." McGonagall's eyes widened, but she still led them toward the headmaster's office. "Listen up, if you dare to joke about this, you'll write to your mothers and have them take you home for a semester to reflect on your behavior. Do not worry." Absolutely explosive. McGonagall led them to the location of the dripping stone statue and gave them the password. "Today's password is Jelly Slug. You can go up yourselves." McGonagall clasped her hands together in front of her, watching the spiral elevator rise solemnly. George and Fred immediately took the elevator up. They were clearly very excited. The elevator lifted them both up, and as the doors slowly opened, a spacious and beautiful circular room immediately appeared before their eyes. The room was filled with all sorts of funny little noises. On the long-legged tables sat many strange and unusual silver objects, spinning and emitting wisps of smoke. The walls were covered with portraits of former headmasters, men and women, all gently snoring in their respective frames. There was also a huge table in the room with claw-shaped legs. Dumbledore, who was lying on the table, looked up at them in surprise. "What advice do you two have for me?" Fred and George had to turn their attention away from the novelties in the principal's office. "We have something important to report to you, sir. About that successor. Happy weekend everyone. I managed to sneak home today." Chapter 56 7 Secret Passages. An important matter. Dumbledore looked even more surprised than before. He had been sitting there pondering what Ginny Weasley's lost item might be, or rather, what the Horcrux might be. He hadn't expected two guests to arrive. "Do I have to say it now?" "We think it's best to say this before the next attack happens." The twins shrugged simultaneously. This clearly piqued Dumbledore's interest, and according to the twins, it seemed to be related to the attack. Perhaps the doubts that are troubling you right now are about to be resolved. Please have a seat, gentlemen. He stood up and personally poured them a cup of black tea. I think I can listen to you recount the events slowly, preferably without missing any details. This matter is also somewhat related to our sister. Professor, you may not know this, but her dormitory was recently burglared. Something very important was stolen. It is a magical item. Fred and George talked back and forth. Oh, I've just heard about it. Dumbledore smiled. So, you know what she's lost. Who would have thought that the question that you were pondering without any clue just a moment ago would now be answered right in front of you? That evil thing. Horcruxes. They're about to reveal their true colors. Dumbledore's eyes gleamed with anticipation, but his expression remained largely unchanged. Of course we know that it was originally ours, the twins said in unison, but this only puzzled Dumbledore. Your stuff. When have Horcruxes ever been in their possession again? It can't really be considered ours, but we did discover its secret. He sat up straight and emphasized again, please explain in detail. The twins had no choice but to start their story from the beginning again. So, you found a Marauder's map when you were in your first year, and it could mark the location of everyone in the castle, right? Dumbledore finally understood what the twins wanted to talk about. It wasn't the Horcrux he imagined, but another magical artifact that could be called great. Moreover, this is indeed a very important piece of intelligence. Yes. Even my name? Dumbledore asked again, confirming. Everyone's name. Fred and George nodded in unison. Made by Bigfoot, Prongs, Moonface, and Wormtail, they were such good guys. They made this map especially for us who are determined to break the rules. But now this map has probably fallen into the hands of that successor. That's right. Ginny wanted to use the map to find the attacker, but not long after, her dorm room was burglared, Fred said. We were worried that if the attacker used the map, he could launch the attack more effectively. Or hide yourself, George added. Your concerns are quite valid, Dumbledore agreed wholeheartedly. I'm glad you're willing to share this important secret with an old man like me. His eyes gleamed. After hearing the twins' words, he already knew who had made the map. He just hadn't expected Remus Lupin and his 3 companions to possess such abilities. A magical artifact that even he himself was invisibly marked. What would happen if Riddle got his hands on this map? He could always check his location to ensure he could choose the right path and leave Hogwarts safely. Who will be able to find him then? Let me confirm again, can the Marauder's map only mark the locations of people inside the castle? That's right, Fred replied. However, we also found that the map does not mark every location inside the castle. For example, the location of the secret room is not shown on it. Clearly, the 4 raiders haven't found the location of the secret chamber either. Hogwarts always has a surprising number of secrets. Dumbledore smiled. Then, could you tell me what secret passages are available if one wants to leave the castle? There are 7 in total. Filch knows 4 of them, but we don't think the attacker would care about Filch, they said. The remaining 3 are, one behind the mirror on the 5th floor, one behind the statue of the one-eyed old woman, and both lead directly to the Honeyduke cellar. We usually used these 2 when we sneaked out before. Hey, George. Fred smacked George on the head. Sorry, I let it slip. Don't worry, I won't punish you for this, Dumbledore laughed. I think sometimes a little adventure is necessary to make life interesting, isn't it? A true friend. I can't agree with this anymore. The twins exclaimed in exaggerated excitement. The last one, we estimate not many people have used it. It's located near the Hitting Man Willow, but if the successor is strong enough, he might not care much about the Hitting Man Willow, as long as he doesn't care about making a big fuss, they said. Dumbledore knew this passage better than anyone else. He was the one who planted that beating willow, and the passageway beneath it was also prepared by him for a special student. The twins believed that the Chamber of Secrets was guarded by the dangerous Whomping Willow, and that the heir to the Chamber of Secrets could not possibly escape from there, but Dumbledore thought the exact opposite. Killing the Whomping Willow would be a piece of cake for Riddle. Besides, the Dark Lord couldn't possibly be unaware of how to subdue it. Simply touching the scar on the Whomping Willow would silence the terrifying tree. I must say, the information you gave me is extremely important. It may directly determine whether we can capture the attacker in the end. Dumbledore expressed his gratitude without reservation. It was nothing, the twins said, pleased that they could help. In return, I think I can promise you that if I find that map, it will be returned to you. And I will keep this secret until you graduate. Dumbledore winked playfully. Really? Real? After seeing Fred and George off, the ease on Dumbledore's face vanished instantly. He returned to his chair and began to ponder. Which secret passage would you choose to leave? Or, can you beat that boy? Chapter 57 I'm the Captain. No further attacks occurred until March. The mandrakes, which had become quiet and withdrawn, started making a ruckus again, holding a lively and noisy dance in the 3rd greenhouse, which pleased Professor Sprout very much. It's estimated that they will be fully mature in another month or 2. At that time, those who have been petrified will finally be able to awaken. Cyrus was also quite happy. As time went by, the resurrection seemed to be just around the corner. His inner joy made his guardian deity slowly take shape. It wasn't very clear, but you could still tell that it was a huge flying bird. Page 38. Once the mandrake matures, I can steal a leaf, and after resurrection, I can try to transform into an animagus. Voldemort wasn't an animagus. He looked down on such useless techniques. He didn't even consider magical creatures a threat, let alone ordinary animals. But Cyrus didn't see it that way. An unregistered animagus was practically a symbol of freedom. Early in the morning, Cyrus sat in his Slytherin seat, eating breakfast while reading the letter from Lucius Malfoy. During this time, he communicated with Lucius in Malfoy's voice, and occasionally urged Lucius to act faster in Riddle's name. However, the Hogwarts Board of Trustees said that the family's influence was no less than that of the Malfoy family, and this was not something that could be accomplished quickly. Not to mention he also needed to find the right opportunity to work with Cyrus to put pressure on the Ministry of Magic, so that they would be forced to send Hagrid to Azkaban for a few days. Actually, when Cyrus was using Ginny's body to be with Hagrid, he still really liked that big guy. However, in order to be resurrected, he had no choice but to make him suffer a little. Azkaban is great. The people there speak nicely, and use foul language, and they are all talented in dark magic. Cyrus convinced himself and picked up a fork, speared a piece of sausage, and stuffed it into his mouth. What, Azkaban? Why are you still sitting here? Isn't today your Slytherin team playing Ravenclaw? Ginny couldn't help but run over and ask as she saw him sitting alone, slowly eating. Normally, she wouldn't care about the Slytherin team's wins or losses, but things are different now. Mr. Riddle has become Slytherin's seeker, and although the rest of the Slytherin are very awful, Ginny still hopes that Cyrus can win the game. Quidditch? Cyrus raised an eyebrow, only then remembering that there was such a thing. Not long ago, Marcus Flint even asked him to train specifically for this. I simply forgot. He stood up. No wonder there were so few people eating breakfast today. Although Cyrus wasn't particularly interested in Quidditch, he had finally managed to travel to this magical world and possess Draco's body, so not experiencing Quidditch would feel like something was missing. Besides, if he missed this opportunity, he probably wouldn't have another chance. The main focus is on the user experience. The two walked toward the Quidditch pitch, where most of the students were already seated. Many had brought binoculars. The seats were practically raised halfway up the wall, but it was still sometimes difficult to see the game clearly. Are you nervous? Ginny opened her mouth and asked softly. Looking at so many spectators, even her heart felt like it was in her throat. What's there to be nervous about? Cyrus shook his head easily. The game between him and Dumbledore could be fatal if he wasn't careful. That's what's nerve-wracking. Quidditch? It's just a little relaxation. They parted ways at the entrance, with Cyrus heading straight for the Slytherin team's locker room. The game wasn't until around 11 a.m., but by now, all the players were there, including the Seeker. Now, Terrence Higgs, the Seeker from last year, is looking at Cyrus with a surprised expression, as if he never expected him to be here. Then, the surprise turns to fear. Malfoy, you what happened? Terrence Higgs stammered, his grip on the broom tightening involuntarily, sweat beading on his palms. Marcus Flint, now the captain, appeared even more flustered. Ever since Cyrus gave him a sound beating in the Slytherin common room, few wizards in Slytherin dared to mess with Cyrus. After all, he was powerful enough, and with Headmaster Snape's protection, he could get away with beating someone without consequence. It was Marcus who said you wouldn't play Quidditch anymore, so Terrence stammered, shifting the blame onto Marcus without hesitation, though what he actually said was pretty much true. Cyrus then set his sights on Marcus. I told you I would participate. Is your hearing not very good? Cyrus drew his wand, which was originally Marcus, but now belonged to him. Do you want me to heal you? Upon seeing him pick up his wand, the entire group took a step back in fear, trembling and desperately hiding behind the thin broom handle as if it could conceal their figures. But you don't come to training, Marcus could only say, forcing himself to speak. But I said I would come. Cyrus snatched the broom from Terrence's hand without any hesitation. Sorry, I'll go first this time, you can go next time. After giving these little snakes a tiny bit of a shock from the Dark Lord, Cyrus stopped teasing them. He was deliberately creating this unreasonable image. If he didn't let these hooligans know the pain, they wouldn't understand his power. Cyrus didn't want any more trouble. It's a bit of a shame for Terrence Higgs, he's a handsome young man, but unfortunately he had to hand over Nimbus 2001 before he could even get used to it. Alright, now I'll take command. Cyrus was in exceptionally high spirits. It's a bit like experiencing a roller coaster or bungee jumping. Although he's not that interested in Quidditch, it's a rare opportunity to participate, so he'll still find it somewhat interesting. And since he's participating, he wants to win. Wait, I'm the captain, Marcus shouted hurriedly, but before he could finish speaking, his mouth seemed to go silent, and he couldn't utter a single syllable. Not anymore. Without turning his head, Cyrus said, I will lead you to victory. By the way, who are the players on the Ravenclaw team? Thank you for your 1,000 coin reward to Minghua Majigzu and your 300 coin reward to Xian Shaidai. Thank you, my darlings. Chapter 58. Ginny, the simp should calm down. You're finally here, Ginny. Hermione stood up and waved to the belated Ginny. They sat at the farthest point in the stands, where the view was best. Although it was a bit far, they were able to see the game clearly thanks to the binoculars provided by Hagrid. "You're so slow, Ginny," Ron muttered unhappily. "Where have you been?" "Look, Malfoy's gone," Ginny said, sitting down next to Hermione. "He really forgot it's Quidditch match today." "I knew it. He didn't seem interested in Quidditch at all," Hermione said with an unsurprising expression. "He's much more enthusiastic about studying than Quidditch. The books he reads are ones I can't even understand, especially alchemy and runes. You two should learn from him." The last sentence was addressed to Ron and Harry. Harry gave an awkward laugh, while Ron immediately changed the subject. "To be honest, I never dreamed I'd be cheering for Slytherin in my life. If someone had told me this last year, I would have slapped them to wake them up. But if Slytherin really wins, Harry, you'll have to face their Nimbus 2001 again," he said with great concern, seemingly on the verge of immediately booing Slytherin. "What are you saying? Mr. Riddle is our friend," Ginny blurted out in anger, but fortunately, there were nearly 1,000 spectators, almost 800 of whom were cheering for Ravenclaw, and the cheers were getting louder and louder, so no one heard what they were saying. Harry wasn't worried at all, saying, "The chances of winning are slim. Quidditch isn't just about having a good broom. As far as I know, Malfoy hasn't participated in a single training session, has he? I think he just wants to experience Quidditch. After all, it's a rare opportunity, so let's cheer him on." Hearing him say that, Ginny and Hermione started to worry that Cyrus might embarrass himself. "Don't worry," Ron saw their mood, "no one can fly worse than Malfoy anyway." All four of them burst into laughter at the same time. Malfoy's flying skills were actually quite good, a little worse than Harry's, but better than most people's. It's just that he was less focused on the competition and more on competing with Harry. His eyes were practically glued to Harry's body. What was the point of even looking for the golden snitch? "Look, the Ravenclaw team is coming out," Hermione suddenly said. Harry immediately craned his neck to look in that direction. He remembered that the Ravenclaw team's seeker was a girl. He hadn't really noticed it last year, but the more he saw her recently, the cuter she seemed. "How good is the Ravenclaw team?" Hermione asked. She wasn't particularly enthusiastic about Quidditch. She didn't watch any matches last year except for Harry's. "Not bad, at least in the top 4 of all the teams at Hogwarts," Harry said earnestly, a rather tactful statement. In reality, Ravenclaw's overall strength was indeed somewhat weaker than the others, but the actual gap between the 4 teams was quite small. Hedgehog and Ravenclaw have never been considered favorites to win the title. If Slytherin hadn't resorted to underhanded tactics, they still had a chance to win, Harry said, speaking from Cho Chang's perspective. "She's really cute, isn't she?" "Simp, shut up. Don't forget who we're here to cheer for. Besides, if you like her that much, why didn't you confess to her on Valentine's Day?" Ginny patted Harry on the back of the head, waving past Hermione, snapping him out of his infatuation. "If I had confessed to her back then, I would have had no hope at all," Harry muttered, scratching his head. He now feels a little nostalgic for the shy Ginny from that summer. On the field, Roger Davis, the captain of the Ravenclaw team and the Pirate King, solemnly told his subordinates, "Be careful, Slytherin players are all thugs, be careful not to get hurt. They even changed their brooms this year. I think we're doomed," Chaser Jeremy Slayton said, shaking his head in frustration. "Don't think like that. At least we know their seeker is terrible," Cho Chang said with a laugh. "If Harry Potter could win, so can we. And we can win even more spectacularly." "That's right," Roger nodded. "Zhang, you focus all your efforts on finding the golden snitch. Jason, Duncan, your job is to protect Zhang and prevent the Slytherins from doing anything underhanded. Randolph, Jeremy, the 3 of us will go all out on the attack and try to score as many points as possible. Grant, guard the goal." "That sounds pretty easy," Jason said. "Come on, he just went through each of our roles," Jeremy said helplessly. "The Slytherin team is out too," someone said. Everyone on the Ravenclaw team immediately looked in the distance and sure enough, they saw a row of lush green rapeseed standing together. To their surprise, Marcus Flint, who should have been at the front, was now tucked in at the very back. Conversely, Malfoy, who had lost to Harry in the last match, was at the very front. His white hair shone in the sunlight, making him look like a bald man. "Malfoy. What's going on? Slytherin got a new captain. It really comes down to the power of money. If my dad could equip the entire Ravenclaw team with Nimbus 2001, would I be able to become captain too?" Randolph said enviously. "Shut up." Roger wanted nothing more than to whip him with a broom. But honestly, if the other side could really get their hands on 7 Nimbus 2001s, then giving up the captaincy wouldn't be a big deal. But that was clearly impossible. With a formidable enemy at hand, there's no need to waste time on such pointless nonsense. At this moment, Mrs. Hooch was already standing in the center of the field, with a whistle around her neck and her right arm raised high, signaling the 2 teams to move closer to her. Roger, naturally very familiar with the Quidditch routine, led his team over. Cyrus, on the other side, also moved to Mrs. Hodge's side after being reminded by the other team members. "Listen, I want everyone to compete fairly and honestly." She seemed to be speaking specifically to Marcus Flint, because when she noticed that Marcus was unusually standing at the very back of the line, she gave him a rather strange look. Page 39. Then, attention turned to Cyrus. The Malfoy brats. Well, she's still someone who needs to be warned. I'll say it again, be fair and honest. I'm the fairest, Cyrus said, raising his chin. Very good, then please hop on your flying brooms. Cyrus rides Malfoy's Nimbus 2001. Ms. Hodge blew her silver whistle with all her might. It's Monday, time to go to work. I haven't been slacking off, this chapter is scheduled for release. Chapter 59 Malfoy, our king. The game is on. 15 brooms shot out at once. The Slytherin team was clearly much faster than the Ravenclaws. However, speed is only one aspect. Agility is what truly tests a Quidditch player's ability. Cyrus cheated from the start by casting a senses charm on himself, allowing him to locate the golden snitch without using his eyes. This ensured that he wouldn't miss it due to blind spots when it appeared. It's not entirely cheating, since the Quidditch rules only prohibit the use of wands, not magic. However, wizards who can cast spells without a wand are rare, let alone more complex spells like the senses charm. Once you have God's eye view, Quidditch becomes much easier. He flew straight to the top of the field, almost as if he were leaving the game. Taking advantage of their broomsticks, the other Slytherin players quickly launched a powerful attack. For Ravenclaw to win the game, they had to prevent Slytherin from scoring as much as possible and catch the golden snitch before the score gap widened to 150 points. Zhang Qiu's task was very difficult because Adrian Pusey had already hit their basket with the quaffle and scored 10 points. Marcus then launched an attack, and this time goalkeeper Grant saved the quaffle, but Randolph failed to intercept Slytherin's third chaser, Graham, and Slytherin scored another 10 points. The match was very tense. The gap in the broomsticks made it difficult for Ravenclaw's chasers to catch the ball, which was always intercepted by Marcus and his two teammates halfway through the game. Zhang Qiu frantically darted around in the air. She couldn't find any trace of the golden snitch, because the snitch hadn't appeared yet. Zhang Qiu looked up at Cyrus, who seemed quite relaxed in the sky, and couldn't help but feel extremely annoyed. Is this guy even here to compete? In her view, Cyrus was simply tanking at this moment, not even bothering to look for the golden snitch. Did he really think that Slytherin's team could pull ahead of Ravenclaw by 150 points before she caught the golden snitch and ended the game? That's incredibly disrespectful. This is utter contempt for their Ravenclaw team. But soon, she preferred that Cyrus stay in the sky and not move around. Faced with Slytherin's fierce attack, Roger adopted a different counterattack tactic: the Parkin Claw. He and Jeremy approached Adrian from both flanks, blocking his retreat, while Randolph crouched low and charged straight at Adrian from the front, forcing him to abandon his quaffle. It's very risky for 3 players to block 1 player, because Slytherin still has 2 chaser players who will be unguarded. But Roger had no other choice. If Ravenclaw didn't score soon, the gap between the two teams would only widen. Now he could only pin his hopes on the rest of the team, hoping that goalkeeper Grant could hold the goal, or that the 2 batters could use the running ball to intercept Slytherin's attack. His 2 hitters were incredibly effective. Jason and Duncan combined for a double hit, greatly enhancing the power of the walk. The rapidly flying ball crashed into Graham, who had originally come to help Adrian. Graham quickly ducked, but the ball didn't pass over his head. Instead, it hit the broom's tail, causing him to lose his balance and fall to the ground like a tumbling pebble. The tense scene immediately drew gasps from the audience, and even though most people disliked Slytherin's behavior, they couldn't help but worry about Graham's safety. If someone falls from that height, they'll at least break a few ribs, and if they're not careful, it's not impossible for them to break their cervical spine and die on the spot. Even Jason and Duncan were a little worried. However, as Graham was about to crash headfirst to the ground, few people reacted in shock, and Mrs. Hooch, acting as referee, remained a mere figurehead as always. Only Dumbledore rose from the platform, silently raised his right hand, and uttered half a spell. Damping. Then, a bolt of green lightning struck down instantly, severing his spell and piercing through the sharp cacophony of screams. Cyrus swooped down at an almost straight angle, pushing the Nimbus 2001's performance to its limit. In fact, even the speed of the sweeping series brooms is sufficient for most matches. No player is capable of flying at full speed on a narrow field because they can't stop. With each upgrade to the flying broomstick, the increase in speed is secondary for Quidditch players. Optimization of acceleration, agility, braking ability, balance, and so on are what players value most. But now, Cyrus is driving the last glory of the Nimbus series, pushing the speed to the limit. All anyone could see was a green shadow that was moving too fast to make out, the Slytherin green robes trailing long behind him like a green snake. To put it bluntly, he only needs to blink, and he'll crash into the solid ground of the playground at nearly 150 km per hour. Then he'll know, I should say Malfoy's body will turn into a delicious Malfoy biscuit. The wind that lashed at my face felt like a slap, making my cheek sting. In a flash, Cyrus had already grabbed Graham's arm, casting several shock-absorbing spells to prevent tearing it off. At that moment, his pupils were completely obscured by the green grass. The tip of the broom was almost touching the ground. They're going to crash. Cyrus gritted his teeth and forcefully twisted the broom head with his other hand, pulling it backward as if he were tugging on the control stick of an airplane, his whole body leaning back. Click. A crisp sound. The tip of the Nimbus 2001 left a mark on the ground, and the front of the broom broke off. The polished broom handle flew out and broke a beam. Then, Cyrus completed an extreme spin, and the flying broom, which had shortened in length, soared into the sky once again. He successfully rescued Graham. For about half a minute, the entire arena was silent, as if someone had used magic to block out all the sounds. Then came cheers that resounded through the clouds. Even the Gryffindor wizards, who were always at odds with Slytherin, went berserk. George and Fred, setting aside their prejudices, stomped on the heads of the two unknown wizards in front of them, waving their arms and shouting, "Malfoy, our king!" Harry and Ron were dumbfounded. "I had no idea he could fly so well. He could totally join a Quidditch team and win the World Championship," Ron said admiringly. "World Champion?" Wood appeared out of nowhere, his eyes shining. "No, he's going down in history. What does a World Champion count for? If this were in Japan, he'd be a Quidditch master at the top." Thank you to reader 1338459675374563328 for the 10,000 point reward. Thank you, my darling. Chapter 60 Unexpected Events and Victory. Malfoy, our king. Malfoy, our king. Malfoy, our king. History will remember this day forever. The Quidditch fans were screaming, and Professor McGonagall nearly fainted. This enthusiasm immediately infected many of the younger wizards who weren't so passionate about Quidditch. Even Hermione thought Cyrus was incredibly cool. If there was anything that made her feel a little regretful, it was that Cyrus was using Malfoy's face. If it were Mr. Riddle himself, she would have loved to write him a love letter on the spot. Compared to the excited audience, the players on the field were very quiet. Graham broke out in a cold sweat, thanking Cyrus with a mixture of fear and gratitude. "Thank you, Malfoy. Don't worry about it, it's our turn to fight back." Cyrus slapped him hard on the shoulder, and the two of them rose into the air at the same time. The broomstick, now shorter, was a little unbalanced, but it would still be fine after the match. Jason and Duncan flew over, looking apologetic. "Sorry, Graham. Don't worry about it, you didn't break any rules," Cyrus said before Graham could get angry. Hearing him say that, Graham naturally felt embarrassed to throw a tantrum, but he was determined to teach Ravenclaw a lesson. After confirming it was a false alarm, Madame Huichi breathed a sigh of relief and blew her silver whistle. The game continues. The 14 players on the field started moving around again. This time, Cyrus didn't continue watching from the sidelines, he was getting bored staying in the air. At that moment, he gripped the broken end of the broom handle with both hands, subtly altering the broom's trajectory. He was merely the seeker, unable to score with the quaffle, though the rules of Quidditch didn't explicitly forbid the seeker from attempting to catch the quaffle. This scene would simply be impossible in other games. No seeker fails to search for the golden snitch, yet follows the quaffle everywhere. Page 40. Unless he doesn't want to win. Cyrus saw that Randolph had snatched the quaffle from Adrian, and he immediately rushed out to close in on his opponent from the left. Zhang Qiu thought he had discovered the trail of the golden thief, so he followed without hesitation. Seekers always have blind spots and sometimes can't spot the thief, so they need to be constantly aware of their opponent's every move. Therefore, when she noticed Cyrus starting to move, she didn't hesitate to follow him. Cyrus noticed her immediately. The real-life Cho Chang is much cuter than the one in the movie, and now Cyrus can understand why Harry was so captivated by her. She was indeed a lovely little girl, with delicate skin, a small nose, and almond-shaped eyes that shimmered like a dark lake under the sunlight. She possessed the gentle elegance of an Eastern woman, but her personality was not as fragile as she appeared. Upon noticing Cyrus's actions, she immediately crouched low and rushed over, intending to bump Cyrus's shoulder with her own, attempting to knock him off his original flight path. However, she did not succeed. With his extrasensory charm activated, Cyrus sensed the changes in the airflow behind him and the sound of his opponent breaking through the air as he flew, without even looking. Therefore, at the instant Zhang Qiu crashed into him, Cyrus immediately flipped upside down, his body tilting downwards. He became Zhang Qiu's reflection in the mirror of the sky, the two of them pressed tightly together. This way of flying was unheard of, but Zhang Qiu had no time to think about anything else. She peered ahead anxiously, searching for a golden shadow, but all she saw was emptiness. "Where is the golden snitch? Golden snitch? Who told you there was a snitch here?" Cyrus, hanging upside down, said strangely. "The golden snitch has appeared. My psychic spell is malfunctioning." They didn't even notice the golden thief had appeared. "If there's no thief, why did you suddenly accelerate and fly this way?" Zhang Qiu shouted in frustration. She had been tense for a long time, but she didn't expect it to be just a feint by the other party. "Nobody says you can't fly around here." Cyrus curled his lip. He already understood why Zhang Qiu had suddenly surrounded him. "I just wanted to disrupt your chaser's attack." These words made Zhang Qiu very angry. Cyrus's behavior was not a foul, but for the opposing seeker to not focus on the golden snitch was a sign of looking down on him and thinking that he couldn't find the golden snitch. She lowered her head and glared angrily at Cyrus with her bright black eyes. But amidst her anger, she couldn't help but admire Cyrus's flying skills. Even he had to admit that Cyrus's performance in this game was amazing. Whether it was the extreme spin just now or the inverted flight now, he was completely different from Malfoy in the last game. Of course, there were indeed two people involved. She was very curious about how much rigorous training Malfoy had undergone to achieve such success. She couldn't help but feel ashamed of having underestimated her opponent before going on the field. She even felt a little admiration for him. With Malfoy's current flying ability, it wouldn't be surprising if he became a world-renowned Quidditch star someday. Maybe I should ask him for an autograph after the match. Zhang Qiu was filled with thoughts, but the most important thing right now was the competition itself. Cyrus's shadow-like flight made her feel very uncomfortable. Although the two barely made any contact, Zhang Qiu felt bound. She immediately pulled up the broom handle to break free from this flight pattern that resembled that of a parallel planet and satellite. At this point, the score gap between the two teams was widening. Slytherin has scored again. Lee Jordan shouted enthusiastically. The score is now 90-20, Slytherin is leading by 70-80 points. Marcus Flint has scored again. I didn't expect Slytherin to actually have some skill if they just played well and didn't foul. It seems Mr. Malfoy's generous broomstick really did help them a lot. Plum. McGonagall yelled in dissatisfaction. Lee immediately stopped criticizing Slytherin and continued his commentary. As you can see, Cho Chang broke free from Malfoy's upside-down flight. This flight method put a lot of pressure on her. It was really amazing. But doesn't Malfoy get dizzy being upside down the whole time? Will Zhang Qiu be able to snatch the golden snitch before the score gap exceeds 150 points? The golden snitch hasn't appeared yet, but it has. Malfoy has found it. They're flying upwards, and Zhang Qiu is following. Lee suddenly made everyone's hearts jump. On the field, a green shadow shot into the sky like a rocket, and everyone couldn't help but look up. A bright, dazzling light made them dizzy. The sunlight was too bright. Is there really a golden snitch? Hermione and Ron looked up, but couldn't see anything. Harry squinted and spotted a dark shadowy figure trembling in the distance. Though he couldn't make it out clearly, he was certain it was the snitch. That's incredible. If we hadn't seen him fly by, who would have noticed where the thief was? He exclaimed. He'll be the greatest seeker in the world. He won't. Ginny shook her head. Mr. Riddle won't make Quidditch his career, Harry. It doesn't mean much to him. Harry didn't quite understand what that meant. Career, such a word is still too far away for him. But Harry couldn't understand how Quidditch could be meaningless. He felt it was probably the most interesting thing in the world. Moreover, Quidditch was his specialty, and he felt a sense of purpose through it. They can understand the joy people feel when they cheer for them. This is different from the fact that people call him the boy who survived and believe that he killed Voldemort. He couldn't accept that kind of praise with a clear conscience. He had no idea what happened that night, especially since his parents had been murdered. It was never a pleasant experience for him. He was momentarily dazed, then was jolted awake by a cry of alarm. Everyone looked tense. What happened? Ginny and Hermione were too anxious to speak, and Ron gripped Harry's forearm tightly in his anxiety. The broom is broken. What? Harry quickly snatched the binoculars from Hermione's hand. Through the lens, he saw the broom that Cyrus was holding shaking violently, as if it was about to fall apart. It must have malfunctioned when we were rescuing people. To be honest, it's a miracle that it can still fly. He has to stop. Hermione cried out, her face drained of color from her panic. Stop. You're mistaken. He's still accelerating. Ron exclaimed as if he'd seen a ghost. He's insane. If the broom falls apart at that height, he'll fall to his death. Upon hearing this, Ginny nearly fainted. We have to stop the game. Hermione stood up and rushed towards Dumbledore. But there were too many young wizards. Everyone stood up, blocking the way completely. Her broomsticks would probably give way before she even left Gryffindor's position. Cyrus was naturally more aware of his situation than anyone else. The flying broom malfunctioned, and this couldn't be easily fixed with a simple repair spell. Even if it could, Cyrus couldn't possibly cast such a spell, far beyond Malfoy's level, in full view of everyone. But to make him give up the competition, Cyrus's inner competitive spirit was not allowed. After all, he was a transmigrator, and he had possessed Old Foo's soul. Wouldn't it be ridiculous if he lost to a little girl? Moreover, the broom might not actually be able to withstand the strain, and even if it did, there was nothing for him to fear. First, Dumbledore couldn't possibly stand by and watch the school board's son fall and get injured. Second, even if Dumbledore remained indifferent, Cyrus had plenty of ways to save his own life. Although the flight spell is inconvenient to use, reducing the impact and adjusting the landing posture will at most break one hand. In the magical world, breaking an arm is no different from getting a scrape. Besides, it's not him who feels the pain. Therefore, even though he realized that the broom could not hold on any longer, he continued to speed up. Faster. The image of the thief became clearer and clearer in Cyrus's pupils. It seems like you can get it just by reaching out your hand. He reached out his hand and lunged forward, but his fingertips missed the thief. The arms are too short. He forgot that this body belonged to Draco Malfoy. The broom he was riding on, due to this small movement, completely lost its balance and began to shake violently and wildly like a wild horse. Cyrus cast several spells to make himself feel less bumpy. But when he exerted force with his right foot, he accidentally broke the broom's footrest. One of the metal foot pedals fell off and almost hit Zhang Qiu, who was chasing after them. "You have to slow down, Malfoy," Zhang Qiu shouted. Cyrus's broomstick was frightening to look at. After losing a pedal, even the broom bristles on its tail were starting to loosen. Cyrus ignored him. "Malfoy, stop right now." The two rushed into a huge cloud. Even the damaged Nimbus 2001 was faster than the old antique in Zhang Qiu's hands. She couldn't catch up with Cyrus and lost sight of him in the clouds. "He's crazy." Nearly 1,000 teachers and students looked up at the sky with bated breath, but there was nothing there except for the blinding sunlight and thick clouds. Then the clouds broke apart. A dark shadow crashed down. Dumbledore saw it very clearly. It was Malfoy. Malfoy's performance today was far beyond his expectations. It was outstanding. They're so outstanding it's almost abnormal. Page 41. Is this still Malfoy? However, Dumbledore didn't suspect that Malfoy was the one who stole the Horcrux and was controlled by Tom Riddle. Because he knew Tom too well. Tom would never be overly conspicuous without ensuring his own safety. And, Tom Riddle couldn't possibly save anyone. Cyrus's act of saving Graham completely cleared him of suspicion. The Dark Lord only takes lives. How could he possibly save anyone? Watching the rapidly falling figure, Dumbledore raised his arm once more. Shock reduction and speed stop. Cyrus felt as if a gentle force was lifting him up from behind, as if he were being gently slammed onto a wool pad, his descent slowing down. He immediately knew that it was Dumbledore who had made the move. So he simply stopped caring about anything and let himself fall to the ground. Lady Hodge blew her silver whistle and swooped down. Cyrus immediately took out the golden snitch he was holding. Then he was carried into the school clinic by a large group of people, who cheered as if they were celebrating their own hospitalization. Just one chapter today, but it's 4,000 words, hee hee. Chapter 61 The Quiet Night. Cyrus's injury was more serious than he had imagined. In Ms. Pomfrey's own words, "This arm is more broken than tea leaves from a divination session. To put it another way, it's like a noodle that's been squeezed for more than 10 minutes. Ginny and Hermione had intended to come and visit him immediately, but Harry and Ron stopped them. They didn't want to be crammed in with so many Slytherins. "I think you're worrying too much, Ginny. Don't forget, it's Malfoy who's injured," not Ron. Raised an eyebrow. Ginny immediately realized what was happening. "Yes, Malfoy is injured. What does that have to do with Mr. Riddle?" Now, Ginny and Hermione weren't in a hurry anymore. It was Malfoy who was unlucky anyway, so what did it matter? If Mr. Riddle hadn't been in control of Malfoy's body, they'd even been thinking of setting off fireworks to celebrate. But he flies really well. What will you do if Slytherin makes it back to the finals? Ron was a little worried. "Don't worry, he's not planning to play a second match," Ginny said. She knew that Mr. Riddle was only playing Quidditch for the experience, not because he actually liked it. Harry was initially relieved, but then felt a strong sense of frustration. The mere thought of competing against them made him shudder. The feeling of being utterly defeated in what he considered his area of expertise was far from pleasant. Afterwards, they waited until the Slytherin team members left the infirmary before visiting Cyrus, but left quickly. However, the person who visited Cyrus next was completely unexpected by Cyrus. "Are you all right?" Zhang Qiu walked in with some food. Cyrus glanced at it and saw that it was pumpkin pie. "I just ran into Diggory from Hufflepuff, and he gave me some pumpkin pie. I figured you probably hadn't eaten anything either, so I brought some with me," Zhang Qiu explained. She looked very shy, completely different from her demeanor on the field. "Thank you, I'm actually quite hungry." Cyrus happily picked up the pumpkin pie and started eating. He had already eaten a hasty breakfast and had engaged in strenuous exercise, so he was starving. But when Harry and the Slytherin team came to see him, not a single one of them brought any food. "It's nothing serious with your hand," Ms. Pomfrey said. "It should be fully recovered by tonight." "That's good." Zhang Qiu was silent for a moment. "You flew really well today, and that sloth tumbled over the tree, it was spectacular. No one can keep up for that long and keep in sync with my movements." "Thank you," Cyrus replied while eating. However, he could clearly sense that the atmosphere was a bit awkward. The cute girl's shyness made him feel awkward too. After a while, Zhang Qiu finally mustered up her courage and said forcefully, "Could you give me an autograph?" "What? An autograph?" Cyrus was surprised that the other party would make such a request. Has his identity as the Dark Lord been exposed? Wait a minute, the Dark Lord has no worshippers whatsoever. Even if such a person existed, they would be an inherently evil Slytherin wizard. "What are you, a Ravenclaw and a member of the DA, doing here? I think you could become a great Quidditch player someday. So, it would be great to get your autograph in advance," Zhang Qiu said, blushing slightly. She was still a little shy, but once she said it, she realized it wasn't so difficult after all. "Which team will you join? The Chadley Cannons haven't been doing very well, and what about the Irish teams?" "Sorry," Cyrus interrupted Cho Zhang, "I have no intention of becoming a Quidditch star." "Oh," Zhang Qiu paused for a moment, then laughed. "I can understand, but it's a real pity. You're really talented, quite different from your last competition. To be honest, I was a little dismissive of you at first. I didn't expect you to improve so quickly." Cyrus pursed his lips. Is this progress? They hired a substitute player. Draco Malfoy will be just as bad as he gets in the next game. Well, it's not that he's terrible, but he's definitely not at Harry's level. Malfoy does have talent, but the problem is that he's always been pampered and can't endure hardship. Even if Cyrus wasn't controlling this body, he would still find it difficult to stick to training. Although he had never participated in Quidditch training, Cyrus encouraged him, "You can do it too if you train hard." "Thank you." Zhang Qiu stood up. "I have to go now. I wish you a speedy recovery." She walked to the door, then turned back to look at Cyrus. "I think you say something very different from what others say. Goodbye." She closed the door to the school clinic, leaving Cyrus, looking bewildered, deep in thought with a half-eaten pumpkin pie in his hand. This little girl wouldn't be infatuated with me, no, with Draco, would she? But he soon shook his head. It shouldn't be that bad, after all, we've only met once. Maybe he just admires me a little because he thinks I fly really well. He stuffed the pumpkin cake into his mouth and changed his lying position. But if Draco is smart enough, it's not impossible for him to develop a relationship with Cho Chang given the current situation. Cyrus thought about how heartbroken Harry would be to see his goddess constantly around his nemesis. Unfortunately, Draco Malfoy was so focused on Harry that he had no time to look at other women. Cyrus spent several hours alone in the school infirmary, and it was completely dark outside. Ms. Pomfrey came out from behind the curtain, bent down and squeezed his arm. After confirming that there was nothing wrong, she let Cyrus leave the infirmary. Stepping out of the school clinic, there was no one in the corridor. Cyrus avoided looking at the portrait and took out the Marauder's map. "I solemnly swear that I will not do good deeds." The blank parchment opened automatically, revealing lines that formed a multifaceted map. Except for some hidden chambers, every corner of the castle was fully revealed. He saw that there were quite a few badger cubs wandering around the kitchen area, while there were almost no young wizards roaming around in other parts of the castle. On such days, even the most energetic Gryffindors dared not wander around at night, lest they encounter that terrible air and ultimately meet a tragic end. It will be even more difficult to launch an attack in the future. Cyrus shook his head, put the map away, and turned to walk towards the room of requirement. "Let's continue studying alchemy." Thank you for the donation from the viewer Lies. Thank you so much, my darling. Chapter 62 Tutoring Class. The next morning, as Cyrus was still sleepy and eating breakfast at the Slytherin table, an owl carrying a letter flew down to him. Cyrus took the letter, fed the owl some food, and immediately opened it. The letter was from Lucius and Narcissa, and on the surface, it appeared to be nothing more than a simple expression of their concern and greetings for their son. However, Cyrus immediately discerned the coded message within. After casting a subtle revealing spell, the true message vanished in a flash. Lucius has convinced the other board members that Dumbledore will be removed from the school as soon as the next victim appears. He has also made some efforts with the Ministry of Magic, guaranteeing that Hagrid can be sent to Azkaban for a few days. Cyrus was inwardly excited, but outwardly he remained calm, as if he were reading an ordinary letter. He silently folded the letter and put it back into his sleeve. The two lackeys sitting next to him seemed to want to talk to him, but considering that Malfoy had become a different person recently, they didn't dare to say anything. "What's wrong?" Cyrus glared at them with the arrogance typical of Malfoys. "No, it's nothing. I'm done eating, goodbye." Cyrus stood up alone and walked across the table full of people. Many people greeted him, but he ignored them all, instead thinking about when to launch the next decisive attack. Now, immediately, or should we wait a little longer? The matter of forging the Philosopher's Stone is still a complete mystery, and I'm not prepared to confront Dumbledore. Cyrus's biggest worry was Dumbledore. However, if the plan goes smoothly, he won't have to face Dumbledore. We can't afford to make any more mistakes. The Christmas surprise caught him completely off guard, but thankfully nothing bad happened. Cyrus considered it carefully and decided to continue as the original story had progressed. The next attack would be on the day of the Gryffindor vs Hufflepuff Quidditch match, and the target, naturally, would be, what can't go wrong? A voice suddenly interrupted Cyrus's thoughts. He looked up and saw Lockhart with a beaming smile. Page 42. Haha, I bet you're talking about the next Quidditch match, aren't you? Lockhart gave a smug look and started bragging, ignoring Cyrus's feelings. You really shone yesterday, well done. I have to say, you did almost half as well as me. Didn't I mention that I was also a seeker on my school team back in my college days? Ravenclaw. Honestly, if you were playing against me, you probably wouldn't have won so easily. And your hand, it's healing quite well. You know, I could have healed you immediately. Professor, is there something you need? Cyrus interrupted Lockhart's pointless remarks. He had no interest in listening to this guy's self-praise. I think I can offer some help, in Quidditch. If you're planning to join a world-renowned team someday, you'd better take my advice, Lockhart said smugly. I received many offers from teams back in the day, but unfortunately, that wasn't my ambition. The Quidditch world lost a rising star. No need, Professor. Actually, I'm not that interested in Quidditch. And I don't intend to become a show-off star. He had pretty much figured out Lockhart's idea. The other party clearly saw his Quidditch talent and intended to make him his student, so that if he became famous in the future, the other party would naturally rise in rank and become famous as well. Unfortunately, he wasn't interested. Not only was he uninterested, but Malfoy himself wasn't interested either. Don't like Quidditch? You're wasting your talent, Malfoy. After all, not everyone is as good as me. Even without Quidditch, there are many other things I can excel in. Besides, I'm a third-class Merlin. Excuse me, Professor, those things are plentiful. You can have as much as you want by donating some money to the Ministry of Magic, Cyrus said bluntly. And Professor, perhaps your memory isn't the best, but my name is Draco Malfoy. Putting aside my Quidditch talent, I have a huge fortune to inherit. After saying that, he ignored Lockhart's expression, turned sideways, and walked away from him. Once he was out of Lockhart's way, Ginny and the other three chased after him. Why are you here? We saw you receive a letter and then came out, so we followed you. It's just a letter for Malfoy. I plan to put it away for him. What's wrong? I just saw Lockhart talking to you. Ron glanced at Hermione before asking. I bet he was bragging again. Was he planning to teach you how to play Quidditch? You really know Ron, Cyrus said with a hint of admiration. He even said he was Ravenclaw's seeker back in the day. I saw right about him a long time ago. Ron was pleased that he had guessed correctly, which made Hermione a little unhappy. In fact, Professor Lockhart is indeed Ravenclaw's seeker. Maybe so, but you know I worked in the medal room, and during the time he was in school, Ravenclaw never won the Quidditch trophy. Admit it, Hermione, he played terribly. Billy, much worse than Malfoy, Ron said provocatively. Surprisingly, Hermione only hummed and didn't respond. By the way, do you have any good suggestions about course selection for the third year? Hermione asked, turning her head as if she remembered something after a while. After the Easter break, the heads of the houses couldn't handle course selection, and Hermione took it very seriously, while Harry and Ron were much more casual about it. However, it would be beneficial for them to hear Riddle's opinion, at least saving them the trouble of thinking about it themselves. Overall, the Magical Creatures Protection class is very important, but I heard that Professor Kettleburn is retiring next year, and I wonder who will take over the class. Of the two divination classes, I only recommend arithmetic divination. The other one, well, it does require some talent. Ancient runes are quite useful, and I also recommend alchemy. Or you can choose all of them if you don't want to miss out. Cyrus said. I just want to give up potions, Harry said dejectedly. Potionology is very important, Harry. Even if you don't plan to become an Auror in the future, having more knowledge of potions can prevent you from being poisoned by others. But besides Snape, I can't think of anyone else who would poison me. Of course there are, for example, Voldemort's minions, those Death Eaters. Cyrus saw Ron shiver. Please, don't say that name, especially since he's still alive. Okay, in short, the only course I don't recommend you take is Muggle Studies. It's not that the course isn't important, it's just that the content is practically complete nonsense. But that's understandable, since wizards sometimes have trouble understanding Muggle technology. As for the other courses, you can ask the older students. So many years have passed, so the teaching content might have changed a bit since I was a student. In the end, Cyrus chose alchemy, ancient runes, and protection of magical creatures for Malfoy. As for Hermione, she only heard Cyrus say that she could choose all of them, and immediately checked off all the subjects. Aren't I taking too many subjects? Can you tutor me right now? Hermione pestered Cyrus. Tutoring? You haven't even finished second grade and you're already planning to tutor third grade material. Ron looked at him like he was crazy, considering he hadn't even started reviewing for the final exams. Why not? I advise you two to start preparing early, after all, it will affect our entire future. Hermione glared at him and dragged Cyrus to the library. Ron and Harry exchanged glances, both feeling that Hermione's words were a bit of an exaggeration. When Ginny saw Hermione start learning from Cyrus, she didn't want to fall behind, so she borrowed a second-year textbook and bombarded Cyrus with questions. Cyrus also gave them an extra head-bubbling spell. In the end, they were kicked out by an angry Mrs. Pants. Chapter 63 Make Voldemort Great Once Again. That night, Cyrus left his dorm room again, avoiding all eyes, and went to the room of requirement. The crimson potion churned and simmered, emanating a powerful life force. But soon, the potion turned into poison, displaying an unhealthy red color resembling rusted iron. Cyrus immediately knew that this potion was ruined again. The potion ingredients stolen from Snape are almost gone. If we fail again, we'll have to give up. Cyrus once again opened those alchemical books. The seemingly simple diagrams and words contained the most profound and difficult to understand wisdom. Wisdom if only Ravenclaw's crown hadn't been made into a Horcrux. Cyrus sighed, cursing Voldemort for wasting such a precious thing. Such a powerful treasure was destroyed by it. If the crown is usable, perhaps I can use its wisdom to refine the magic stone. And many more. Who said you can't kill someone without a gun barrel? Cyrus suddenly realized. No one has ever said that the crown becomes unusable after it is made into a Horcrux, right? Perhaps others couldn't use it because fragments of Voldemort's soul were attached to it, but he was different. He didn't need to worry about Voldemort's soul residing in the Horcrux at all. Rather, I am Riddle. Cyrus's dark eyes gleamed brightly. He always had a flexible standard when it came to whether he was Riddle or not. He quickly walked out of the room of fulfillment, then walked back and forth 3 times, silently repeating in his mind, "I want a room to hide things, I want a room to hide things, I want a room to hide things." Then, the original door slowly disappeared, and a new door appeared on the wall. Cyrus pushed open the black, ornate door and entered a huge, but very crowded and cluttered room. All sorts of odds and ends were piled up together, making it look like a junkyard. It's hard to imagine how, in Hogwarts' 1000-year history, the very few people who knew about this room managed to turn it into this state. Cyrus knew where the Horcruxes were located. He had been to this room before, back when he was just looking for some alchemical tools for Draco to practice with. Finding the crown was just a side thing. He passed the troll specimen and the broken vanishing cabinet, and came to a crate. Above the crate was a half-body of a wizard covered in pockmarks, wearing a dusty old wig and an old, faded crown-like object. The crown is inlaid with jewels and engraved with the words, "Exceptional wisdom is the greatest wealth." It was supposed to sparkle, but now the crown looks somewhat dull. Then, Cyrus put it on his head without hesitation. In an instant, he felt as if he were in a quiet morning forest, the cool mountain breeze making his mind exceptionally clear. It was like a rusty machine suddenly being lubricated and starting to run rapidly. Cyrus felt as if he were enveloped by wisdom itself. However, if someone were to look at him from a third-person perspective, they would find that what shrouded Cyrus was not wisdom, but a cloud of evil black mist. "Voldemort, show me your soul." The black mist emitted a hoarse and terrifying sound that echoed in Cyrus's mind. "I will show you all the secrets contained within magic." "Stop howling, it's me." Cyrus interrupted him, opening half of his mind to draw upon Malfoy's life force, conjuring a phantom image. At the same time, he also took the diary into his hand. "You." Cyrus believed that no one would ever see the legendary Dark Lord make a more comical expression than he did at this moment. "It's me, and of course it's you too." Cyrus stared at the ugly snake face that emerged from the black mist, and his mood inexplicably improved. Although he had to think about how to be resurrected as soon as he transmigrated, at least he hadn't become as ugly as the guy inside the crown. "I entrusted the diary to Lucius Malfoy for safekeeping." "Yes, but we didn't tell him what was in the diary, otherwise he would have been more respectful to me." Cyrus' face showed anger. "But it's better this way, at least I learned some unexpected information. I bet you'd never guess." "What?" "That invincible Dark Lord was defeated by a baby. Then he was turned into a lowly creature, less than a ghost, who spends his days possessing rats in the sewers and barely surviving." The dark figure seemed enraged by Cyrus's words, baring its fangs and hissing like a venomous snake. "You are lying." "Lying? Why would I deceive myself?" Sellers calmly revealed his eyes. He was prepared with the altered, false memories, but he overestimated the remnant soul trapped in the Horcrux. The other party couldn't cast any magic at all. "You really should go out and see what the world has become. We've lost," he said angrily, seemingly annoyed and ashamed of his defeat. Now that he saw another self, he could finally release his suppressed emotions. People chanted, "The boy who survived," celebrating our failure. "And last year, that same boy thwarted our plans once again." Cyrus recounted everything that had happened that year, including Voldemort possessing Quirrell in an attempt to steal the Philosopher's Stone and resurrect himself, but being defeated by Harry Potter, and Lucius Malfoy sending out his diary to evade the Ministry of Magic's investigation, hoping to cause chaos at Hogwarts. Page 43. "Now, I've possessed Malfoy and attacked several lowly mudbloods with the basilisk from the Chamber of Secrets, but that's not enough. We must be resurrected." Cyrus became more and more agitated as he approached the soul residing in the crown. "That's easy, but Horcruxes are still not safe enough. Hordeals are safe enough. If the plan goes smoothly, we can have 6 Horcruxes." Voldemort was already quite pleased with his plan to split his soul into 7. He was confident that no one could possibly know that he had created so many Horcruxes, let alone find the location of each one and destroy them. "Insurance?" Cyrus sneered. "Insurance is about living in filthy sewers with snakes and rats. Don't forget who we are. Don't forget that we changed our names to Voldemort so that one day, when we become the greatest wizards in the world, wizards everywhere will not dare to utter our names. Instead of lying in a stinking ditch like a stray dog with a broken leg, we must have greater power and more reliable means to fight against Dumbledore." And that Cyrus placed his hand on the crown, his eyes flashing with hatred. "The boy who lived. You intend to abandon your true form." The Voldemort in the crown suddenly understood Cyrus's meaning. But this made him even more incredulous. He had never imagined the other party could be so insane. "Original body. There is no physical body." Cyrus' emotions seemed to have calmed down, but this calm contained an even greater power, like the silent currents of the ocean. "There is only one Voldemort in this world. It's him, it's you, and it's me. Since he lost, let me take his place. If I lose, then it's your turn." When faced with a tempting devil, Cyrus's trick is to tempt the devil in return. The soul within the crown seemed to have compromised. Cyrus placed the crown on his head again and uttered the final words that shattered the other's psychological defenses. "There is only one Voldemort in this world, and our goal is to make the name Voldemort great once again. I'm so sleepy at work, so sleepy, sob sob. Chapter 64 Life is an exchange. The black aura vanished, and the soul with Voldemort's face returned to the crown. Cyrus knew his plan had succeeded. He had practically fooled Voldemort himself. Of course, it was actually quite easy, since his very existence implied that he himself was a Horcrux. Even if Voldemort were extremely cautious, he probably wouldn't have imagined that his Horcruxes could be possessed. As for Cyrus, he could have easily avoided such trouble, but he didn't intend to use the crown only once. Being with Voldemort naturally required caution. At least while the crown was on his head, he had to be Riddle. Fortunately, Tom Riddle's occlumency was still very powerful. Even Dumbledore couldn't see through his thoughts back then. Cyrus absorbed all of Riddle's magical knowledge, so he naturally wouldn't slack off on such a useful spell as occlumency. Cyrus didn't go anywhere. He simply opened the Book of Abraham on the spot. This is a bronze book with only 21 pages. Each page is numbered every 7 pages, and all page numbers are 7. In alchemy, 3 and 7 are very special numbers. Among them, the number 3 may represent triple greatness, which means repeating greatness 3 times. Perhaps this means that a certain element needs to undergo sublimation 3 times. Without a doubt, this element is mercury, or quicksilver. However, this alone is clearly not enough. Cyrus previously attempted to achieve a perfect world using the 3 pillars, the 10 primal elements, the 4 worlds, and the 22 paths, but ultimately failed. Is something missing? And it's a very crucial point. He looked at the pictures branded on the book, 2 intertwined snakes, one being devoured by the other, representing the fusion of matter. The second picture, a snake nailed to a cross. The third, a swarm of snakes emerging from a spring in the desert. What does the snake really symbolize? Is it mystery, taboo, or immortality itself? The shed snakeskin symbolizes a decaying body. Is a brand new life born from it? This constant alternation, repeating endlessly, seeks eternal life. Like the basilisk, which has existed for nearly 1,000 years, yet remains far removed from death. Perhaps I should add something snake-related to my potions, like the molted skin of a basilisk. On the path leading to the secret chamber lies the molted skin of a giant basilisk. The basilisk itself is a product of magic, and its molted skin has many uses. Its extremely strong magic resistance can be used to make armor. However, most importantly, the molted skin has always been a symbol of immortality and rebirth. What if the basilisk's molted skin were added during the process of making a magic stone? Add snake molts? You really think that will allow you to create a unique magic stone? The soul in the crown sneered. I didn't know you were so naive. If I hadn't seen you created with my own eyes, I would have doubted whether you were even myself. What do you mean? Cyrus's heart skipped a beat, and he asked in a deep voice. However, Voldemort did not actually suspect anything. He just found it a bit ridiculous. To interpret the contents of those pictures as snake molts is an insult to the Black Demon King's reputation. Or was it because I was too young when I made the diary Horcrux, that the other person's soul was also too naive? You actually dare to ask me what I mean? Snakes devouring each other, snakes nailed to the cross, a man raising an iron axe to chop at Hermes' feet, the Holy Grail bearing countless drops of blood, slaughtered infants. Voldemort recounted the bloody scene word for word, especially the last picture. A king holding a large sword was ordering his soldiers to kill many babies, whose mothers knelt before them and begged for mercy. Nearby were containers resembling buckets and crucibles, in which the baby's blood was collected, and the sun and moon were bathed in the blood. Tell me, if you wish to gain eternal life, what is the price? On the scales of life, what can be measured against it? Voldemort's voice was like that of a terrifying demon king from hell, voicing the deepest questions at Cyrus's soul. It was as if he had taken a hammer and driven the sharpest nail into the place that Cyrus had never dared to look at before, leaving it covered in blood. There is only one answer. Only life. The only price to pay for life is life itself. This was actually a principle that Cyrus had already understood. If he wanted to be resurrected, he had to absorb the life force of a person. Only when the life force of the person he possessed was completely drained would he have the ability to influence reality. In fact, the creation of Horcruxes is also done in the same way. Kill an innocent soul, then forge a Horcrux. This is true equivalent exchange. If alchemy is a balanced scale, then if life is placed on one side of the scale, life must also be used to measure the other side. Voldemort was already intimately familiar with this. He had killed far too many people in order to create Horcruxes. Life is an exchange, it has always been so throughout history. Eagles kill rabbits, snakes hunt mice, lions and tigers hunt cattle and sheep. Only when others die can you live. However, for Cyrus, his goal was to avoid killing any innocent life during his resurrection, which is why he sought another way to replicate the Philosopher's Stone. Yet, the more he researched, the more he realized that life, as a price, was indispensable. If that were the case, then everything he did would lose its meaning, so subconsciously he was less willing to think in that direction. However, Voldemort ultimately and ruthlessly broke through this barrier. This also allowed Cyrus to confront the true truth. Magic itself is a kind of idealistic power. Sometimes, to achieve something, you don't need spells, wands, or complicated rituals. All you need is the desire of your heart. Conversely, if even you are deceiving yourself, how can you possibly succeed in crafting a magic stone? If you want to forge a magic stone, you must use the blood of something to temper it, otherwise you will never succeed. But Nicholas Flamel, do you really think he's the kind of person who would do something so bloody? Cyrus countered. People of his generation, Voldemort merely scoffed, clearly failing to grasp the true meaning of goodness in this world. He probably believed all kindness and justice were false, and that the truth hidden beneath lies and deception was always bloody. Voldemort's views were certainly biased, but that also meant he wasn't entirely wrong. Right. Nicholas Flamel lived for over 600 years. Who knows what life was like in his time? The further back in time we go, the more bloody and cruel civilizations become, and this is true even in the magical world. 600 years ago, even black magic was probably just ordinary magic to people at the time. Moreover, considering that Nico has been unable to replicate the Philosopher's Stone for so many years, perhaps he himself was unaware of this life exchange. Is that what you think? Voldemort countered. I'm more inclined to believe that he knew, but when he tried again, he lost the prophetic revelation. Voldemort did not believe that Nicholas Flamel was a naive person. How could a master alchemist not notice such an obvious exchange of equal value? Besides, the amount of blood needed to create a Philosopher's Stone was far more than just a little. Rumors have circulated that Nicholas Flamel hunted down a large number of dark wizards at some point in history, but whether this is true or not is unknown. But if that's true, then he's very likely preparing to refine a magic stone. The Book of Abraham once revealed some of its secrets to Nicholas Flamel, but that revelation disappeared after Flamel successfully crafted the Philosopher's Stone. If that's the case, then how do we find this revelation? Find it? No. The revelation will be complete once this book is in your hands. Said the Soul in the Crown. Thank you for your 1,000-point donation to Mingyua Majigzu. Thank you, my darling. Turns out I wasn't too sleepy, I was sick and crying. Chapter 65 evokes a sense of guilt about cheating. The revelation has been completed. The Book of Abraham the Judean is a magical book, and when it fell into Cyrus's hands, it was already destined that he would be the next person to be able to forge the Philosopher's Stone. Voldemort, inside the crown, believed that this person was himself, and was therefore extremely proud. He was not only the heir to Slytherin, but fate itself also favored him. But Cyrus knew perfectly well that none of this had anything to do with Voldemort. Voldemort couldn't obtain Nicholas Flamel's Philosopher's Stone, much less forge a real one. But he also knew that he wouldn't feel any guilt if he were to exchange his life for those evil dark wizards. However, now that he was possessed by Draco Malfoy, where was he going to find so many dark wizards? But Cyrus couldn't bring himself to use the lives of those innocent young wizards in the castle. A person may be cruel, but at least they should have a bottom line, not for any other reason than to prevent themselves from becoming a monster in human skin. Voldemort probably misunderstood him, thinking he was worried that sacrificing so many lives in the castle would provoke Dumbledore's revenge. We certainly can't be too high-profile right now, but don't forget, there are still many lives in the Forbidden Forest. Forest Ban. Page 44. In an instant, Cyrus's mind flashed an image of a surging swarm of eight-eyed giant spiders. The eight-eyed giant spiders had a great fondness for eating people, especially after Hagrid's Aragog died. The spider swarm completely lost control and eventually sided with Voldemort. If these creatures were used as sacrifices, Sylph would feel no guilt. The Forbidden Forest, it seems I have to go there. Cyrus took off the crown from his head, and instantly he felt much quieter. It was so much more comfortable without Voldemort's incessant chatter. However, this time he really has to thank Voldemort. He didn't see whether a crown could enhance a person's wisdom, but Voldemort truly deserved to be one of the most terrifying geniuses in the wizarding world. Of course, the crown might indeed play a role in it. Cyrus carefully put away the crown and left the House of Requirement with it. Now that Lucius Malfoy is ready, it's about time to bring the plan to a close. In an empty classroom, Hermione sat at a desk and waved to Cyrus. A large stack of books lay on the desk. Here you are. You've finally arrived. Ever since they were kicked out of the library by Mrs. Pants, they had to find a new place for tutoring. Fortunately, Hogwarts had plenty of abandoned classrooms, and they easily found one. Why aren't Ginny and the others here? Cyrus was a little surprised to find that only Hermione was there. Normally, Harry and Ron rarely came. The coursework for this semester was enough to give them a headache. But Ginny was always there without fail. You forgot. She has class today. Hermione shook her head happily, her fluffy brown curls bouncing, making her look incredibly cute. If it weren't for her overly large front teeth, which made her look like an otter when she smiled, Cyrus believed even more people would have noticed her beauty. As for Harry, he's playing the Hufflepuff team this weekend, and Wood is giving him almost no respite, pushing him to train every second. I think Wood might be intimidated by your flying skills, Hermione said with a smile, a hint of smugness in her voice. Luckily the weather's been nice lately. It was raining a lot a while ago, and I was worried Harry would catch a cold, Cyrus said casually. He sat down opposite Hermione, and the two of them were now sharing the same table. That seeker from Hufflepuff seems pretty good. I watched his match against Ravenclaw last time, and he flew a bit better than Cho. Choi, when did you two become so close? Hermione wrinkled her nose, a little displeased, as she flipped through the borrowed Ancient Runes textbook. What I mean is, you'd better not have too much contact with others, lest you get caught. After all, you and that nasty Malfoy are completely different in personality. She would sometimes ask me about Quidditch. I didn't go to the matches against Hufflepuff and Slytherin, did I? I let Higgs continue as the Seeker. He trained for quite a while, but he still lost to Hufflepuff. She probably felt it was a pity, so she came to ask me why I didn't participate in the matches. Later, she pestered me to teach her some flying techniques. Hermione stopped what she was doing. How come I didn't know about this? Slytherin and Gryffindor don't always attend classes together. Cyrus suddenly felt guilty. Why did he suddenly feel guilty, as if he had been cheating? He didn't want to continue the topic, so he decided to change the subject. Alright, let's look at the textbook. The scope of ancient magic script is very large, but at this stage you only need to learn runes. 9 knights hung from a tree swaying in the fierce wind. I was wounded by spears I was offered as a sacrifice to Odin. I offered myself as a sacrifice, on a tree unknown to anyone. There is no bread to fill our stomachs, and no water to quench our thirst. I looked down and picked up the run as script. They were picking it up while shouting, as it fell from the tree. Cyrus began to read the word of God. This is a legend from the Muggle world, Hermione pointed out astutely, because in the wizarding world, the so-called Odin is more likely just a powerful wizard. That's right. Cyrus nodded. Odin paid the price of losing his right eye to obtain the wisdom of runes in order to get the Well of Wisdom. Runes are a kind of incantation. As long as they are engraved on wood, stone, metal, or any material, they can gain infinite power. That's why many very powerful alchemical tools are inscribed with runes. This script is similar to, but different from, magic spells. It is not uttered through sound, rather, it must be written down to exert its power. If you want to learn artifact alchemy, then mastering magic script is essential. It is a tool. The runic script has a total of 24 letters, divided into groups of 8. The first 8 symbolize abundance, prosperity, love, and peace. The middle 8 symbolize obstacles and difficulties, and the last 8 are closely related to war. It must be said that understanding the meaning of the runic script is the most difficult part of learning it. Each letter has an abstract meaning. For example, a single letter might symbolize wealth, prosperity, or abundance. However, it can have different meanings in different combinations. For instance, the magic item disappearing cabinet symbolizes a safe transfer. Classes like this continued until Friday, and the Quidditch match is tomorrow at 11 a.m. The action is gone. Chapter 66 Hermione discovers the truth. The next morning, Hermione and Harry gathered in the Great Hall. The weather was lovely, and Wood was very happy, filling each player's plate with scrambled eggs. Go Harry! Hermione and Ginny cheered Harry on while glancing at the Slytherin table out of the corner of their eyes, but they didn't see the conspicuous tuft of white hair. Harry was also a little frustrated. He inexplicably felt a bit of affection for Riddle, perhaps because Riddle's fate reminded him of himself. To be honest, staying at the Dursleys' house was not as good as staying at the orphanage. Isn't he coming to cheer me on? I thought we were friends. He probably overslept, and with so many people watching, it's not really convenient for him to cheer you on, Harry, Ron said reassuringly. After a while, Cyrus finally came in. He had actually gotten up a while ago, but had gone to the Chamber of Secrets earlier. Now, he needed to use the basilisk's voice to give Hermione a hint so she could fall behind alone. After entering the restaurant, Cyrus raised his chin at them with the smug look that Malfoy was known for. To others, this might seem like a provocation, but Harry knew it was actually Mr. Riddle greeting him. Malfoy is really annoying, isn't he? I don't know why he's not participating in the tournament anymore, but it's a good thing. Last time Slytherin lost to Hufflepuff, so the champion will have to be decided between us and Hufflepuff. Wood frowned and patted Harry on the shoulder. Alright, Harry, hurry up and eat. I want to finalize the tactics before the tournament starts. After saying that, Wood left the Great Hall first and headed to the Quidditch arena. Harry thought he might be able to say a few words to Mr. Riddle before the match started, preferably to get his encouragement and approval, which would give him more confidence. So he slowly delayed. Before long, there weren't many people left in the Great Hall. How are you feeling, Harry? Cyrus then slowly walked over to greet them. Not bad, but Diggory is very strong, I doubt I can beat him. You should have confidence in yourself, Cyrus said casually, his mind not on the Quidditch match at all, since the match was ultimately not going to happen anyway. The 5 of them left the auditorium together. Because Harry needed to go back and pack his competition gear, Cyrus parted ways with them first. I'm going to the court first. However, just as Cyrus reached the corner, he cast an illusion spell on himself and once again followed behind them, controlling the basilisk as it swam through the pipes. At this moment, Harry's initial nervousness turned into a heavy worry, because just as he stepped onto the marble stairs, he suddenly heard that voice again, this time, kill. Let me tear. Let me rip. He yelled, and Ron and Hermione jumped away from him in alarm. What's wrong with you? That sound, Harry said, turning his head to look behind him. I just heard it again. Did you hear it? Ron shook his head, his eyes wide open. That strange sound you mentioned earlier. Ginny looked around. But where is it? It can't be invisible, can it? Or is there a path we can't see? An invisible road. Hermione suddenly slapped her forehead. I suddenly realized something. I'm going to the library. She ran off quickly upstairs. What did she understand? Harry asked anxiously, still looking around, trying to figure out where the sound was coming from. I don't know, Ron said, shaking his head. But why would she go to the library? That's just how Hermione does it, Ron said, shrugging. Whenever she has a question, she goes to the library. Harry stood there hesitantly, trying to catch the sound again. But by then, it was too late. You'd better hurry up and do it, Ginny said. But that voice. It's almost 11 o'clock. The match is about to start. Harry and his two companions left, while Cyrus turned and followed Hermione. He saw Hermione rushing toward the library, her hair like a cluster of blooming and gathering flowers. She ran all the way to the 4th floor, but the library doors were locked, and there was no one inside. Everyone, including Mrs. Pants, had gone to the Quidditch pitch. Hermione gave the door a violent push, but it wouldn't open, so she simply took a half step back and drew her wand. Araho Cave is open. The chains rattled and fell to the ground. Petrification. An invisible path, perhaps in the walls, probably in the pipes. A sound only Harry can hear. She walked through rows of bookshelves, the clues from before seeming to form a huge net, almost weaving the real answer into her mind. Cyrus followed her at a leisurely pace, even dispelling his disillusionment charm. A gigantic basilisk emerged from the pipe, its steel-like scales rustling against the ground. The enormous monster followed behind Cyrus, but soon lowered its head and swam close to the ground to the other side. Rows of bookshelves filled with books served as its cover. In the dimly lit library, only the greenish-colored scales shimmered with a faint light. That must be a snake. That's why Harry could hear it. Because he speaks parsley. But what kind of snake could petrify someone and exist for 1,000 years? Hermione pulled several books from the shelf, one about Hogwarts' conduit system and another about magical creatures. She kept flipping through the pages, using the light from the wand. The basilisk can live for 1,000 years, but its magic kills people, not petrifies them, right? That's right. She suddenly remembered something, because none of the victims saw the basilisk's eyes directly. Colin Creevey saw it through a camera, Justin saw it through the headless Nicole. Ginny said Percy and Penelope were dating, and she was holding a mirror, probably getting ready. And Mrs. Loris saw the basilisk through the reflection of water on the ground. So the magic was diminished. It's like hearing the mandrakes call while wearing earmuffs. Hermione's face lit up with excited joy. She solved a 50-year-old mystery, and the sense of accomplishment was indescribable. More importantly, the murderer was likely to be caught because of it. But soon, new doubts arose in her mind. Page 45. If the creature in the secret chamber was a basilisk, then Hagrid was clearly innocent. She still vividly remembered the scene Mr. Riddle had shown them last time. Although she hadn't been able to clearly see what the monster Hagrid was raising actually was, at least it wasn't a basilisk. No basilisk is a ball-shaped creature with so much hair. Mr. Riddle must be mistaken. Hermione closed the book, eager to tell everyone the answer, especially Mr. Riddle. She wanted to let Mr. Riddle know that Hagrid was innocent, that he had made a mistake, and that her intelligence had solved the problem. Knowing the monster's true form and modus operandi, finding each other wouldn't be so difficult anymore. Well, it's still very difficult. Hogwarts' pipe system is extremely complex, but at least we have a clue now. However, just then, Hermione heard footsteps echoing between the empty bookshelves of the library. Pat 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 Shaw. Who is there? Her heart skipped a beat, and she shrank back warily, knocking over a chair. She raised her wand in the direction of the footsteps. But the owner of the footsteps did not respond. They simply continued to approach. In that instant, sweat of fear soaked the clothes beneath Hermione's robes. But far from panicking, she was calmer than ever before. Perhaps it's that Rive become his target. Hermione breathed heavily, her whole body trembling, but she still made the right choice. She knew clearly that she was probably doomed, but even if it meant sacrifice, she wanted to at least leave clues to the truth for her two mentally challenged sons and Mr. Riddle. So, she hurriedly tore off a page and wrote down a word. The footsteps were getting closer. The flashing fluorescent light illuminated the person who had arrived. It's Malfoy. Chapter 67. Hermione petrified. Mr. Riddle. Hermione's voice was choked with sobs, and she collapsed as if she had been hit by a power-relieving drug, as if all the bones in her body had been removed. You scared me to death. Sorry, Hermione. Did you find any clues? Cyrus asked with a smile. His white hair looked extremely glaring, and after absorbing Malfoy's life force over this period of time, Malfoy's face looked as pale as if it had been coated with flour, especially now standing in the dark. He looked like a dead corpse. But Hermione didn't notice this. After that moment of fear, seeing Cyrus was like seeing a lifeline, and she started talking non-stop. I found out, that monster is a basilisk. You wronged Hagrid, it moves in the pipes, we'd better get the mirror. Hermione grabbed Cyrus's arms desperately and spoke incoherently. Don't rush, Hermione, you can speak slowly. Cyrus patted Hermione on the back to calm her down. Hermione then explained everything she had discovered to Cyrus in detail. You're really smart, Hermione, Cyrus praised sincerely. Hermione was clearly pleased by his compliment, and the little which sniffed smugly, her tail practically wagging in the air. But, however, you're wrong about one thing. Cyrus released Hermione, took a half step back, and distanced himself from her. He seemed to have returned to darkness all of a sudden. Although the two were only a few steps apart, the light emanating from Hermione's wand separated her from Cyrus. Mr. Riddle. I'm not wronging Hagrid, Hermione, you're mistaken. But Hagrid really isn't. Of course not. Cyrus interrupted Hermione, his expression now seeming unfamiliar to her. I told you, I didn't wrong him, to be precise. I framed him. But why? Simply put, I am the heir to Slytherin. Cyrus laughed, explaining generously, I orchestrated all the attacks over the past 2 semesters. How is this possible? Hermione was shaken, her eyes glistening with tears. Hermione felt pain, deception, and betrayal at that moment. How could she possibly believe that Mr. Riddle, with whom she had spent so much time, who had stolen Snape's potion ingredients together, and who had tutored her, was actually the murderer they had been searching for? He even showers with himself. But why? You're from the Muggle world too. Do you see us as mudbloods just like Malfoy? Hermione asked painfully. This time, she understood the pain that word carried even more deeply than when Malfoy had insulted her before. No, I never thought that way, but there must always be some sacrifices for resurrection. This is a lesson, and I think next time you should know not to easily trust something that has thoughts, Cyrus said calmly. Alright, Hermione, you should go get some sleep. But don't worry, I won't kill you. He was practically putting a child to sleep. Hermione seemed to realize something. She heard the sound of metal scraping against the ground behind her, a sound so piercing that she wondered why she hadn't heard it before. But now, all she could do was desperately close her eyes and ram into Cyrus with all her might. Cyrus didn't stop her, letting Hermione struggle. She would occasionally open her eyes to confirm her location with the basilisk, but most of the time she kept them closed, avoiding the basilisk's dim, twilight-like gaze. The enraged basilisk, seeing its prey move, quickened its pace, its steely scales slicing across the ground and sparking bright flashes. Its writhing body knocked over rows of bookshelves as it chased after Hermione in the direction she had fled. Filled with fear, Hermione was frantically waving spells behind her like a madwoman. She knew a lot of spells, some of which Cyrus had taught her. Thinking of this, Hermione felt a mix of grief and irony. But right now, we need to protect ourselves first. She clutched the note tightly in one hand, throwing incantations behind her as she ran. Birds flock. Drive away the venomous snakes. Sleepy. Freezing spell. The spell that shot out from Hermione's wand flashed with fire, like a bright firework that disappears in the blink of an eye on a summer night. However, these spells had almost no effect on the basilisk. Its iridescent green scales acted like armor, blocking the spells and failing to even slow it down. Even the freezing spell, strong enough to cool down a fire lizard, failed to hinder the basilisk. The basilisk was much faster than Hermione, but Hermione darted between the dense bookshelves like a nimble little mouse. In the cramped space, the basilisk's enormous size became an inconvenience. However, Cyrus was very patient. He watched as the basilisk gradually cornered Hermione, saw her terrifiedly scramble into the gaps in the collapsing bookshelves, and watched the basilisk brutally lash out with its tail, smashing the obstacles in its path to pieces. Now, Hermione has finally reached the library door. If she pushes it open, she can escape. Perhaps there were other people in the corridor, perhaps they could help her, or at least expose Malfoy's Riddle's ambition. However, when she tried to push the door open, she found it was as if it had been welded shut and wouldn't budge. Open the Illaho hole. Open the Illaho hole. She was so anxious she was jumping up and down, her voice distorted, and she desperately poked at the lock with her wand, but the door remained unmoved. It's no use, I already cast a counter curse. Cyrus slowly approached her. By this time, Hermione could already feel the huge monster behind her getting closer. It slowed down, and its body, thicker than her waist, blocked her last escape route. Hermione could only turn her head away, her back pressed tightly against the wall, her upper and lower eyelids seemingly glued together. She even forgot how a person should breathe. The basilisk's foul and cold breath slapped against her cheeks. Out of options. Cyrus said jokingly, picking up his wand and lightly tracing it with 2 fingers. Hermione felt like her body was out of her control, as if many arms were grabbing her, forcefully prying open her joints and lifting her eyelids. In their line of sight, the basilisk's shadow resembled a series of undulating mountain peaks. You're a bit of a disappointment, Hermione, Cyrus couldn't help but remind her. Do you remember what I taught you about how to block the basilisk's line of sight? Hermione used all her strength to cast a bubble head curse on herself at the last moment. Then Cyrus used magic to completely rip open her eyelids, and in the darkness, the serpent's eyes pierced Hermione's soul. Snapped. The bubbles burst. Hermione, who was as stiff as a rock, collapsed. The basilisk wanted to continue its attack, to tear the man before it to pieces, but Cyrus stopped it. The enormous monster had no choice but to submit to the magic of the basilisk. Cyrus's wicked expression vanished, replaced by a stiff, unspoken movement as he walked silently to Hermione's side and repositioned her to a more comfortable position. Of course, she couldn't actually feel it. Then, he raised his wand and unleashed a burst of fire towards the forbidden book section. The library's alarm was triggered. Thank you for your 1,000 coin donation to Mingyue Majigzu. Thank you, Bao, W. Chapter 68 Quidditch Matches End. Let's rewind to a few tens of minutes ago. Page 46. Harry strode towards the Gryffindor Tower, picked up his Nimbus 2000, and joined the bustling crowd crossing the arena, but his thoughts were still in the castle, searching for that voice. As he changed into his crimson robes in the dressing room, his only solace was that everyone was outside watching the game. Amidst deafening cheers, the players marched onto the field. Oliver Wood leaped into the air, warming up by circling the goalposts. Ms. Hodge released the ball. The Hufflepuff team players, dressed in pale yellow, huddled together, making the most of the last minute to discuss tactics. Harry looked towards the audience, where the white-haired Malfoy stood out, squeezing through the crowd towards Ginny and Ron. However, Harry didn't see Hermione. Cyrus, panting, sat down next to Ginny and asked knowingly, "Finally found you. Where's Hermione?" "She went to the library," Ginny said immediately, recounting everything that had happened since she and Cyrus separated. "She's alone? You shouldn't have let her go alone. What if she's in danger?" "No way. How could the heir just happen to know Hermione's location?" Ron couldn't believe it was such a coincidence. But just as Harry was about to mount his flying broomstick, Professor McGonagall suddenly ran across the arena, carrying a huge purple microphone. His heart sank like a stone. It seems another attack has occurred. Sure enough, that was the sign that the monster had started to move. Ron's face turned pale instantly. He stood up in a panic and started squeezing his way onto the playground. It can't really be. Cyrus and Ginny quickly followed. "The match is cancelled," Professor McGonagall announced into the crowded stands through the microphone. A chorus of boos and shouts erupted from the crowd. Oliver Wood looked dejected. He landed on the ground and, without dismounting from his flying broom, ran towards Professor McGonagall. "But Professor," he cried, "we must compete in the Quidditch Cup in Gryffindor." Professor McGonagall ignored him and continued speaking into the microphone. "All students must return to the college's common room, where the college administrators will provide you with more information. Please leave as soon as possible." Then she put down the microphone and gestured for Harry to come over. "Potter, I think you'd better come with me." Harry was puzzled. Why did he always end up in trouble? He couldn't understand how this attack could be connected to him when he was perfectly fine on the Quidditch field. On the other side, nearly 1,000 students were making a racket. Amid the bustling crowd, Cyrus, Ron, and Ginny struggled to break through the throng and ran towards them. "All right, maybe you'd better come too, Ron Weasley." McGonagall looked at Ron, unusually relenting, but Cyrus and Ginny weren't so lucky. "As for you two, get back to your house's common room. Especially you, Malfoy." After saying that, she left with Harry and Ron, who were still confused. Harry glanced back and saw Cyrus and Ginny standing alone on the lush green playground, with a crowd of people behind them. He felt as if the world had been divided into 3 parts, and the deafening noise suddenly seemed far away. The angry would look like a silhouette in a silent play. "What happened?" Ginny asked with great concern. "I'm afraid something unexpected has happened." Cyrus pondered for a moment and said, "Let's go back first. I'm sure Harry and Ron will tell us what happened when they return." Ginny could only nod. "I hope Hermione is all right." "Hermione!" Ron exclaimed. Their bad premonition came true. This time, Professor McGonagall didn't take Harry and Ron to anyone's office. Instead, she went directly to the university hospital. Hermione lay there motionless, her blank eyes unnaturally open. "She was found near the library," Professor McGonagall said. "I doubt either of you can explain that." Someone forced her to open her eyes. Madame Pomfrey noticed Hermione's strange expression immediately. She was clearly trying to keep her eyes closed, but her eyelids had been roughly pried open. This means that the attacker may very well have cast the spell through his gaze. This clue easily led McGonagall to think of the basilisk. While the other victims could be explained, Hermione seemed to have nothing that could prevent her from seeing the basilisk. Yet, she was still petrified, not killed. "I will escort you back to the Gryffindor Tower," Professor McGonagall said somberly. "Anyway, I have to go and speak to the students. All students must be back in their college's common room by 6 p.m. No student may leave their dormitory after this time. Each student will be escorted to class by a teacher. No student may use the restrooms without a teacher's accompaniment. All Quidditch practice and matches are postponed. No further activities will be held in the evening." The Gryffindor students crowded into the common room, listening silently to Professor McGonagall speak. She rolled up the parchment document she had just read from, and then said in a somewhat choked voice, "I've rarely felt this distressed before, actually. The school will likely have to close unless the perpetrators who planned these attacks are caught. I urge everyone who thinks they know something to come forward." She awkwardly climbed over the portrait hole, and the Gryffindor students immediately started chattering. 2 Gryffindors have already fallen, not counting a Gryffindor ghost, a Ravenclaw, and a Hufflepuff. Lee Jordan, a friend of the Weasley twins, counted on his fingers. "Has any teacher noticed that all the Slytherins are unharmed? Isn't it obvious that these things all came from Slytherin? The heirs of Slytherin, the monsters of Slytherin, why don't they just kick all the Slytherins out?" He shouted, and the audience nodded frequently and applauded sparsely. But Harry wasn't listening. He couldn't shake the image of Hermione lying stiff and lifeless in her hospital bed. If the culprit wasn't caught soon, he'd be back in the Dursley's house for the rest of his life. Tom Riddle had betrayed Hagrid because he faced the prospect of returning to a Muggle orphanage once the school closed. Harry now completely understood his feelings. What do we do? Ron whispered in Harry's ear as the three of them huddled in a corner. Do you think they suspect Hagrid? We have to talk to him, Harry said, determined. I can't believe it's him this time. But since he released the monster last time, he must know how to get into the Chamber of Secrets. That's a potential breakthrough. But Professor McGonagall said we have to stay in the tower unless we're in the classroom. I think, Harry said, lowering his voice, it's time to take out my father's old cloak again. Then let's go find Mr. Riddle first, and then we'll go together. Chapter 69 Cornell Fudge. That night, Harry and Ron went to bed as usual. They waited until Neville, Dean, and Seamus stopped discussing the Chamber of Secrets and finally fell asleep before getting up, dressing themselves, and draping the invisibility cloak over their bodies. When they arrived at the common room, they found Ginny already sitting on the sofa waiting for them. Let's go to the Slytherin common room first. I've managed to contact Mr. Riddle, he'll be waiting for us at the door, Ginny said immediately. Walking through the gloomy corridor was not a pleasant experience. Harry had wandered around the castle many times before, but he had never seen so many people after sunset. Teachers, prefects, and ghosts patrolled the corridors in pairs, checking for anything unusual. While the invisibility cloak was useful, it wasn't always effective. Once, he and Ron were almost discovered by Snape. He always felt that Snape seemed extremely sensitive to the invisibility cloak. They finally arrived at the Slytherin common room, but there was no one outside the door. Where's Riddle? Did he get caught? Ron asked in a low voice, sounding a little worried. There were just too many teachers on patrol tonight. Here it is. Cyrus overheard their conversation and abruptly revealed his true form in the air. I used a disillusionment charm, otherwise I wouldn't have been able to hide from the professors. Cyrus reached out and lifted Harry's invisibility cloak, then frowned. Isn't it a little small for the four of us? Don't you know the disillusionment charm? Ron asked curiously. But I can only guarantee that I won't be detected when I'm still. If I start moving, the professors will notice something is wrong, Cyrus said deliberately. Now, Malfoy's body was useless. What he wants is Ginny. Ginny, let me possess your body. The fewer people we send, the less risk of being exposed, he said. Besides, given the current situation, if I keep possessing Malfoy, I'm afraid I won't be able to meet with you normally until the end of the semester. Ginny didn't seem to resist at all. Instead, she looked shy. But Harry had a question. What about Malfoy? I'll let him get a good night's sleep, and when he wakes up, he won't remember anything. Ron didn't seem too keen on having someone possess his sister, but Ginny preemptively replied, that's fine, Mr. Riddle is much stronger. He can protect you. Cyrus quickly transferred from Malfoy's body to Ginny's, then stuffed the unconscious Malfoy back into the common room and left him there. Then, the three of them left the castle wearing invisibility cloaks. Harry and Ron both felt awkward. They had finally gotten used to Cyrus being Malfoy, and now she was Ginny. It felt so strange. But there was no time to dwell on that now. It was a starlit night, and they hurried toward the window of Hagrid's house that was illuminated by light. Only when they reached his door did they remove their invisibility cloaks. A few seconds after they knocked, Hagrid flung the door open. They were met with Hagrid pointing a crossbow at them, his large hound, Fangtooth, barking wildly behind him. This startled them. It was the first time Harry had ever seen Hagrid like this. Oh, it's you guys. Hagrid visibly relaxed, put down his weapon, and glared at them. What are you three doing here? What's that for? Harry asked, pointing to the crossbow as they entered the room. Cyrus, on the other hand, tried to keep his presence as inconspicuous as possible. It's nothing, Hagrid mumbled. I thought it was all right. Sit down, I'll make some tea. He seemed somewhat distracted. Water spilled from the kettle, nearly extinguishing the fire in the stove, and then his large, rough hand trembled violently, knocking the teapot over. Are you all right, Hagrid? Have you heard about Hermione's situation? Oh, yes, I heard, Hagrid said, his voice slightly choked. He was clearly saddened by Hermione's situation, but he kept glancing nervously out the window, as if something even more terrible awaited him. I think you don't need to worry too much, she'll be fine, she will. He poured some tea for Harry and the others, but forgot to put in the tea leaves. Just as he was about to put a thick slice of fruitcake on a plate, there was a loud knock on the door. Hagrid was so startled that he dropped the fruitcake in his hand, his expression one of panic. Harry and Ron were just as flustered as he was, and even Cyrus was a little panicked, because he knew who was knocking on the door. Quick, hide. It'll be terrible if we get caught sneaking out. Cyrus hurriedly pulled Harry's invisibility cloak over their shoulders. The three of them huddled tightly behind the sofa, Cyrus's breathing heavier than usual. Dumbledore is coming in. Hagrid saw that they were all hidden, so he grabbed his crossbow and yanked the door open again. Good evening, Hagrid. Dumbledore walked in first, looking very serious, followed by a man with a very strange appearance. Page 47. The stranger was short and stout, with messy gray hair and an anxious expression. His clothes were a strange hodgepodge, a pinstripe suit, a bright red tie, a long black cloak, and purple-pointed boots. He had a dark green top hat tucked under his arm. "That's my dad's boss," Ron gasped. "Corneli Fudge, the Minister for Magic." "Shut up." Cyrus nudged Ron with his elbow, telling him to shut up. This action clearly caught Dumbledore's attention. His blue eyes glanced at Cyrus's hiding place, and his expression became playful. However, he quickly looked away as if he hadn't noticed them at all. This made Cyrus wonder if Dumbledore had seen him through the invisibility cloak, but he quickly realized that wasn't the case. This wasn't an ordinary invisibility cloak, and he believed that Dumbledore had likely only sensed its presence. After all, he had studied the cloak for a long time. However, he probably didn't know how many people were under the clothes. Hagrid's face turned deathly pale, and sweat began to bead on his forehead. He slumped into a chair, glancing at Dumbledore and then at Cornelius Fudge. "This is terrible, Hagrid," Fudge said in a crisp, quick tone. "It's terrible, I had to come. For attacks on Muggles, it's outrageous, the Ministry of Magic must take action." "I didn't, you know I didn't, Professor Dumbledore, sir. I want you to understand, Cornelius, that I completely trust Hagrid," Dumbledore said, frowning. "But you see, Albus," Fudge said awkwardly, "Hagrid's criminal record is bad for him. The Ministry of Magic has to take some measures. It has already contacted the Board of Trustees. But Connolly, I still have to tell you that taking Hagrid away won't make any difference." "Look at it from my perspective," Fudge said, fiddling with his top hat. "I'm under a lot of pressure. I have to do something. If it turns out it's not Hagrid, he'll come back, and nobody will have a say. But I have to take him away. Shouldn't I do my duty? Take me away?" Hagrid said, trembling all over. "Take me where?" "It's a short time, not a punishment, just a precaution. If we catch someone else, we'll release you and offer a full apology," Fudge said to himself. Although he had come here with Dumbledore to find Hagrid, he hadn't looked Hagrid in the eye the entire time. Of course, he might also feel a little ashamed. After all, his current behavior is tantamount to making Hagrid take the blame. But this is very unreasonable. A case has occurred, and even if someone has a criminal record, they should not be convicted without evidence. This is unreasonable and illegal. It's worth noting that even after Voldemort's resurrection, none of the Death Eaters who had previously escaped punishment were punished without evidence. As the chief wizard of Wizengamot, was Dumbledore unable to stop Fudge's absurd behavior? Impossible. However, although Dumbledore protested, he did not actually stop Fudge. Cyrus now understands even more how terrifying Dumbledore is. Thank you for your 1,000-point donation to Minua Majigzu. Chapter 70 Dumbledore's Expulsion. Just then, someone knocked loudly on the door again. Dumbledore went to open the door. Harry let out a breath when he saw the gloomy figure walk in, so much so that Cyrus had to elbow him again. The man outside the door was Lucius Malfoy. Lucius Malfoy strode into Hagrid's cabin, completely wrapped in a long black travel cloak, a cold, satisfied smile on his face. Tooth started barking wildly. Seeing Malfoy's appearance, Cyrus finally felt completely relieved. In any case, things had finally progressed to this point. Malfoy had already cooperated with him in using some methods to expel Dumbledore from the school. Without Dumbledore, Hogwarts posed no threat to Cyrus. His mood brightened instantly, and he couldn't help but smile. Another person who wasn't at all surprised by Malfoy's appearance was Dumbledore, who had long anticipated this day. Tom Riddle couldn't possibly stay in the school. It wouldn't be conducive to his final step in the plan. That would be too risky. Just like last year, the best thing to do is to find a way to get away from me. Dumbledore was wondering when the other party planned to make their move. It looks like now is the time. You've arrived, Fudge, Malfoy said with satisfaction. Very good, very good. Making Hagrid take the blame again was also part of his master's plan, and this involved him putting pressure on Fudge. All it took was bribing some public opinion, and now that Fudge had arrived at Hogwarts, Lucius Malfoy was naturally very satisfied. But Hagrid didn't like this uninvited guest. What good could the Malfoy family possibly have? What are you doing here? Get out of my house. My dear friend, believe me, I am not happy to enter your room. Oh, how you call this a house? Lucius Malfoy looked around the small, shabby room and sneered. I just came to the school to take a look. Someone told me the headmaster was here. Malfoy's behavior was indeed annoying. If Cyrus hadn't known that Malfoy was now on his side, even he himself would have wanted to punch Malfoy a few times. What brings you here, Lucius? Dumbledore asked politely. Things are terrible, Dumbledore. Lucius lazily rolled up a long parchment, looking relaxed and confident, even in front of Dumbledore, or rather, because he knew he was facing Dumbledore, he wasn't flustered at all. The board of directors thinks it's time for you to leave. This is a temporary suspension order. All 12 directors have signed it. We feel you're probably not fulfilling your potential. How many attacks have occurred so far? At this rate, there won't be a single Muggle student left at Hogwarts, and we all know that would be a terrible loss for the school. He spoke as if he were expressing deep sorrow and regret over the attack on students from the Muggle world. What did you say, Lucius? Fudge said, sounding alarmed. Dumbledore has been temporarily suspended. No, we absolutely do not want that now. The appointment or temporary suspension of the headmaster is a matter for the board of directors, fudge. The Ministry of Magic has no right to interfere. Lucius said calmly, having never taken fudge, this incompetent minister, seriously, since Dumbledore failed to stop these attacks. But you see, Lucius, if Dumbledore can't stop, Fudge said, his upper lip starting to sweat. He thought the board of trustees were crazy to suggest suspending Dumbledore at this critical juncture. I mean, who can stop him? Well, see, Malfoy said, a sly grin spreading across his face. Prevent? He never even considered stopping it. How many people did you threaten and blackmail to force them to agree, Malfoy? Hagrid was furious, looking like he wanted to punch Lucius and smash his head into a pumpkin patch. Malfoy, of course, wasn't afraid of Hagrid. He said sarcastically, I'd like to give you a piece of advice, don't yell at the guards of Azkaban like that. They won't like it. The thought of Dumbledore being suspended made Hagrid no longer afraid of Azkaban. You can't take Dumbledore away. If you take him, there will be no way for Muggles to survive. There will be murders very soon. Calm down, Hagrid, Dumbledore said sternly. He looked at Lucius Malfoy. If the board wants me to leave, Lucius, I will certainly give up my position. But Fudge stammered. No. Hagrid growled. Dumbledore's bright blue eyes remained fixed on Lucius's cold grey eyes. However, Dumbledore said very slowly and clearly, so that everyone present could hear every word he said, I will only truly leave this school when everyone here betrays me. You will also find that at Hogwarts, those who ask for help always receive help. Cyrus was quite certain that Dumbledore had glanced at them, a look that was both a reminder and a warning. He not only discovered Harry and Ron, but he also discovered himself. Your sentiments are commendable, Malfoy said, bowing. We will all miss your highly individualistic way of handling things, Albus. We only hope that your successor can completely stop the murders. Malfoy strode to the door of the cottage, opened it, and bowed to see Dumbledore out. Fudge fiddled with his top hat, waiting for Hagrid to walk ahead of him, but Hagrid stood still, took a deep breath, and cautiously said, if someone is looking for something, they just need to follow the spider, and they'll find the right direction. That's all I have to say. Fudge stared at him in astonishment. All right, I'm coming, Hagrid said, putting on his moleskin coat. But just as he was about to leave with Fudge, he stopped and said loudly, someone needs to feed Tooth while I'm gone. The door slammed shut, and Ron ripped off his invisibility cloak. This is a real problem, he said in a hoarse voice. Dumbledore is gone. They'll probably have to close the school tonight. After he leaves, there will be attacks every day. Yaya started barking wildly again, scratching at the tightly closed door with its claws. The next day, news of Dumbledore's departure quickly spread fear in an unprecedented way. Cyrus was in a very good mood. The weather had been consistently bright and sunny lately, the clear sky and the lake shimmering, and the Forbidden Forest's trees were lush and verdant, looking incredibly vibrant. Cyrus greedily indulged in all of this through Ginny's body, full of vitality. For the other students at Hogwarts, fear shrouded them like a cold fog, but for Cyrus, the prospect of a new life was drawing ever closer. Thank you so much for the 520 donations from Forever Love Yenlin Brother. I love you too, baby. Chapter 71 Action tonight. The weather is gradually getting hotter. Looking up, the sky seemed even higher. This would have been perfect weather for Quidditch, but the Quidditch match had been cancelled, and even going for a walk was a luxury. The corridors were deserted during breaks, and the professors, who were on guard everywhere, did not allow anyone to linger. Even when going to class, the young wizards had to line up one by one and be personally escorted there by the deans. The entire school was in a state of extreme tension. Even in the Gryffindor common room, no one was willing to fool around anymore. Everyone was anxious and just wanted to get through the semester as soon as possible. Professor McGonagall desperately wanted to get everything in order, ideally finding the successor, but she had no leads at the moment. Unlike Dumbledore, she didn't have a comprehensive view of the situation. Fortunately, it wasn't the worst-case scenario yet. The attacked students could still be saved, they just needed the Mandrake to mature so they could wake up. Perhaps then, the real culprit would be exposed. Therefore, she was also worried that the attacker might silence the victimized student, and the school hospital became a heavily guarded area. Harry and Ron wanted to go see Hermione again, but were stopped. Right now, perhaps only the students of Slytherin House aren't worried at all. The fact that all four attacked were mudbloods is enough to prove that their house was never the heir's target in the first place. Rather, the heir is very likely one of them. This greatly encouraged them, and they couldn't help but feel smug whenever they looked at people from other colleges during class. Page 48. Especially Malfoy. When Cyrus returned the body to him, he also slightly altered his memories. He doesn't notice anything amiss now, but if he carefully recalls his experiences over the past few months, he'll find that he has no relevant memories at all. All he has is a fog of confusion. He was completely oblivious to anything amiss, swaggering around the school as if he had just been appointed president of the boys' student council. Furthermore, he had reunited with his old friends Gorkrab, and he was quite pleased that Dumbledore had been expelled from the school. However, he didn't actually dislike Dumbledore or doubt his abilities, it was simply because his father was the one who facilitated this, which made him very proud. When Cyrus returned from get out of class today, he saw Ron storming into the common room, and Harry and their roommate Andy were comforting him. "Alright, Ron, don't bother with people like that." Andy patted Ron on the back. He himself was a wizard from the Muggle world, so he naturally disliked the Malfoys. But he wasn't as impulsive as Ron. "If you two hadn't stopped me, I would have punched him a few times, killed him with my bare hands without even needing a wand." Ron still regrets it now. Seeing how angry he was, Cyrus immediately went over and asked, "What's wrong?" "It's Malfoy," Harry said helplessly. "You know how much of a jerk he is. I even missed the old you." He only got halfway through his sentence before Andy thought Harry was referring to Cyrus beating up Slytherin at the club. He said the next mudblood to be attacked would definitely die, and that it was a shame it wasn't Hermione. Ron said angrily, "If I were the heir, I would kill that little bastard first." He was even being sarcastic with Snape. Seamus overheard their conversation, leaned in, gagged, and mimicked Malfoy, repeating his words in a affected, high-pitched voice. "I knew all along that father would drive Dumbledore away. Sir, why don't you apply for the position of headmaster?" Cyrus watched his performance and felt a little nauseous. But Seamus didn't stop. He turned and imitated Snape, flicking non-existent hair. "Oh dear, Malfoy, Professor Dumbledore has only been temporarily suspended by the board of directors. I dare say he'll be back among us soon." He switched back and forth between the two roles. "Yes, that's right, sir. If you apply for this position, I suspect my father will vote for you. He'll tell him you're the best teacher here, sir." Seamus looked even more disgusted than Cyrus, shaking his head with a look of utter disgust. "You have no idea how smug Snape was. I bet you've never seen him so happy in your life." Snape was indeed somewhat smug, as he did harbor some resentment towards Dumbledore. However, it wouldn't be accurate to say he was overly happy. What good would it do Dumbledore to be driven out? On the contrary, what if Voldemort were the successor? Snape only wanted Voldemort dead. Even if it wasn't Voldemort, if the attacks continued, the school would have to close. Where could he go then? He could only return to that filthy Spider's End alley. What happiness could he possibly find there? In that place that gave him his dark past. At least he has one thing in common with that boy named Harry Potter. They both consider Hogwarts their real home. Then they all gave Malfoy a piece of their minds. Another Hufflepuff student also displeased Ron, but compared to Lockhart, it was nothing. "You know what that guy said? He insisted that Hagrid was the murderer." Ron said. "I think Harry was about to smash him with a book, and so was I." "We've all misunderstood Hagrid," Cyrus said regretfully. Andy and Seymour left shortly afterward. Even on such a day, the school did not announce the cancellation of the exams, and they planned to review first in order to avoid getting too bad grades. If Hermione knew about this, she would be heartbroken. She probably wouldn't want to miss any exams, Cyrus joked, trying to lighten the mood. "In quite the opposite," Ron said, fixing his gaze on Cyrus. "You are, Cyrus nodded, and Ron suddenly beamed with joy. "I have an idea. I'll let you possess my body, and then you'll help me take the exam. How about that?" "Don't even think about it." Cyrus rolled his eyes. Ron really didn't disappoint when it came to taking shortcuts. Exams are to test how much knowledge you've actually acquired. You shouldn't try to avoid them. "You sound just like Hermione," Ron said disappointedly, but soon they brought up their discovery in herbology class with Cyrus. "Mr. Riddle," Harry said in a low voice, "do you remember what Hagrid said before? If anyone is looking for something, they just need to follow the spider and they will find the right direction." He saw the spider head towards the Forbidden Forest, though I think it might not be the Forbidden Forest. "Maybe it's not that far," Ron said, almost as if praying. Spiders alone were enough to give him trouble, let alone having to go to the Forbidden Forest. But when he thought of the Slytherin successor, and of Hermione who had been petrified, he didn't want to back down. At least he knew Harry would never give up. "Then let's make our move tonight." Cyrus couldn't wait any longer. "Going back to work, why are weekends so short?" Chapter 72 The Contract Magic of the Marauders Map. Waiting for the night to fall silent is not so easy. Fred and George seemed to be the only ones in Gryffindor who still had energy. The two of them kept Harry and Ron playing Thunderbolt cards until almost midnight. To be honest, if Cyrus had known they were going to pull this stunt, he would have gone to sleep for a few hours first, otherwise he wouldn't be so bored. Fred, thinking he was Ginny, offered words of comfort. "Don't worry too much, Ginny. We can only do our best," Fred said as he played his cards. "Yes, and what's done is done. We've already told Dumbledore, and I'm sure he'll find a way," George said. The twins' words were like a bucket of cold water poured on the drowsy Cyrus, instantly waking him up. Judging from their words, it seems they know about his diary and have even told Dumbledore. Didn't Ginny say that only Harry and the others knew about it? Cyrus's heart sank as if bound by a heavy boulder. Even though things have come to this point, whether Dumbledore knows the diary is his true form is no longer of much importance. The other party has already been expelled from Hogwarts, and if the plan goes smoothly, only Fawkes will ultimately help Harry fight the basilisk. However, Cyrus was unwilling to expose his weaknesses to Dumbledore. That's Dumbledore. Dumbledore even meticulously planned his own death. In the original books, Voldemort was completely orchestrated by him. The moment he learned that Voldemort planned to create 6 Horcruxes, he already guessed what they were and, following Voldemort's intuition, found the locations of 2 hidden Horcruxes. Even his trip to the cave was so coincidentally accompanied by Harry. He knew Voldemort would seek the Elder Wand, knew Voldemort would send Snape to kill him, knew Voldemort would kill Snape, and also knew that when Voldemort learned that all the other Horcruxes had been destroyed, he would definitely keep Nagini by his side. Dumbledore had considered everything. If he hadn't made a few mistakes, Cyrus would have thought that Dumbledore had the script just like him. Didn't Ginny get her lost thing back? Ron played a card, then sighed. But Dumbledore has already left Hogwarts. He had simply forgotten that what Ginny lost was related to Riddle, but he couldn't remember exactly what it was. You found them. Fred and George exchanged a surprised glance, so happy that they dropped all the cards in their hands. Hey, what are you doing? I was about to win. Ron looked at the cheating twins in disbelief and shouted angrily. But Fred and George ignored him and excitedly grabbed Cyrus's shoulders. Now the heirs will be helpless. Without a map, they'll have a hard time seizing opportunities, Fred said. Map. After all that talk, it turns out Fred and George were referring to the Marauders map. Cyrus breathed a sigh of relief. Whether Dumbledore knew about the Marauders map or not didn't matter much to him. The map, this magical item, could only be used to its full potential when it was in his possession. Moreover, its production process is quite extraordinary. Cyrus himself studied it for a period of time and believed that the map's effectiveness relied on the existence of Hogwarts itself, a huge magical castle. Sirius Black's grandfather was once the headmaster of Hogwarts, so perhaps the raiders consulted some of that information when creating their props. This forced everyone who entered Hogwarts to sign a magical contract. In the magical world, magical contracts are very difficult to break. For example, the charm of loyalty. As long as the spell is still in effect, even Voldemort cannot find the place where it is hidden. Dumbledore possesses the Elder Wand, which might allow him to break this contract, but he would at least need the map first. Otherwise, no matter how powerful his magic is, he would have nowhere to use it. Lend me the map for a few more days, Cyrus said to Fred and George. What kind of map is it? Why are you being so mysterious? Ron had no time to think about the Thunder Explosion card anymore and asked with a face full of curiosity. Nothing. Don't interfere in our affairs. Fred and George immediately said that they didn't want Ron to know about it. They knew their younger brother's personality better than anyone else. If he knew the Marauders map was useful, he would definitely pester them for it. Ginny, you're not allowed to tell either, Fred and George said, and then immediately left. Seeing this, Ron immediately turned his gaze to Cyrus, his face full of curiosity. I can't say, I promised them. Cyrus naturally didn't want anyone else to know about the map. But they told Ginny to keep it a secret, not you. Ron discovered this loophole. Mr. Riddle and Ginny were not the same person. However, Cyrus shook his head. It makes no difference. I promised them. And keeping secrets is very important, Ron. If one day you also reveal my secrets, I'm afraid I'll be destroyed by someone else very soon. Okay. Harry finished tidying up the cards, checked the time, and said, how about we leave as soon as the bells ring? I think everyone will be fast asleep by then. So be it. I'll go get the invisibility cloak. Harry strode up the stairs. A moment later, he came down carrying something in his hand. 3 people, it might be a bit crowded, but I think it's dark outside, no one should notice our feet sticking out. Forget it, I'll just use the disillusionment charm, it'll be safer that way. Cyrus didn't want to squeeze in with them this time. The journey through the castle was arduous, requiring them to do everything in their power to avoid the teachers. These days, the professors had been taking turns patrolling the castle, and since Dumbledore's departure, they were all extremely tense. Even Snape was filled with worry. Finally, they reached the foyer, slipped behind the locks of the 2 oak doors, squeezed through the cracks, trying not to make a creaking sound, and came to the moonlit ground. Page 49. Of course, Ron said suddenly as they strode across the dark grass, we might not find anything to follow once we get into the woods. Those spiders probably didn't even go there. I know they seem to be moving in that direction, but... He didn't finish his sentence, leaving Harry with a glimmer of hope. They arrived at Hagrid's cabin and looked sadly at the dark, empty windows. Harry pushed the door open, and as soon as Ba saw them, he was overjoyed and jumped around excitedly. Cyrus, fearing its deep, booming barks would wake the people in the castle, didn't hesitate to cast a spell on it, silencing it. Harry placed the invisibility cloak on Hagrid's table. You also need to break the spell, then we won't need invisibility when we get to the Forbidden Forest, Harry said. Come on, Toothpick, let's go for a walk. The 3 people left with a dog. Cyrus walked at the very back, looking at the invisibility cloak that Harry had placed on the table, the legendary Deathly Hallows. Finally, he slowly closed the door. Thank you for your 1,000-point reward to Minghua Majigzu. I checked with the editor today, and they said it can be released on Friday. There will be 5 chapters on the release day, plus the rewards from all of you. I'll add an extra chapter for every 10,000 points accumulated, so there should be a total of 10 chapters. Chapter 73 Forbidden Forest. The area near the Forbidden Forest seemed even darker than inside the castle. The entire sky was covered by a huge black cloth, obscuring the stars and moon, and there was no light at all. Cyrus took out his wand and murmured, "Flash." A thin beam of light emanated from the tip of the wand. He could have made it brighter, enough to illuminate the entire forest, but that would have been far too conspicuous. As it was just enough for them to spot any spiders on the path. Harry followed suit. Good idea, Ron said enviously. I'd like my wand to light up too, but you know, it can explode if you're not careful. Don't worry, I think Mr. and Mrs. Weasley will definitely buy you a new one during your summer vacation. Then you can just say that the wand was broken while looking for a successor, Cyrus comforted him. Great idea, Mr. Riddle. Ron's eyes lit up. He hadn't told his family about his broken wand yet. Just then, Harry patted them on the shoulder and pointed to the grass. 2 lone spiders were hurrying away from the light of the wand, disappearing into the shadows of the trees. As expected, even spiders have entered the Forbidden Forest. Well, Ron sighed, seemingly resigned to the worst. I'm ready. Let's go. So they went into the Forbidden Forest, with Toothbrush hopping and skipping around them, sniffing the roots and leaves along the way. By the light of Cyrus and Harry's wands, they followed the spider that was constantly crawling along the path. They walked for about 20 minutes without speaking, listening intently for any other sounds besides the snapping of branches and the rustling of leaves. Then, the trees grew denser, and the stars overhead disappeared. Their wands glowed faintly in the boundless darkness, like 2 feeble fireflies. They've left the road, Cyrus said softly, stretching out his arm so the cold light shone on the ground. Harry stopped, trying to see where the spider was moving, but beyond the area illuminated by that faint light lay utter darkness. He had never ventured so deep into the Forbidden Forest before. The Forbidden Forest is already dangerous, but at least Hate often moves around on the roads, and there are also signs of centaurs. But once you stray from the forest trails, who knows what you'll encounter? Cyrus warned. His words made Ron even more uneasy. Harry also clearly remembered that the last time he entered the woods, Hagrid had warned him not to stray from the path. But Hagrid was now thousands of miles away, probably sitting in his cell in Azkaban, and he had also said to follow the spider. Let's go, I believe in Hagrid, Harry said firmly. In fact, there was no other way but to believe in Hagrid now. Hagrid is trustworthy, but Cyrus pursed his lips and stepped forward first. What are your thoughts? Harry asked Ron. He could see the glint of his wand reflected in Ron's eyes. Ron seemed hesitant to speak. I just wanted to say that perhaps Mr. Riddle is right. It's not that I don't trust Hagrid, it's just that Hagrid might not think the Forbidden Forest is that dangerous, Ron said tremulously. But it's different for us. He thought the dragon was just playing with him when it bit him. But do you know how long my hands swelled up after Norbert bit me? But Mr. Riddle is almost gone, Harry said helplessly. Think of Hermione, we have to save her. All right. Ron took a breath. For Hermione. So they followed Cyrus's shadow into the thicket. The paths in the Forbidden Forest were difficult to traverse. It was a remote place, with tree roots and stumps everywhere blocking the way. To make matters worse, visibility was so poor at night that they could barely see the obstacles on the path. After a while, they noticed that the ground seemed to be sloping downwards, even though the trees were still as lush as before. We walked for at least half an hour. His and Harry's clothes were constantly caught on low branches and thorny vines, making them look a bit disheveled, while Cyrus walked along as if he were taking a stroll on a Quidditch pitch. But at least they didn't encounter any other dangers along the way. These spiders are pretty smart, at least they know how to avoid danger, Ron said, swallowing hard. Or maybe nothing else dares to come near here. Sirius' eyes gleamed. Without a doubt, this small area is already the territory of the 8-eyed giant spiders, and no magical creature would be so foolish as to come here and become their dinner. What? Don't scare me, Ron said, trembling. Suddenly, Toothpick became agitated, curling its tail in fear. It couldn't make a sound, only whimpering, but it still made a lot of noise, scaring Harry and Ron out of their wits. What is that? Ron shouted, peering into the darkness while gripping Harry's elbow tightly. There's something moving over there, Harry said breathlessly. It sounds like a big guy. They listened intently. Some distance to their right, the large thing was carving a path through the bushes, snapping countless branches in its path. They stood there, waiting in terror, the darkness seeming to oppress their eyes. Cyrus, however, was not afraid at all, for he knew what was there. All right, there's nothing there. It's not a monster, it's just the car you used to drive when you were going to school. As soon as Cyrus finished speaking, a dazzling light immediately shone to their right, blinding them in the darkness. Harry and Ron both raised their hands to cover their eyes. Toothy roared and tried to run away, but tripped over a patch of thorns and rolled around on the ground. Quiet down. Cyrus cast another spell on it to calm it down. The car is coming. The car. Ron's voice choked with relief. It really is our car. Harry and Ron followed Cyrus, stumbling and falling as they made their way toward the light. After a while, they came to an open space. Mr. Weasley's car was parked in the middle of a dense circle of trees, their branches intertwined overhead. The car was empty, its headlights gleaming. As Ron walked toward it with his mouth agape, the car slowly moved toward him, like a large, green dog welcoming its master. So it's always been here, Ron said excitedly, walking around the car. Look at it, the woods have turned it wild. In the Muggle world, this is practically a total wreck. But this car seems to have undergone some magical modifications. To be honest, it can still run. Cyrus was actually quite interested. The existence of magically modified vehicles demonstrates that technology and magic are not entirely separate. Perhaps he can modify something else entirely, such as a Gatling gun killing curse. He shuddered. This was far too evil. The car's wings were torn and covered in mud. Tooth seemed utterly uninterested. It stayed close to Harry, cautiously eyeing Cyrus, the terrible wizard who had cast 2 spells on it. Harry could feel it trembling. Now, Harry and Ron's breathing gradually calmed down. "We thought it was going to attack us," Ron said, leaning against the car and patting it. "I had no idea where it went." But Harry had no time to pay attention to the car. He squinted, continuing to search for the spider's shadows on the ground illuminated by the lights, but they all hurriedly avoided the glaring headlights and disappeared. "We've lost track of them," he said. He was more interested in finding the spider than a car. "Let's go, don't waste any more time here." But Ron suddenly stopped talking and didn't move. His eyes were fixed on the spot 10 feet above the ground behind Harry, his face ashen, a testament to his sheer terror. "Looks like we don't need to look anymore." Cyrus raised his wand, looked up, and saw several enormous 8-eyed spiders staring greedily at them. He initially intended to eliminate them directly, but after thinking about it, he decided against it. Instead, he watched helplessly as Harry and Ron were lifted up by their massive jaws and dangled in midair. He gave up resisting and let the monsters drag them into the dark thicket. Chapter 74 Aragog. Cyrus had no idea how long he had been trapped in the animal's claws. All he knew was that the darkness seemed to have receded somewhat, and he saw that the ground, once covered in fallen leaves, was now teeming with spiders. He turned his neck and found that they had reached the edge of a wide hollow, where the trees had been cleared. The clouds in the sky parted a little, and the stars illuminated the eerie and terrifying scene. Spider. Unlike the small spiders that scurried about among the fallen leaves below, each one was as big as a horse pulling a cart, with 8 eyes and 8 legs, dark and hairy, a truly enormous creature. The giant spider carrying Cyrus and his companions descended the steep slope towards a misty, hemispherical web in the center of the depression, surrounded by its companions. Upon seeing what it had grasped, they excitedly twitched their large pincers, producing a series of clicking sounds. The spider released its grip, and Cyrus flicked his wand lightly, landing smoothly like a cat. Harry and Ron, however, weren't so lucky. The 2 of them, along with the dog, crashed heavily to the ground at his feet. Toothpick cowered in fear, seemingly playing dead. Ron and Harry's mouths were wide open, as if they were emitting silent screams, their eyes bulging outwards. Letting him pass out now might be a little better than him being awake. "Are you all right?" Cyrus asked in a low voice. "Fine, what do you think? We're going to die." Ron's voice was hoarse. Just then, the spider that had led them there made a loud noise, and Cyrus realized it was actually speaking human language. It wasn't easy to understand because it clicked and smacked its large pincers with every word it spoke. However, as a magical creature, the 8-eyed giant spider can speak and possesses considerable intelligence. Cyrus even suspects they might be slightly smarter than Hagrid. This almost qualifies them as a demi-human species. Even dragons, after all, cannot speak. "Aragog!" it cried. "Aragog!" Page 50. Cyrus stared intently and saw a huge spider slowly emerging from the misty, hemispherical spider web. It was much larger than a typical 8-eyed giant spider, almost as big as an elephant. Its body and legs were black with gray undertones, and each eye on its ugly head with large claws was covered with a layer of white film. "It is blind. What's going on?" it said, its 2 large claws moving rapidly, making a clicking sound. It was a strange feeling that made Cyrus always unconsciously think they were talking while clapping, like rappers. "Human," said the spider that had just grabbed Cyrus. "Is that Hagrid?" Aragog said, moving closer. 8 milky white eyes stared blankly into view. "He's a stranger." "Kill them, I'm sleeping," Aragog said irritably. It was very old and now spent far more time resting than active. A few unknown strangers were not worth waking it up for. Moreover, it doesn't eat people. These creatures aren't even food to it. Upon hearing this, the surrounding spiders could no longer contain themselves. Every time Hagrid came here, they longed for his flesh and blood, but their leader Aragog would not allow them to harm Hagrid. How absurd. The giant 8-eyed spider lives to devour human flesh. Click-clack, click-clack, the spider's large claws were moving everywhere in the depression. Harry and Ron's hearts seemed to leap out of their chests and into their throats. They instinctively grabbed Cyrus, as if hoping that Mr. Riddle could offer some help. Cyrus did not disappoint them. He glanced around at the spiders in the cave and counted their number. Surprisingly, Cyrus felt no fear in the face of so many monsters. However, since it was a spider after all, it still made him feel uneasy. He took a step forward and said calmly, "We are Hagrid's friends." The restless spiders stopped abruptly, and Aragog hesitated as well. "Hagrid has never sent anyone to our depression before," it said slowly. "Hagrid is in trouble," Harry said, his breathing rapid, "which is why we're here." "Trouble?" the old spider said. Harry thought he detected a hint of concern in the clicking of its large claws. "But why did he send you?" Harry tried to stand up, but then decided to stay lying down. He thought his legs couldn't support his weight. "Let me explain, Harry." Only Cyrus was still standing. He looked proudly at the spiders that surrounded them. Although the sheer number of spiders made him a little uncomfortable, it wasn't fear, just disgust. Harry was clearly relieved to hear Cyrus's words. The secret chamber has been opened again. They believe Hagrid recently released something to harm the students. They took him to Azkaban. Cyrus briefly explained the situation, of course omitting any mention of his own affairs. He believed that if Aragog knew that he was Riddle, he would not say a word and would immediately have its offspring pounce on him and kill him. Aragog brandished his large claws angrily, a sound that was echoed by a large swarm of spiders in the hollow. It sounded like applause, but it was an applause that sent chills down one's spine and made one want to vomit. But that was many years ago, Aragog said irritably. Many years ago. I remember it very clearly. That's why they kicked him out of school. They believed I was the monster that lived in what they called the Chamber of Secrets. They thought Hagrid opened the chamber and released me. So you didn't come out of the Chamber of Secrets? Harry broke out in a cold sweat, but couldn't help asking. If Aragog is telling the truth, then doesn't that mean Mr. Riddle is completely wrong? Hagrid is definitely not the murderer, and the monster has nothing to do with Hagrid. He couldn't help but look at Cyrus, and when he saw that Cyrus was also frowning, he immediately breathed a sigh of relief. Me, Aragog said, his large claws snapping open and closing angrily, as if trying to bite something to death. I wasn't born in a castle. I come from a faraway land. A traveler gave me to Hagrid before I hatched from my egg. Hagrid was just a child then, but he took care of me, hiding me in a cupboard in the castle and feeding me breadcrumbs scattered on the table. Hagrid is my good friend. He's a good man. When people found me and wanted me to take responsibility for a girl's death, he protected me. Since then, I've lived in this forest, and Hagrid often comes to visit me. He even found me a wife Mossag. You see how prosperous our family has become. It's all thanks to Hagrid. Cyrus looked around and had to agree with its words. The thousands upon thousands of giant eight-eyed spiders were all offspring of Aragog and Mossag. Indeed, the reproductive prowess of the species raised by the hybridization master Hagrid was no joke. Of course, Cyrus naturally hopes that there are as many of them as possible. Only with sufficient nutrients can the fruit be abundant. Chapter 75 Spider Swarm Attack. Cyrus feigned doubt and annoyance, and continued to ask. So you've never attacked anyone? No, the old spider said resentfully, I do have that instinct, but out of respect for Hagrid, I've never harmed a single person. The murdered girl's body was found in a washroom. And apart from the cupboard where I grew up, I've never seen anywhere else in the castle. We spiders prefer darkness and silence. But back then, do you know what killed that girl? Harry said. Because whatever it was, it's back and attacking people again. Suddenly, a series of clicking sounds filled the air as countless long legs moved rustlingly. A massive black shadow swayed around them. That creature that lives in the castle, Aragog said, is an ancient creature that we spiders fear most. I remember clearly begging Hagrid to let me go when I sensed that beast roaming around the school. What is it? Harry asked eagerly. The truth was right before his eyes. The clicking sounds grew louder, and the rustling sounds became more frequent. The spiders seemed to be closing in, becoming extremely frightened and agitated. We won't say, Aragog said vehemently. We won't reveal its name. I haven't even told Hagrid the name of that horrible creature, even though he's asked me, many times. Harry didn't want to press the issue any further, especially with the spiders gathering from all directions. Ron seemed to be on the verge of fainting. His face was paler than paint, and he gripped Harry tightly, his face showing fear and pleading. Aragog seemed to have lost its will to speak. It slowly retreated back into its hemispherical web. It looks like we won't get any more information, but at least we've gotten some intelligence, Cyrus said, keeping an eye on the spider. The spiders seemed unable to restrain themselves, slowly, inch by inch, moving towards them. Then let's go. Harry realized something was wrong and shouted to Aragog as he heard the leaves rustling behind him. Ron seemed to have heard a message of salvation. Leave. Cyrus said slowly. I don't think it'll just let us go like this. You're right, I think you shouldn't leave. Aragog's whitish eyes were still moving. It couldn't see anything, but it could still sense things. As it grew older, its control over the spider swarm had diminished considerably. One Hagrid is one thing, but if it keeps trying to stop the spiders from eating these humans who have walked into its trap, it is very likely to face resistance from the spiders. But my children obeyed my orders and did not harm Hagrid. But fresh human flesh has been delivered to their doorstep, and I cannot stop them from enjoying it. Farewell, Hagrid's friend. Cyrus turned around, and a few steps away, high above him, spiders formed a solid, towering wall of steel, their large pincers clicking incessantly, and many eyes gleaming on their ugly black heads. Harry felt like he was drowning in the ocean, suffocating from the countless spiders. Ron was even worse off. He was frozen in place, but even if he were all right, he probably couldn't help much, as the wand was useless. Harry wanted to draw his wand and fight the spiders to the death, but Cyrus held him back. Let me handle this. You find a chance to take Ron away. But, are you leaving Mr. Riddle here all alone? Harry looked at the endless swarm of spiders and immediately shook his head. We can't leave you behind. Even Ron, who was so terrified he had no strength left, nodded. He was more worried about his sister. What would happen to Ginny if Cyrus died here? He was using Ginny's body. Don't worry, the eight-eyed spider can't kill me. You guys find a chance to leave first, and I won't have to worry about you when I escape. Cyrus wanted to get Harry and Ron away, otherwise how could he perform a ritual that looked a bit evil? The eight-eyed giant spider wanted to eat them, but didn't he also want to exchange the eight-eyed giant spider's life for his own rebirth? But, worried I'm no match for them. Cyrus easily knocked away a spider the size of a car. Seeing Harry nod, he smiled and said, "Don't worry, I deliberately let them capture me in the first place. Otherwise, how would I find their lair?" Harry and Ron were still a little hesitant. "Alright, believe me, Ginny is my friend too. I'd rather you two die than let her get hurt." "Alright." Harry agreed, but he didn't really know how to get out of there. There were just too many of them. Even though Cyrus kept knocking away the approaching spiders, they still completely blocked the area. Suddenly, a high-pitched and long voice rang out, and a dazzling light illuminated the entire depression. Mr. Weasley's car roared down the slope, headlights flashing, horn blaring, shoving the spiders aside. Several were knocked flat on their backs, their long legs flailing wildly in the air. With a screech, the car came to a stop in front of Harry and Ron, the doors flung open. "Get in quickly." Cyrus cleared the spiders around the car and pushed them into the vehicle. Harry and Ron struggled to adjust their positions. "Take this dog with you," Cyrus shouted, grabbing the large, seemingly deflated hound around the waist and tossing it into the back seat. The car door slammed shut. Ron didn't touch the accelerator, and thankfully the car didn't require him to do anything. The engine roared to life, and they set off. However, the spiders couldn't just watch their prey escape. They blocked the way, and many of the giant eight-eyed spiders, which looked bigger than cars, stood in front of them like a small, hairy mountain. Harry and Ron in the car were pale-faced and didn't know what to do. At that moment, a bright red light suddenly flashed outside the glass, followed by a loud bang. The giant spider in front of them was blown to pieces, and the entire road was cleared.
Hi guys. I made a paid service in Telegram where you will find a great collection of fanfiction audiobooks organized and regularly updated. What you get? An unlimited access to the full audiobook library. New fanfiction audiobooks added regularly. You can play audios directly from Telegram anytime. Joining our service is available through a monthly subscription of $5. You can pay using PayPal or Ko-fi. So what are you waiting for? Send me a message on Telegram or Discord. I will provide the payment details. After the payment is confirmed, you will receive access to the private Telegram channel containing all audiobooks. If you enjoy fanfiction and prefer listening instead of reading, this library is made for you. Message me anytime to join.